Picture this, you're the absolute toughest dude on the planet, but get pummeled daily by total tweets simply cause your wallet's empty. Park Han-joon was once the undisputed champ of the criminal underworld, a true terror. That is, until some pesky rivals financially ruined him with lawsuits, leaving his dad no choice but to ditch his prized business for legal bills, swearing off violence to protect his family from further financial woe. Han-joon embraced a peaceful lifestyle, allowing the lowest of the low to treat him like a doormat and a human sandbag. But just as his spirit was about to break, a super-rich benefactor sees his plight and showers him with unimaginable wealth. With his financial burdens lifted, the ultimate apex predator is about to reemerge, and his quest for vengeance will be fueled by an endless supply of dough. Let's rewind the clock and see how a battered legend transformed into the city's most expensive and lethal asset. We open on a picturesque schoolyard, looking all sunshine and rainbows before the inevitable chaos. The vast sports field and the distant apartment blocks really give you a sense of how enormous this place is. Inside the classroom, it's a full-blown circus with students jabbering away, but our star, Park Han-joon, is zoning out at his desk, completely checked out from this madness. The camera zooms in on Han-joon, who's gazing into the abyss while some of the resident bullies hang around. His slumped shoulders scream that he's seen better days, and then some. Suddenly, the door slides open with a bang, revealing a foot clad in a casual slipper. It's a tiny detail, but it screams that this person believes they own the joint. We get a close-up of Han-joon's eyes, and wow, they're about as lively as a doornail. He doesn't even bother to glance at the newcomer, almost as if he's anticipating the usual beatdown. And here he is, the undisputed king of the school jungle, Best Chor. He saunters in, put up over his uniform, sporting a grin that clearly states he's top dog in this room. As Choi makes his entrance, the students practically trip over themselves to flatter him, shouting his name like he's a rock star. But Han-joon is the lone wolf in the room who couldn't care less, and you just know that's a recipe for trouble. Choi makes a beeline for a group of girls, leaning in to whisper to one with an arrogant smirk. He inquires if she's raking in sales, a blatant display of his dominance over the little entrepreneurial ventures. He whips out his phone to flaunt his record-breaking monthly earnings, and the numbers are oddly mind-boggling. We're talking over 48 million won, an absurd sum for any high schooler to be moving. The girl is utterly stunned, clutching his phone with shaky hands as she gazes at the colossal 48 million won figure. It's abundantly clear that in this ecosystem, cash is the ultimate symbol of power. Choi's cronies erupt in cheers, already playing a Friday night drinking spree on his tab. They're all clinging to his coattails, acting like his triumphs are their own personal victories. The speech bubbles are a chorus of adoration, hailing Choi as a real MVP and the ultimate overlord. It's a glorious ego trip, but Choi's expression takes a grim turn as his gaze drifts to the back of the room. His pleasant smile vanishes, replaced by a sharp, menacing glint as he announces a problem. You can practically feel the dramatic bus battle music starting to swell. We cut back to Han-joon, who remains motionless, but you can sense the palpable shift in the room's atmosphere. The shadow cast over his face intensifies his isolation from the adoring throng. Choi strides directly to Han-joon's desk, towering over him like a colossus while his entourage observes from the periphery. He casually informs Han-joon that he has some pressing matters to attend to before the revelry commences. Without a hint of preamble, Choi lunges down, snatching Han-joon by his hair and wrenching his head upwards. He then calls out his name with utter disdain, finally shattering the tense quiet between them. In a ferocious display of dominance, Choi violently smashes Han-joon's face against the unyielding wooden desk. The collision echoes through the classroom with a sickening thud, leaving the poor fellow oddly defenseless. Choi maintains his iron grip on Han-joon's head, grinding his face into the desk while bellowing at him. He's demanding an explanation for Han-joon's perceived disrespect, clearly offended that someone dared to not worship at his shrine. The brutal assault continues as Choi repeatedly slams Han-joon's head down, ranting about some product posts he was supposed to upload. It transpires that Han-joon is effectively being exploited as a forced delivery agent for Choi's dubious enterprise. Choi scoots closer with a wild look, basically begging for a psychiatric evaluation, as he queries if the business should go up in flames, because he loves illegal cash. He gives the skull one last wallop, making sure the panel looks painful, while Han-joon remains limp, accepting the physical upgrades without complaining about the bruises. Yanking the follicles again, Choi views the swelling cheeks, and jokes that he might have been chill if only Han-joon sent a formal invitation earlier. Those goons in the background are basically filming a sitcom, finding this chaos hilarious, while making cracks about teachers who apparently don't exist in this universe. Choi keeps vibing, ignoring authority like a pro, and asks how many dollars solve the teacher problem, as he truly thinks money creates invisible force fields. His knuckles turn white as he considers the fate of snitches, shifting from a generic corporate villain into a budget mafia boss within a few heartbeats. Leaning in like a creepy uncle, he murmurs that ketchup will spill if attitudes remain unchanged, aiming to mentally stir the guy into a soup. Suddenly, the bullet pauses with a clueless expression, seeing Han-joon finally moving, as if the steak just barked back at the hungry wolf. Han-joon stares through his fringe with a look that would make larva freeze, manifesting a range of rage that suggests he is finished playing around. Choi is briefly rattled, seeing that scary face looming, and mockingly asks if Han-joon real wants to start throwing hands like a discount boxer. A massive fist meets Han-joon's jaw, followed by a suggestion to call the police, since the rich kid thinks his credit card balance covers legal exemptions. Laughing like a drain, Choi recalls how Han-joon's glory days evaporated thanks to that girl named Kim, a name that triggers a dramatic mental montage. Another knuckle sandwich lands smack in the center, accompanied by orders to speak, as Han-joon begins his journey down memory lane into the dark past. Flashback time reveals a massive high school band named Nexus ruling everything, with a snowy-haired leader named Kim Kyonsu standing front and center like a K-pop idol. A close look at a hand with a fancy ring reveals a secret, because Han-joon wasn't just a punching bag in the older days of high school drama. The big confession is that he once commanded the entire army of troublemakers, being the very guy who challenged that legendary Kim rival in the first place. Han-joon stands amidst the rain like a dramatic anime character, surrounded by heaps of sleepers, having won the brawl at the cost of his own future. Just when the trophy was his, those Nexus kids got smart and used lawsuits, causing the narrative to take a sharp turn into legal and financial ruin. The scene shifts to a courtroom where Han-joon looks guilty, because his enemies lied through their teeth to frame him as the only violent beast in town. After losing the case, he got slapped with huge bills, proving that the legal system really knows how to break bones without using any actual physical punches. The debt was so massive that debt sold the gym, his lifelong passion, which makes seeing those for sale signs feel like a kick in the emotional nether regions. Farther looks like he aged a century from the stress, so Hanjin promised to stop swinging his fists. His violence really just killed his family savings. Standing in the dusty emptiness, he bows low to his pops, hoping that retiring from the fight game might slowly repair the damage he accidentally caused. Dad gives him a bear hug full of silent weeping, explaining why the boy takes so many hits now. His pacifism is basically his apology for the debt. Pop says men shouldn't leak from the eyes, though the lesson is that being poor means losing even when you technically win the actual physical street fight. The sky turns orange over the horizon, hinting that peace is a lie, as the plot prepares to drop a metaphorical anvil on Hanjin's attempt at normalcy. Flipper clicks on the street at night as he wanders solo, keeping a low profile like a ghost trying to avoid the local exorcists and casual trouble. He passes some low-tier minions loafing near an alleyway, who are blathering about computer cafes and clearly don't recognize the sleeping legend working past their noses. Oops, one guy identifies him, turning with a nasty look that says he found the target, knowing exactly who this working legend in the shadows actually is. Trying to ignore them fails when a kid with a bust-up blocks the path, making the A thick enough to choke a horse with all the tension. The Dunes commence their verbal assault, branding him a numbskull who lost his marbles post-bout with Nexus, and with rumors flying, they figure Hanjin's just an empty shell. The follically challenged chap saunters forward, oozing smugness, itching to test his mettle against the supposedly defeated Akon, radiating that classic bullet charm that usually ends with an ambulance. Hanjin remains rooted, his gaze obscured, absorbing the taunts without a peep, desperately clinging to his pledge while these nobodies invade his personal bubble. With a pointed finger at his own emblem, the bald brute inquires if Hanjin recalls its significance, a bob jab at his leadership past, clearly aiming to twist the knife. Hanjin glances up, his visage a roadmap of contusions from early classroom fisticuffs, peering utterly spent, as if merely anticipating the next inevitable strike. The tormentors unleash their fury, their impacts echoing through the constricted passage, leaving Hanjin like a human beanbag, steadfastly refusing to raise his guard. A visceral shock shows a fist connecting, splattering crimson into the atmosphere. Hanjin seemingly vanquished, eyes vacant, resigned to the ongoing barrage. He collapses, the bald aggressor looming, cackling about Hanjin being a mere nerd incapable of confronting Nexus, the audacity reaching its zenith. While Hanjin lies prone, the bald assailant delivers kicks, sneering at his tarnished reputation, convinced he stumbled upon the world's most defenseless prey. With a wicked grin, he probes if Hanjin was a pushover from the get-go, rushing his newfound dominance over an opponent unwilling to retaliate. The crew continues the pummeling, the percussive thuds filling the frame, Hanjin a huddled mess, his fortitude tested to its absolute breaking point. One of the ruffians utters a statement that strikes a raw nerve, revealing Hanjin was disowned by his father, the topic guaranteed to ignite a fire. The bald aggressor plants his boot directly on Hanjin's head, pinning him to the grimy floor, a supreme act of degradation meant to extinguish any remaining spirit. Then, a sudden shift washes over the bald chap's features, replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror, sensing an impossible flicker in Hanjin's eyes for a supposed nobody. From beneath the oppressive footwear, Hanjin's gaze is an incandescent laser, like a predator finally shaking off slumber. And just like that, the Alice Time move performs a dramatic 180-degree flip. In a blur of motion, Hanjin's hand shoots up, latching onto the bald brute's ankle with a vise-like grip, and he begins to rise, physically dislodging the assailant's leg. Hanjin stands regally, fixing the now petrified thug with an icy stare, coolly observing that he mistook them for mere debris, but perhaps they possess a bit more substance. A sweeping view of the dismal alley shows Hanjin towering amidst the refuse, the trio of tormentors retreating in utter bewilderment, the previously pummeled Dupel suddenly the most formidable presence. The two cronies exchange bewildered glances, trying to decipher the sudden shift in energy, acutely aware of the palpable aura of lethal intent emanating from Hanjin. The bald instigator is drenched in perspiration, internally admitting he's being unnerved by this fellow, attempting to rationalize the feeling while his instincts scream the truth. Hanjin remains motionless, head bowed, his eyes lost in shadow, the volatile powder keg on the verge of detonation, with these louts holding the fuse. The bald thug's face contorts in roar panic as he grasps that Hanjin assessed their entire group with a single, sweeping look, realizing he's utterly outmatched. Desperate and quaking, the bald Dune snatches a hefty wooden plank, his abject fear compelling him to grasp for any semblance of security via weaponry. The bald aggressor bellows like a madman, bringing the hefty timber down with the full force of his terror, aiming for a fight-ending strike before it truly begins. The plank connects squarely with Hanjin's temple, a sickening thud reverberating, yet Hanjin doesn't even flinch, his head barely yielding to the impact. The brute continues his frenzied swings, spitting insults about Hanjin being a worm and questioning his resilience, hammering away as if trying to chip away at a mountain with a twig. The cacophony of impacts is overwhelming as wood repeatedly strikes Hanjin's frame, his pals watching in stunned silence, incapable of comprehending such extreme fortitude. Eventually, the wooden plank succumbs, splintering into fragments, leaving only wood shards and a smear of blood on the ground. Hanjin still stands, peering entirely unfazed. The attackers finally cease, panting heavily, and retreat. They bring under the delusion that they finally vanquished him, a notion far from the truth. Following their departure, Hanjin exhales massively and cleanses his mug of some crimson juice. He grumbles about the scenario being quite draining, delivering a statement that sounds colder than an iceberg. A speaker from the shadows indicates zero comprehension, forcing Hanjin to swivel and see a fancy man. He is a Jude in sharp professional threads who looks suitable for an office, not an alleyway. The fellow, Janwoo, moves into the brightness while observing the nearby person. He previously maintained a stationary position nearby while the entire physical altercation occurred. The camera captures Janwoo as he asks Hanjin what exactly he is doing. He displays no hostile movements, but carries a visual impact that Hanjin perceives through a direct look. Janwoo plants his tushy on discarded items near the damaged Hanjin, ignoring the surrounding litter. He asks if Hanjin wants restitution, or is simply concerned about the financial aspects of physical conflict. Hanjin looks back through puffy eyelids, noticing the stranger's words match his internal logic. Janwoo states that the lives of those antagonists would be quite different if Hanjin used real force. Janwoo moves a heavy suitcase and mentions Hanjin lacks the financial reserves for legal representation. He's getting straight to the point regarding Hanjun's choice to refrain from attacking. He clicks the locks open and sends waterfalls of 50,001 notes onto the ground. It is a massive pile of paper resting right in the middle of a trash corridor. Junwoo states that this stash should cover any legal expenses or physical restitution costs. He offers Hanjun a specific resource that allows him to return to his previous physical intensity, lifting a piece of currency. He asks about the time required to locate the group if lores were irrelevant. The way his mouth corners lift suggests he is enjoying the interaction. Hanjun's face hardens, his peepers turning into sharp visual points once again. The mention of having the freedom to act is something his posture suggests he deeply required. He stares directly into the other man's pupils and asks for his identity. He understands that the person in professional clothing is not an ordinary bystander at the scene. Junwoo leans his upper body forward with a slight smile and shares his actual motive. He identifies as an individual chasing the same target who previously impacted Hanjun's life timeline. Hanjun moves his body slightly at the mention of the name, his physical reaction showing previous associations. The link between these two men is now verifiable through the shared context. Suddenly, the trio of bulls walks back into the location, but they stop moving when they observe the green and yellow rectangular items on the pavement. The man without hair expands his eyelids significantly while shouting about the items on the floor. His eyes remain fixed on the objects while ignoring any potential safety concerns. The three people stay stationary, observing the large volume of valuable units at their feet. They ignore Hanjun completely, focusing solely on the visual acquisition of the visible cash. A focus shot shows the stacked paper, literal millions of units resting in the grimy alley dirt. It is a primary goal for individuals who focus exclusively on accumulating items. The small group looks confused about Hanjun possessing so much moolah, their heads tilting to process the view. They already start moving as though the currency items are theirs. The smooth-headed man attempts a cordial tone, claiming they would have limited their force if his net worth were known. The change in dialogue is significant, and Hanjun moves on. In a speedy blur of physics, Hanjun delivers a tectonic fist sandwich to the bald guy's mouth. It is the first aggressive maneuver we see, and it definitely had high impact. The force of the strike is immense, displacing fluid and dental fragments as the face is affected. Hanjun moves at a speed that makes the other men look extremely slow. The guy is sent moving backward as if hit by a large vehicle, crashing into debris with a loud sound. With one action, the primary opponent is rendered non-functional. The two associates remain frozen in place, their facial features displaying fixed expressions. They watch the physically largest member neutralized in a very short amount of time. The man on the ground is stationary, his face showing visible marks from the impact. The dynamics of the confrontation have reversed completely since the previous few minutes. The view shifts to an overhead angle as the remaining pairs start moving nervously. They are confined to a narrow concrete area with the person they were recently striking. Hanjun maintains a steady stance while speaking a specific number related to time. He is verbally tracking exactly how much time is needed to finalize the upcoming encounter. Junwoo watches everything from a distance with an flat expression, almost like he is judging a match. He watches to see if the previous version of the man exists. Hanjun repeats his predicted timeline, his voice remaining extremely level and fixed. He is not boasting, he is making a calculation about the pending physical movements. He steps toward them, his heavy boots making rhythmic noises like a ticking clock. The two associates are moving away, but the architecture around them prevents an exit. These clowns suddenly start pleading for their lives, waving paws around and lying about how gentle their kicks were, which is pretty sad considering they were giggling while playing human trampoline earlier. The camera zooms into Hanjun's icy pupils, which are currently showing a total lack of empathy, as he quits his day job as a punching bag to embrace the murder vibes that once made him a boss. He delivers a nasty face remodeling service to the dude in the dark tee, making a sound that rattles the whole street, while the victim's eyeballs decide to go on vacation to the back of his skull. Immediately after, he spins and serves a knuckle sandwich directly to the brunette guy's stomach, hitting him so hard the poor fellow nearly achieves flight without needing a pilot license or a plane. A chaotic dance of destruction unfolds as Hanjun hands out precision-guided beatings, looking way more like a professional Terminator than any of the amateur brawlers we have witnessed in the story so far. Both sidekicks collapse like wet noodles, wheezing for oxygen while holding the shattered ego and bones, having their entire life, spirit and physical health deleted in less time than it takes to boil an egg. From a bird's perspective, we see three trash bags masquerading as bowls littered on the concrete while Hanjun chills in the center, proving the local social hierarchy has been thoroughly flipped upside down. Staring at the fallen losers, Hanjun casually mentions that their audience has left the building, signaling his return to a lifestyle where his knuckles are much more articulate than his actual vocal cords ever were. Junwoo wanders over with a look of pure admiration, asking for the secret identity of this mysterious warrior, because he knows he just discovered a diamond in a very smelly and damp backstreet dumpster. Everything fades into a gorgeous view of Seoul's midnight glow, mirroring the expensive and dangerous territory where the rich play, hinting that this little drama is about to explode into something massive and terrifying. The duo hangs out in a fancy penthouse office that probably costs more than a small island, where Junwoo inquires about Hanjun's television habits before dropping some major truth bombs about his own fame. Grinning like a cat with a secret, Junwoo shows off his smartphone screen and claims to be the celebrity in the picture, someone the whole nation definitely recognizes from the morning coffee and newsfeed. The display features Junwoo, the big boss of the OJ Group and the nation's premier young mogul, proving he's not just a guy with a wallet but a legendary figure of the economy. He boasts about using high-value currency as tissues for a head cold, showing off his insane wealth and proving that he is the living definition of the idea that gold can buy pretty much anything. He says sorry for being a bit of a jerk, though his punchable face suggests he loves scaring people, as he treats Hanjun like a potential player in a game way deadlier than street scuffles. Changing the subject, he asks if Hanjun knows about the fancy life of Kim Kai-yoon-soo, showing a blessing magazine where that creep is pretending to be a dreamy and skilled gaming superstar. It cracks Junwoo up that a former street thug is now being worshipped by the public, highlighting the ridiculous unfairness of a world where a criminal can become a popular idol with a fan club. He displays a secret picture of a celebrity still playing mud boss behind closed doors with his dunes, proving that the whole famous game of Persona is just a cheap wig on a very scary monster. Junwoo notes how the jerk stole Hanjun's destiny and is currently enjoying the luxury Hanjun deserved, poking every sensitive spot to make sure our hero is motivated enough to commit some high-level vengeance. Leaning in with a devious smile, He claims that ruining a celebrity's career is easy for a man of his stature, yet he requires a very specialized piece of equipment to finish the job properly. Han-jun maintains a poker face while thinking about the deal, realizing he is being handed a golden ticket to reclaim his honor, though he suspects there is a massive hidden fee involved in the contract. A flashback shows Han-jun's old glory days of broken noses and red splatters, reminding us that he is being invited to return to the filthy and violent basement of society he worked so hard to escape. The rich guy offers to cover every single bill for the hunt of Jae-yeon-soo and even pension Han-jun off for life, basically trading a lifetime of unlimited luxury for some bone-breaking labor. He brings up the family gym, knowing it is the only thing Han-jun actually loves, using it as an emotional fishing hook to reel him into the most dangerous contract he has ever signed. Locking eyes with him, Jun-woo demands a final decision on whether he can rent Han-jun's knuckles, because he is not shopping for a new office clerk but rather a human-shaped tactical missile system. After a long and awkward quiet spell, Han-jun breaks the tension by asking why the rich guy has such a massive chip on his shoulder regarding that Kim Jae-yeon-soo fellow. The millionaire freezes for a second, his gaze turning freezing cold while he thinks of an answer, making it obvious that he has some very personal beef with the target that he hasn't mentioned yet. The tight shot shows the tycoon leaning back in his expensive leather seat looking totally chill, proving he is a world-class professional at keeping his feelings hidden behind a very expensive and calm mask. He peers at Han-jun with a mysterious and gloomy look while shadows hide half his face, getting ready to provide a response that is both incredibly enlightening and completely useless for figuring him out. He questions whether motives even matter, pinning that as long as they are both aiming their punches at the same guy, the messy details are just boring distractions from their shared goal of total destruction. Trolling past expensive walls in that massive OJ complex, Han-jun senses the truth is creeping closer, seeing as he basically finalized a contract in that huge office. Returning to the typical high school landscape, the leader Choi is puffing on a cigarette, mentioning that his wallet contains more items than their clenched knuckles. The loud voice Choi is berating peers, wondering why dropping 300 grand on his specific inventory is such a challenge, effectively transforming school into a marketplace. Looming over everyone with a very tall posture, he promises trouble unless those paper receipts appear, pushing his specific classroom behaviors to an all-time high. The smiling associate mentions that purchasing items while the leader is still being quiet is a good move. Meanwhile the rest are just sitting perfectly still. Han-jun glides into the room, affecting the environment by working past Choi without stepping, which triggers Choi to turn his torso and look directly at him. Huge letters appear on the display saying the world is located across the center, acting as a very dramatic visual for the main story philosophy beginning. The text indicates that cash is the primary subject, while we view a calm Han-jun, who has finished his transition from target to active participant. Choi is opening his mouth widely about people staring at things, unaware that the individual standing there has switched from yesterday's victim to today's person. Screens flash words like pride, friendship, and standard of living, suggesting people value these things, though the current scenario focuses on different environmental factors. A focused image of her hand shows it forming a tight ball with visible skin tension, while the words suggest riches simplify every single daily challenge. In a sequence showing very fast movement, Han-jun slams a hand into the other guy's face, resulting in red fluid appearing across the entire classroom wall. Onkers appear quite still as the wallpaper gets a fresh coat of hemoglobin, signifying that the school's top person has officially moved to the floor. Everybody in the classroom remains silent while homework documents flow through the air, creating a level of quiet that is more noticeable than the impact. The standing figure moves backward with red fluid on his jaw, attempting to mouth a word related to finances before his mouth stops moving entirely. Han-jun looms over the space with red on his knuckles and a firm gaze, while the display text notes that wealth dictates one's social position, recalling his previous moments of throwing hands. Choi looks at a memory of his right hook, clearly enjoying the days when he was throwing strikes. He is positioned over several people on the floor, convinced that his physical attributes were the highest in the area while standing in a bright light, showing his teeth in a wide grin at the people around him. He did not realize his time in that position was ending near that specific person. That individual was Park Han-jun, who is illustrated moving at very high speeds to deliver a strike packed with enough force to startle everyone. The impact near the head occurs, and Choi indicates he perceived the physical contact with all his organs, changing his entire view of the current scrap. Han-jun is seen with his body angled forward and his pupils fixed firmly on his target, looking less like a classmate and more like a predator. Choi is shown with a lowered head and trembling posture, as it became clear that winning a direct physical contest was no longer a viable plan. Han-jun fills the center of the frame as a dark silhouette, and Choi believes they were built using different biological materials because of the physical gap. However, Choi encountered the snowy-haired fellow wielding a wooden bat, as this specific male possessed a different type of influence that ignored typical muscles. Legal papers were utilized to send Han-jun into a difficult situation, leaving him struggling each day, which finally managed to contain the powerful individual. A close look at a single pupil shows a moment of clarity, where it was realized that the ultimate tool is actually the currency held in pockets. A figure is seen with his mouth wide in loud laughter, seemingly pleased by the thought that having vast amounts of money simplifies all existing trouble. Choi details his business model involving an online shop where other students buy products, with illustrations showing banknotes raining down onto his virtual storefront. Such immense profits meant he could control Han-jun for 2 years using a financial tally. Truly believing he had successfully contained the dangerous individual, Choi flashes a sinister, slug grin, claiming he reclaimed his title as the apex predator, blinded by his own bank account and delusions of grandeur. Back in the present, his face mirrors pure shock and misery as he gets absolutely leveled, failing to grasp why Bus is suddenly getting clobbered. Han-jun lands a thunderous blow directly onto Choi's mug, with a flying spittle proving that money cannot buy impact resistance for his fragile jaw. Choi appears completely rattled, eyes bulging as he spits out a cocktail of blood and shame, transforming from hunter to desperate prey in seconds. Choi wails in agony, flailing a pathetic left hook, panting like a toddler while trying to pry Han-jun off his battered frame. Panjun smothers the attack, snagging Choi's fist with his own arm, while Choi's brain manages only one thought of utter disbelief. Impossible. Grabbing his jacket, Panjun delivers a point-blank punch that snaps Choi's head back with surgical precision, showing exactly who runs this show. We zoom into Choi's eye, capturing the reflection of an incoming fist and the grim realization that this nightmare has no snooze button. Panjun unleashes a flurry of strikes, turning Choi's skull into a speedback for the entire class to enjoy as he gets systematically dismantled. A lackey whispers for Nene to look away from the carnage, since even his own dunes are traumatized by their boss getting absolutely buddied. Panjun scans the class with a look that could curdle milk, ordering the other losers to stay out of it, asserting total dominance. With knuckles cracking loudly enough to rattle teeth, Panjun looms over the room, letting everyone know he is nowhere near finished with Choi. A solid jab leaves Choi's jaw bleeding and his reputation shattered, as he worries more about his image than the tea currently loosening inside. Panjun follows up with a savage kick that sends Choi sprawling across the linoleum, flipping his world upside down with one powerful strike. Choi sprawls on the floor, spitting blood and looking utterly defeated, as the swaggering boss is replaced by a sobbing, terrified child. He glares at Panjun with roar, pathetic rage, attempting to fire off one final insult, but his swollen lips turn his words into gibberish. Panjun closes the gap with slow, deliberate strides, each crunch of his boots feeling like a ticking clock marking the end of Choi's reign. Looking up from the floor, Choi sees Panjun towering above him, the height gap perfectly illustrating who actually holds the cards right now. We get a dramatic close-up of Panjun, his face masked in deep shadow, looking like a slasher movie villain ready for his big finish. Choi starts gnawing on his fingernails in a jittery mess, his eyes darting for an exit as his predator masks lips, revealing a trembling coward. He shrieks for his underling, Cho Yunjun, to intervene and save him, still trying to hide behind others despite having already been pulverized. Yunjun drips with sweat, realizing he is expected to jump in front of a human wrecking ball and clearly rethinking his career path. Panjun glares at the lackey with such icy intensity that the room temperature plummets, rendering any further words completely unnecessary. Deciding his health is more valuable than a paycheck, Yunjun quickly turns heel, whining about Panjun being excessive just to justify running away. Abandoned and alone, Choi screams at his fleeing lackey, proving that Bort loyalty dissolves the moment things get slightly uncomfortable or dangerous. Panjun continues his slow, inevitable approach toward the cowering buffoon, ratcheting up the tension as Choi realizes no hero is coming. Choi brandishes his phone like a fragile shield, babbling about lawsuits in the past, desperately hoping legal threats will stop the incoming pain. Ignoring the legal bluster, Panjun plants a brutal kick into Choi's ribs, the impact vibrating through the lockers with satisfyingly loud force. Clutching his face while whining like a spoiled brat, Choi has shed every ounce of bravado, amassing the coward hiding beneath the designer clothes. Another strike connects with Choi's nose, and as he keeps wailing about his pain, Panjun methodically breaks him down, one punch at a time. Red droplets fly from Choi's facial skin while Panjun performs a high-speed manual arrival, as he is delivering an additional inventory of kinetic energy to the recipient. Choi is on all fours now, trembling while focusing on his continued oxygen intake, as it appears that paper currency cannot reconstruct broken biological structures on the fly. Pipish sounds are emitted as he scoots across the tiles like an injured bipedal animal, and his previous upright posture has been replaced by a low-profile retreat. He is moving across the room towards the wooden exit while speaking quietly to himself, while other humans in the room are focused on the individual low to the ground. Moisture is visible on his forehead as his teeth are tightly pressed together, and he attempts to recall his previous title, but his physical instability is much more noticeable. Panjun maintains a steady foot-over-foot pace in a forward direction, as he considers the 2-year history of horizontal movement instead of maintaining a vertical orientation. A plaque with the digits 3 and 8 is visible near the exit point, while a requirement for an athlete-sized individual is identified to modify the current event. He enters the strength training zone, vocalizing loudly to attract the nearest heavy lifter, while the lifter is handling a dense metallic object with no observable facial changes. The metallic object is placed down as the lifter gazes at the facial discolorations, and he inquires about the skin damage while Choi displays a high-off breathing pattern. Loud vocalizations continue as Choi approaches the larger individual for immediate coverage, and all signs of vertical pride have been replaced by a low-leaning financial request. Panjun stands in the doorway, blocking the hall light and forming a long shadow, and the shift from light to dark areas creates a high-contrast visual effect. Choi mentions 1,000,000 currency units to facilitate a change in human positioning, and he holds up a rectangular object container as if it were a solid shield. The lifter acknowledges 1,000,000 currency units while asking for clarification on the value, as he appears interested in the exchange of dynamic movement for monetary gain. The vocal expression is produced while looking specifically at Panjun's physical frame, and he adopts a specific muscular stance, unaware of his future kinetic encounters. Facial liquid and loud verbal complaints continue as Choi seeks assistance, and he projects internal concepts onto others while sweating through his school-specific fabric attire. A large visual card announces confidence in manual fist-based abilities, and a gamble is made that an athlete can manage a former group coordinator without difficulty. Words regarding expensive testing fees are produced to create an interpersonal shift, as there is an attempt to establish dominance before the physical check occurs. Panjun stands completely motionless while focusing his visual gaze directly on the athlete, and verbal output from the surroundings is not currently causing a physical reaction. The manual reach into a fabric pocket suggests an offer of currency is incoming, and the interpersonal tone shifts as visual height is used for a condescending effect. An uncertain vocal noise occurs as Panjun reaches into his own skull garment, and a specific shift in the interaction is currently developing near the entryway. A stack of paper notes is produced, far exceeding the lifter's previous financial expectations, and he mentions that the athlete's involvement is no longer a requirement here. The stack of bills is offered in exchange for a physical location change, as Choi's previous fiscal strategy has been countered with a more successful bid. A close-up of the ocular organs reveals attention fixed on the monetary items, and all previous loyalty to the first bidder has been discarded with high velocity. White smiles appear as the paper notes change ownership and pockets, and he verbalizes a positive outcome while Choi stands nearby with an empty facial expression. High-volume vocalizations regarding loyalty occur while the temporary security exits the room, as friendship services appear to conclude when a high financial bid is presented. Pan-jun resumes a forward working pattern with a consistent pace toward the target, and Choi remains on the ground with no additional defensive items in his inventory. The digits 38 on the door appear again as metallic impacts occur, and the physical distance between the two primary individuals has officially reached zero. Choi makes contact with the metallic storage structures with a very loud thud, and the lockers appear to show new concave indentations after this fast arrival. A horizontal human is on the floor tiles in a completely motionless state, and the other participant remains standing with zero visible changes to his clothing alignment. An authority figure arrives, his facial muscles showing a high-tension configuration. As he views the surrounding room wreckage and the motionless individual in disbelief, the man bellows like a wounded walrus, demanding an explanation while his eyeballs practically pop out, shifting his frantic gaze from a bruised Choi to the incredibly chill Han-jun. Pan-jun remains anchored in the hallway, finding his shoeless is far more fascinating than the screaming educator, refusing to even acknowledge the noise coming from above, shoving a finger nearly up Han-jun's nose. The instructor demands his identity, oblivious to the fact that Choi is currently imitating a decorative rug on the towels. The teacher's blood pressure skyrockets as he shrieks inquiries into the boy's ear, yet Han-jun maintains a face as blank as a fresh notebook, completely unfazed by the acoustic assault. The camera pans over the sunset-soaked campus while a meaty thud echoes through the air, signaling that the principal's office is about to host a very spicy confrontation. With the grace of a mountain gorilla, the principal hammers his desk until the stationery dances, his sanity slipping away over this sudden outbreak of schoolyard violence. Hovering over the seated youth, the principal bellows insults and labels him a common thug for bruising his favorite student, Choi, showing all the neutrality of a paid fine. He brings up that one time he showed mercy during Han-jun's rookie year, venting his frustration that the boy clearly spent zero time meditating on his previous sins. Choi reclines on the sofa looking like a discount mummy, playing the victim card with a greasy smirk because he knows the boss is firmly in his corner. Bandaged like a failed stuntman, Choi sneers about how Han-jun's father must be disappointed, weaponizing family history to annoy the boy while looking like a human band-aid. Park Han-jun perches on the cushions with his chin tucked, absorbing the principal's tantrum in total silence, appearing as if he's merely waiting for a delivery that's running late. Without warning, Han-jun launches himself across the furniture like a heat-seeking missile, planting a fist on Choi's jaw while the principal watches in absolute horror. The administrator's brain short-circuits as he shrieks about Han-jun's mental health, witnessing a live-action beating occurring mere inches from his very expensive mahogany desk. Han-jun continues his manual redecoration of Choi's face despite the principal's weak attempts at a wrestling move, ever punch landing with the weight of a heavy sledgehammer. Inside his head, Choi realizes his life insurance might be insufficient while his chin meets a fist, chucked that the principal's office offered zero protection against Han-jun's newfound lawlessness. The dapper fellow wearing crisp attire and spectacles strolls into the mayhem, observing the fistfight with the detached curiosity of a scientist watching a very angry hamster. The stranger softly suggests that Han-jun should cease the beatdown, and the boy obeys instantly, proving that this well-dressed newcomer is the true alpha in the room. Stepping back from the wreckage, Han-jun gives the sharp-dressed man a calculating stare, indicating he either knows this guy or understands exactly why he showed up. Leaking sweat and looking bewildered, the principal tries to sound authoritative while cradling a limp Choi, demanding to know the identity of this fashionable intruder. The newcomer offers the principal a daze cold enough to freeze water, radiating the intense energy of a legal shark who enjoys eating small-town administrators for breakfast. The visitor reveals his name is Kim Bi-young representing KR law firm, which makes the administrator's skin turn the color of a freshly bleached cloud. Now perspiring enough to fill a bucket, the principal stammers about why such a prestigious legal eagle has landed in his humble office. Realizing he's completely outmatched, the view jumps to the shimmering neon landscape of nighttime Seoul as seen from a skyscraper, the literal playground where the truly powerful people play their games. Under the silvery glow of the moon, the towering glass monolith stands tall, housing Oh Young-woo while he waits for the feedback on his chaotic little social test. A quick memory reveals the principal performing a perfect 90-degree bow before Han-jun, offering frantic apologies in a hilarious reversal of his early tough guy act. Choi trudges away looking like a mummy that lost a fight with a lawnmower, his head hanging low now that he's been permanently kicked out of school. Sipping on some premium caffeine, Young-woo mentions to Han-jun that disposing of their enemies was surprisingly simple, showing zero built over the professional lives he just incinerated. Young-woo clarifies that since Choi spent 2 years being a world-class jerk, it was time to collect the bill, playing the role of a very well-dressed vigilante. Han-jun inquires about the administrator's ultimate destiny. This feature's illuminated by the city's glow, ensuring that no loose ends were left dangling in this messy affair. Swiping through his smartphone with the smile of a hungry shark, Young-woo notes that making the principal cooperate was effortless, thanks to some very juicy secrets he discovered. He presents Han-jun with a photo of the administrator at a lounge with youthful guests, mentioning it worked as perfect social leverage. The leader folded faster than a lawn chair to protect his own position. Jun-woo chuckles, noting the headmaster will swap his business suit for something orange very shortly. He is moving pieces on the board while everyone else plays in the sandbox. We see Choi inside a juvenile facility, wearing a plain gray one-piece that definitely is not haute couture. His recent activities have landed him a reservation in this specific concrete room. Right nearby sits the dean, matching him in identical stripy pajamas. Jun-woo made sure he traded his comfy swivel chair for a very firm metal bunk. Jun-woo displays a very white set of teeth, mentioning he stops paying for teachers who dress or act in that manner. He is an efficient fellow who hates messes unless they are his own. He asks if unloading that heavy crate of anger felt like a cool physical breeze. He wants Han-jun to verify that he liked moving his knuckles around. Han-jun gives a tiny twitch of his head, marking the first time his mouth muscles have had a move north. The quiet kid is finally showing signs of regular human life. Jun-woo beams at the small gesture, resting his back against the fancy chair padding. He believes more labor is required before any formal words of gratitude are spoken. He stands and strolls toward the exit, noting the grocery list of tasks is still mostly blank. The grand operation for Kim Heinz, who is only at the appetizer stage. A wide shot shows the massive window against the skyline, with Han-jun looking like a toy soldier. The big city is ready to see if he fits in its gears. Jun-woo turns with a look ready for a luxury watch ad, officially welcoming him to the squad. He says, "Nice to see you, Park Han-jun," as if the verbal contract is signed. Close images find Han-jun with his face half hidden by shadows, agreeing that this path seems much more efficient. He's glad his hens are finally generating measurable outcomes. Things kick off at night, focusing on a huge hive of apartments where the bulbs are burning late. It looks quiet outside, but someone inside is rearranging the furniture with their feet. Joy is inside his personal space having a total physical episode, treating his desk like a loud drum. Papers are drifting through the air as he makes loud sounds. The table pounding continues as he strikes the wood again, his vocal tones echoing off the walls. He stays on a loop of sounds, unwilling to accept he is no longer king. The vertical lines in his neck stand out as he barks Park Hyun-jun's name. This fellow is hyper-focused on the guy who just took his favorite toys away. He gives the table one last huge smack, his face covered by messy hair typical of a bad morning. He is backed into a corner, making his movements quite erratic. He observes his swollen knuckles, asking the wall if he will end up as a permanent bottom-tier character. He swears to stay active, already drafting his next bad idea. Park Hyun-jun's name covers the scene like a dark cloud before a storm. You just know Choi is about to do something very loud and potentially expensive. Choi has a very wide-eyed stare while stating he's going to end the other men's subscription. The white wraps on his chin make his expression look like a budget mummy. Morning looks bright and sunny over the suburban rooftops, casting long shadows on the gravel. But down in those thin alleys, a meeting is already in the works. Choi walks down the corridor wearing a dark hoodie and a round cap like a discount ninja. He's trying to keep a low profile while heading into stranger territory. He reaches a square brick building used as a base for many young individuals without jobs. He is entering a place where the regular rulebook has been thrown out. Standing at the door, he takes a deep breath and presses a chime. He is about to place his life, and a mountain of cash, in some experienced hands. A face looks through the small gap, scanning Choi without any signs of hospitality. He asks for his name, keeping the physical barrier mostly closed. Choi maintains a steady voice, introducing himself as a director to check on a pending order. He plays pretend as a big shot despite being a stressed student. The man on the other side makes a flat noise, repeating the title with zero visible excitement. He continues to watch Choi with eyes that stay half-closed. There is a close-up of a single eye peeking through the hole, making the hideout feel very strange. These neighbors are not regular bullies. They are full-time runaways. The blonde fellow named Jinsen pulls the door wide with a very toothy grin. He welcomes Choi inside, noting the time of arrival is perfectly scheduled. Jinsen shouts to the room, letting everyone know that the customer has officially arrived. Behind him, you can see multiple people grappling on the floor for practice. The interior showcased a savage display, wherein a pair of individuals relentlessly bludgeoned a helpless target using sturdy hardwood cudgels. Mr. Choi had unquestionably arrived at the perfect locale if he sought to procure enforcers. At last, the leader of this renegade collective, Huang Jinsen, was introduced. He reposed placidly on a divan, the trusty truncheon clutched, appearing as one flawlessly adept at managing specialized requirements. The hapless individual prone on the ground was a crimson, mangled tableau, feebly sputtering a grim premonition of only the initial act. Even amidst excruciating torment, the insight that involved Mr. Choi in this venture represented a dreadful concept remained remarkably distinct. A gang associate abruptly silenced him via a savage impact directly to his visage. The ensuing sanguine mist was quite revolting, and Mr. Choi found himself compelled to observe the sheer efficacy these fellows possessed in causing extreme distress. Jensen, with the nonchalance of one ordering a simple tiding, instructed his subordinates to prepare for their visitor. He manifestly regarded a person's existence as no more consequential than discarded refuse designated for prompt disposal. Mr. Choi observed the proceedings, endeavoring to maintain his equanimity despite the grisly spectacle unfolding before him. He quietly affirmed his conviction, thereby totally dedicating himself to this ethically dubious course. Jensen brushed off the preceding burst of savagery as a mere trifle, cheerily asking Mr. Choi the purpose of his presence. His disturbingly jovial demeanor appeared entirely misplaced for an individual who had just overseen a masterclass in human anguish. Jensen noted that Mr. Choi seldom arrived unaccompanied, instantly intuiting that this encounter was no mere friendly visit. He meticulously assessed his prospective patron, eagerly anticipating the financial proposal. Mr. Choi proceeded directly to the core matter, informing them he possessed a weighty demand. He was prepared to expend an immense fortune solely for the grim satisfaction of witnessing Han Jun endure torment. The boss Jensen considered the concept of a grand undertaking quite entertaining, while his bespectacled junior, also Jensen, inquired precisely regarding its magnitude. Both were already tallying their imaginary profits before Mr. Choi could articulate a single digit. Mr. Choi then delivered his monetary bombshell, presenting an offer of 10 million won. This constituted an utterly transformative sum for what amounted to arranging a scholastic incident, thoroughly catching both hardened enforcers unprepared. The boss Jensen's lower mandible threatened to strike the floorboards, while his bespectacled junior, also Jensen, appeared genuinely flabbergasted. They grasped that President Choi was no longer simply idle browsing. He clearly possessed a veritable mountain of funds. The junior Jensen, eager to expedite proceedings, attempted to persuade his superior that they ought to finalize the pact instantaneously. However, he committed the grave blunder of interjecting during his boss's delicate business folly. Without any prior notice, boss Jensen expertly wielded his truncheon, delivering a sharp, resounding blow straight to the subordinate Jensen's cranium. This abrupt, forceful collision graphically conveyed that Jensen Sr. maintained precisely zero tolerance for insolence from his underlings. Mr. Choi became utterly dumbfounded, his gaze broadening with profound astonishment. He was rapidly comprehending that the individual whose services he sought was a total lunatic, one who regarded his personal team with the affectionate care of a landfill operator. Jensen, after an indifferent glance at his bleeding junior, informed Mr. Choi that 10 million won was, in fact, an insultingly meager sum. He was simultaneously elevating the remuneration and emphatically cementing his position as the unquestioned authority. He then loomed above the dazed Jensen, promising a brutal, public pummeling directly before their esteemed client, should his mouth utter another unsanctioned sound. The prevailing hierarchy within this chamber was truly disquieting. Jensen pivoted his piecing gaze to Mr. Choi, noting that an individual lavishly scattering so much cash rarely presented as an ordinary chap. He was diligently striving to deduce Mr. Choi's genuine underlying purpose. Mr. Choi's brow became suddenly dewy, making him appear far less like a corporate dignitary and much more like a frightened child hopelessly out of his depth. Jensen subtly adjusted his spectacles, his gaze now sharp and intensely analytical. He was meticulously weighing the undertaking's potential hazards against the staggering compensation Mr. Choi was generously proffering. Ginseng, momentarily forgetting his own profession, asked Mr. Choi flat out if his mental faculties were intact, oddly baffled that anyone would disperse such a colossal sum merely to harass a peer. Despite his mercenary trade, even he perceived Mr. Choi's request as somewhat excessive. He persisted in his interrogation of Mr. Choi, rhetorically inquiring if truly 10 million was his definitive offer for a simple, albeit expensive, altercation with Hanjun. He was clearly relishing Mr. Choi's trivial vendetta, all while mentally calculating the optimal destination for the forthcoming windfall. Mr. Choi, with a nervous gulp, clarified that the initial 10 million served solely as a down payment. He indicated a significantly larger payout was reserved, contingent upon them expertly concluding this peculiar enterprise. He then dramatically upped the ante, promising to double the remuneration upon success, totaling a mind-boggling 20 million won. Evidently, this gentleman was staking his entire future, possibly even his retirement fund, on this singular, peculiar endeavor. Jinson's ocular scrutiny was conveniently obscured by the formidable glare off his spectacles as he meticulously mulled over the proposition. 20 million, he mused, was simply an indecent amount to politely decline, regardless of how utterly bizarre the accompanying request proved. A decidedly sinister grin spread across his features as he declared simply, agreed. The unholy pact was effectively cemented, sealed not merely by ambition but by unadulterated avarice, instantly placing Hanjun's very existence into a perilous gambit. The scene transitioned to a quaint, traditional edifice, utterly eclipsed by a phalanx of gleaming, contemporary skyscrapers. This charming anomaly, situated smack dab within the urban wilderness, served as Hanjun's unassuming abode, a true architectural underdog story. Jun then appeared, strolling into the structure in an impeccably tailored, eye-wateringly expensive suit, appearing as conspicuously out of place as a flamingo at a penguin convention. He was venturing into territory far more intimate than any corner of his vast OJ group domain. He then breezily entered Hanjun's apartment, announcing his presence with a hearty, "Bonnie, I'm home," as if a genuine family member. In his grasp, a modest bag of fried chicken, a seemingly simple offering that actually held the weight of a deliciously greasy historical narrative. He nostalgically recalled how Hanjun's father had once prepared him truly divine fried chicken, a detail revealing a profound, poultry-infused bun spanning numerous years. Clearly, his presence wasn't merely a corporate visit. He possessed a richly seasoned, enduring personal saga interwoven with this very locale. He's perched on the sofa, reminiscing about delectable flavors while Hanjun tunes in, a rare moment of quiet contemplation punctuated by a subtle sting of sorrow. The camera settles on a somber funeral portrait of Hanjun's dad, adorned with a lone white blossom, starkly revealing the tragic truth. The subject of Junwoo's fond recall is no longer among the living. Gazing mournfully at the chicken, Junwoo confesses it's been a solid 2 years since he savored such a dish, a quiet testament to his enduring sorrow. He echoes 2 years, the precise duration since the lives took a catastrophic nosedive, a shared agony that continues to forge the bond amidst this relentless conflict. The colossal thought bubble proclaims it still feels like yesterday, eloquently capturing the raw anguish that neither soul can truly shake off, for the quest for retribution is intensely personal. Junwoo springs to his feet, declaring his departure. This contemplative interlude concluded and his focus now firmly fixed on the intricate machinations of his grand design. While donning his footwear, he casually mentions a potential extended absence, a subtle foreshadowing of a significant maneuver in his high-stakes game against Kim Chihinsu. He informs Hanjun that his future schedule will likely be far more demanding, a clear signal that the passive phase of their agreement is drawing to a close, as the vengeance begins its inevitable momentum. His gaze is dark and resolute as he observes that matters are finally gaining traction, embodying a man who has patiently awaited this precise moment for 2 long years. Junwoo convenes with his legal counsel outside a structure conspicuously marked with police tape, already initiating the systematic unraveling of Choi's world. The attorney relays that President Choi has made a move, inquiring about the counter strategy, to which Junwoo responds with the calm assurance of someone who foresaw this exact youthful gambit. Junwoo's demeanor is frigidly composed, poised to utterly dismantle any opposition Choi might muster. His aim isn't mere victory, but complete obliteration. As Junwoo and his legal advisor depart the scene, Junwoo gently reminds him that he's fully aware of his uncompromising modus operandi, eschewing any hint of leniency or diplomacy. He further clarifies that his methods are anything but tidy, suggesting that the repercussions of their actions will be both chaotic and exceedingly severe. Embracing his role as a master of dark intrigue, the lawyer merely offers a wry smile, remarking that the entire affair rests solely on the client's directive, clearly compensated handsomely enough to overlook any ethical qualms regarding the chosen tactics. The scene shifts back to Hanjun's apartment complex under the cloak of night, the word scouting appearing, indicating Junwoo's strategic influence is beginning to significantly impact Hanjun's personal circumstances. Hold on a sec, Hanjun's father is actually alive, visible on the phone, looking utterly astonished while Hanjun observes nearby, suggesting the prior funeral photo was a clever misdirection or perhaps for another family member. Hanjun's dad is practically vibrating with joy on the phone, enthusiastically affirming the offer multiple times, appearing as though he's just hit the jackpot, completely unaware of Junwoo's subtle orchestration. After ending the call, he sits in a state of astonished quietude for a brief spell, attempting to absorb the incredible good tidings, signaling that the family's fortunes are at last taking a turn for the decidedly better. He then embraces Hanjun, bestowing an excited headbat and exclaiming the fantastic news that he's finally secured employment, a heartwarming display that underscores precisely what Hanjun is fighting so fiercely to protect. He muses aloud about the sudden influx of good luck, already envisioning a future of great wealth, blissfully ignorant that his son's powerful fists are the true catalyst for this remarkable turn of events. Hanjun rises to commence his training regimen, striving to maintain his focus amidst his father's jubilant celebration, who then requests he join for an early, celebratory feast the following day. Hanjun tightly clenches his fist, a faint, genuine smile gracing his lips as he agrees. His father's happiness clearly serving as the powerful bedrock of his commitment to this perilous path. Panjun departs for the evening, his face reverting to its characteristic impassive expression as he leaves the comforting embrace of his home for the familiar shadows of the urban landscape. His footsteps echo faintly down the quiet stairwell of his building as he heads directly toward the trap meticulously laid for him by the cunning bus Choi. As Hanjun navigates the dimly lit city streets, his mobile device begins to chime, an ominous prelude to the approaching assassins he's entirely unaware of. He answers with a simple greeting, his voice remarkably steady despite the palpable tension hanging heavy in the surrounding atmosphere. It's Jungwoo on the line, delivering the crucial intel that President Choi has finally made his move, providing Hanjun with the vital warning needed to prepare for the impending ambush. Jungwoo explains from the backseat of his vehicle that Choi has enlisted some hired muscle, yet he harbors no concern regarding Hanjun's capacity to manage the situation, placing unwavering faith in his prowess. He instructs Hanjun to notify him immediately should any adversaries appear, clearly desiring to remain apprised of developments, though Hanjun has evidently charted a different course for this particular confrontation. Hanjun investigates the quiet vicinity where many bodies are huddled together, as he calculates there is zero room on the concrete besides through people. A squad of 5 humans led by a fellow in a fancy coat works into the lamplight, clutching round pipes as if playing high-stakes pinata. The man greets him while balancing a stick on his trapezius muscle, standing there while Hanjun gives the ground a very stern and lengthy look. He remains attached to his wireless device and notes that he has reached the targets, looking perfectly still despite being flanked by several heavy sticks. The camera zooms on an iris as 2 bright white circles approach from deep in the background, illuminating the scene better than flashbulbs. A large metal rectangular vehicle casts long skinny shadows across the road, making the group look like abstract stick figures in a dramatic theater production. The fellow with the pale yellow hair is shouting about currency amounts while bouncing on his heels, likely thinking he just won the violent lottery. He turns his head slightly over his jacket collar, providing a clear view of his jawline to the assembly as the atmosphere gets incredibly stale. Focus shifts down to a single canvas sneaker about to press into the dirt, as its owner prepares to accelerate like a rocket ship. The individual appears to be made of fast-moving static as he sprints toward the line of men, exceeding the expected speed limits for pedestrians. Those pike-holding gentlemen stand as still as garden gnomes while the gap between them evaporates, with their faces losing all traces of earlier expressions. He launches a foot into the upper atmosphere like a wet noodle turned into an iron bar, swinging it through the air with extreme commitment. The shoe makes a solid landing on a cheekbone, producing a cinematic mist of red fluid while a noise like a broken flute resonates nearby. Without a pause he grips the man and pushes him downward onto the metal front of the van, potentially creating a new home for a dent. The partner in crime slides down the grill and sits on the floor like a forgotten gym bag, while the lead man looks quite dry. Panjun remains standing tall with some red drops falling from his forehead onto the grey asphalt, looking either quite messy or just very artistic. The blonde fellow makes laughing sounds and suggests the hero might enjoy causing himself physical strife, while his main colleague rests on the hard ground. The giant visual focus on his pupil captures the exact moment he stops torquing, noting that the silence has become as thick as oatmeal soup. Fingers are shown pressing heavily into the stony surface of the alley, nearly making indentations in the rock as if the ground were soft dough. The subordinates remain vertically aligned but have lowered their pipes, staring at the lone dark shape that blocks the path to their exit vehicle. He lets out a massive cloud of visible carbon dioxide and mentions out loud that his patience has completely disappeared, signaling a fresh start. He returns to a standing position with eyes catching the headlamps intensely, looking like a character who just escaped from a tall scary story. A single man faces a group of 5 antagonists in a residential parking area. Although he stands with much better posture than the whole group combined, he pushes his corrective eye gear further up his face and observes the man, noting that he maintains the stance of a world-class athlete. An extreme zoom focuses on an eyeball as he thinks about a rebuttal, while he takes a mental inventory of the red marks on his opponent. He bends over his knees while expanding his ribcage rapidly to inhale oxygen, showing several fresh stains on his jacket from the recent encounter. Up in the tall apartments many neighbors are sticking their heads out of windows, wondering if 2 small bumper cars just had a loud meeting. The fellow shows off all his teeth in a very wide grin, appearing stationary even as the neighbors gather nearby to watch the local theater. He uses a high-volume voice to command a departure, forcing the pipe holders to scramble toward the rear of the getaway transport vehicle. He climbs into the side entrance and pulls the heavy metal door with a distinct clang, calling for the driver to initiate forward movement immediately. As the van's tires start rolling, Jinsun looks through the glass pane, making a manual waving gesture toward Hanjun as if they were old neighbors. The white box on wheels accelerates into the distance, leaving Hanjun positioned on the asphalt like a very statuesque traffic officer. The frame captures a close focus on a dirty sneaker as it adheres firmly to the tar, preparing for high-intensity departure. Hanjun turns his internal engine to maximum capacity, running behind the vehicle with leg movements that would make a cheetah look lazy. Inside the transport vehicle, the passenger spots a fast-moving figure in the rear mirror, asking if the person is in need pacing them. The individuals inside the metal container move their mouths to display their teeth, relaxing their bodies against the seats as the frame vibrates. The wide grins vanish as Hanjun's nose touches the back window, causing the occupants to open their vocal cavities in synchronized surprise. Hanjun moves through the air and clings to the rear latch, hanging onto the bumper like he's trying to save money on bus fare. One arm remains vertical for support, while the other shoulder pivots back like a professional baseball pitcher ready for the winning strike. A fist meets the glass barrier with high impact, turning the window into a generous pile of transparent salt all over the floor. Hanjun places his hand through the gap to grip a synthetic shirt, while the person inside vibrates their vocal cords at a high volume. The passenger's facial skin stretches as they maintain an intense eye connection with Hanjun, observing droplets of sweat on the moving figure. With a significant horizontal pull, Hanjun brings the occupant toward the frame while the automobile continues its irregular path on the road. Hanjun launches a person named Suho out of the back, watching him tumble along the asphalt like a heavy, a cooperative gym bag. Inside the front cabin, Jin-san maintains a forward-facing gaze and a fixed chin, telling the driver to keep the accelerator pedal pressed. Another occupant rotates their neck toward the empty seat, speaking words into the air where a colleague previously existed in space. Jin-san uses a flat, low-frequency voice to repeat his command, categorizing the listener with a short noun before looking at the road. The vehicle leaves a scent of burning rubber in the air, departing from the location where a human now rests horizontally on the gravel. Suho is positioned on the black road, placing a hand against his scalp as he emits low sounds from his open mouth. The dark vertical silhouette covers the men on the ground as Hanjun arrives, moving his boots at a very deliberate and steady pace. Hanjun stares at the figure with unblinking eyes, asking for the specific GPS coordinates of the remaining members of the social group. Suho remains on the ground with a red-colored facial surface, his limbs exhibiting small involuntary oscillations while words fail to form clearly. A knuckle moves into the area of the upper mandible, creating a sound that resembles a large branch breaking in the middle of winter. Hanjun grips the individual's torso garment and lifts him upward, while red biological fluid moves downward onto the denim material. A deep vocal vibration occurs near the head of the prone man, while Hanjun's face remains hidden in a dark rectangle of light. Even with visible bruising on his facial tissue, Suho attempts to speak from the ground, trying to utilize time for a tactical advantage. Hanjun prepares his forearm for another forward motion, remaining in a specialized stance while focused entirely on the target in front. A final heavy impact occurs between two solid objects, effectively rendering the figure on the pavement into a state of total inactivity. A standard residential tower stands against the dark sky, with yellow rectangles signaling the presence of indoor activities on the upper floors. Within the walls, two round objects containing a brownish liquid make contact with each other, accompanied by a distinct clinking audio signal. The whole pack is partying hard and guzzling booze, acting like victory is already in their pocket. They are yelling loud enough to wake corpses, entirely ignorant of the disaster. Ginseng and Choi stay far from the boisterous crowd, looking very grumpy indeed. Ginseng tells the boys to watch their intake, acting like a buzzkill babysitter at a house party. Bus Choi is pouting, his mug still draped in bandages from that recent thumping. He looks like he is chewing on gravel, clearly not in a very festive mood today. Suddenly, the bass hits the table with a violent thwack, silencing the festivities. The vibe in the apartment just became incredibly uncomfortable and cold for everyone. Choi screams at Ginseng, asking why people are dancing when they fail to secure Hanjun. He is sick of the empty boasts, demanding actual results over cheap poses. The other hoodlums look over, slightly annoyed by the interruption. Choi notes they need a genuine strategy if Hanjun decides to ring their front doorbell with bad intentions. Ginseng lets out a huge, weary sigh, appearing like he is exhausted from explaining fire to a caveman like Choi. He glares directly at Choi, inquiring if the man truly believes coming here was smart. He is essentially telling Choi that he is a human anchor. Ginseng wraps an arm around Choi in a phony display of friendship, telling him to relax over trivial matters. He's totally bamboozling the kid like a cheap fiddle. He starts a weird comparison about blades for poultry and big knives for bulls. He tries to sound insightful, while being a total card-carrying psychopath under the surface. Ginseng shatters a cup on the wood, making a million sparkly shards fly. He uses the violence to emphasize why having the right gear is vital for the mission. The screen goes black with a message, asking if Choi did not already order them to snare a tiger. It is a spooky reminder of who they are tackling. Ginseng notes that you cannot tackle a wild beast with a simple butter knife. He essentially confesses that Hanjun is a bus battle they are not geared for yet. Choi looks absolutely petrified, the truth finally dawning on his swollen face. He is beginning to realize he did not just tie muscle, he started an apocalypse. We see a tight shot of Ginseng's eyes as he asks how folks hunted tigers historically. He looks like he is about to describe something incredibly stomach-turning and messy. An image appears of a predator surrounded by a pack of nasty mutts. Ginseng claims they can win with many smaller dogs, playing to drown Hanjun and buddies. The narration swears Hanjun will be hurt for months until he begs for death. He is a cruel, calculated way of getting even that goes way beyond bullying. Ginseng displays a wide, horrifying smirk and promises to put Hanjun in the ground. He looks like a certified lunatic beneath those cheap office ceiling lamps. The graphic of the feline fighting the hounds returns, stressing the word terribly. This is not about winning points, it is about a very long and agonizing expiration. Out of nowhere, a massive boom vibrates through the entire place. The thick metal entrance looks like it met a speeding wrecking ball face to face. The goons are completely stuck in place, eyes locked onto the damaged entryway. The shock perfectly illustrates the collective realization that things have gone south. One thug is dripping sweat, asking what on earth is happening. These petrified the killer beast might have found the kennel before the dogs were even ready. A close look at the barrier reveals the mental wreckage. The steel is buckled and split from an impact, meaning somebody outside has summoned human strength. Another massive impact makes the floor quake, and suddenly the tough guy acts vanish completely from every single face. Jensen remains seated, looking fairly bothered by the noise. He casually tells someone to check it out, attempting to keep his icy poker face steady. The blonde man stands up holding a bottle, trying his best to look intimidating. He mutters that it is just some random clown outside, trying to convince himself. He leans closer to peer through the tiny peephole. His nose is mere inches away from whatever waits outside, making a classic rookie mistake from a horror movie. His face goes completely pale as he stammers out the name Hanjun. The target is standing right there, peering exactly like a literal Brim Reaper for them. The room instantly turns into total bedlam as everyone grabs iron pipes. Someone screams to get their weapons ready, as a full extent of the danger heads. Jensen stays cool, ordering the entire crew to stop freaking out. He thinks Hanjun can never pierce through iron, and will simply quit and move along soon. The room features a very spooky silent contest as they eyeball the dented metal, ears hunting for sounds while the lungs basically go on strike. Jensen looks around and finally huffs out some stale air, asking if the danger boy has fully vacated the area, his vocal cords still doing a shaky jig. Giggles start erupting from Ginseng as he teases Hanjun for apparently being allergic to a group-based interaction, basically crowning himself king of the floor. Instantly, Jensen's features do a messy backflip into a ghostly shade after hearing rear activity, making a noise similar to a squished rubber toy. A massive boom occurs at the window pane, making Jensen yell about his life choices as the entire wooden trim starts looking like a limp noodle. A fist and arm delete the glass from the outdoor side, proving that 3 levels of altitude are merely a gentle suggestion to this vertical hiker. Hanjun enters via a shiny shower of sharp bits, looking like a total bad news bear as his landing invites the floor to develop some serious trust issues. Even the leader guy stops being cool, hollering about science being broken, finally noticing that he is up against someone with the energy of a Category 5 storm. External drone shots show the bloke basically scaling his way to level 3, clearly deciding that taking the regular elevator is for ordinary people only. The athlete sticks the flaw landing with a chunky noise while blast rain keeps falling, and now the small fish are trapped inside with the oceanic apex. Violence distribution starts pronto with a manual jab that nearly detaches a chin, accompanied by a soundtrack featuring a distinct crunch of generic objects. He delivers a top-tier gut punch that helps a chap reach new heights off the ground, effectively turning into a human-sized centrifuge of horizontal progress. The place is a blur of high-speed shenanigans as Hanjin handles the whole crew, dodging metal things like a nimble cat while heading back with tectonic power. An anicap visits a facial area with a very white noise, showing that his operational efficiency is basically 100% on the combat leaderboard today. A detailed zoom-in view of knuckle-on-cheek interaction shows serious G-forces, sending biological pain and calcified mouth decorations flying all over the furniture. He grabs a local thug and introduces him to the tiles with enough intensity to potentially reorganize his internal organs, officially activating hyperdrive for the duration. Panjin winds up a serious haymaker with his shoulder looking like a pressurized cannon, creating a visual mood that suggests things are about to get very loud. He drives his fist into a target's noggin with enough force to make the cement catch a permanent case of structural fatigue, effectively ending the scuffle. The champ stands over a yard sale of horizontal goons as the room gets quiet, only interrupted by the sounds of the last few guys taking a nap. He stands with his backside to us while monitoring the remaining conscious humans, wearing a fetching ensemble of salty sweat and red spatter paint on his sleeves. Turning his gaze towards the leftovers, he simply says, "Next," and honestly, the visual presence of tremors in that crowd has never been higher in the building history. The panoramic view of the apartment displays a very tranquil evening scenario from the street, successfully ignoring the absolute riot currently occurring inside the walls. Indoors is a total clearance sale of unconscious lackeys with Park standing tall, appearing far more dry and organized than his horizontal business associates nearby. Management is currently hosting a mental yard sale in the background. Realizing this situation is disadvantageous while observing the fighter with wider eyes than previously seen, Strategic Man attempts to maintain a stoic facade while his scalp leaks more moisture than a cheap umbrella, identifying his opponent as a lethal biological appliance. A quick visual playback shows Hanjin absorbing a beefy hit without any visual flinch, causing observers to consider if his pain receptors are currently on vacation. Bossman looks ready to exit his position as his face exhibits significant visual tremors, remembering exactly why this fellow is a historical icon of urban physical activities. Leaderman groups up his remaining vertical interns for one final attempt at success, hoping that collective movements can actually overcome a working natural disaster. Jinsen releases a weary cloud of air and orders the final group pounce on the male, sounding exactly like a man who just accidentally stepped into a mechanical grinder. The underlings rush the target in a big messy tangle of shoes and metal tools, while Hanjin just exists in his spot, looking totally bored by the human wave. We zoom in tight on Hanjin's eye, and seriously, there's not a single flicker of hesitation in sight. He's perfectly composed, already calculating precisely how he plans to disassemble the next unfortunate soul. Panjin erupts in a movement, a whirlwind of inhuman velocity as he smoothly evades a pipe swing. He's already winding up for a counterattack that promises to be nothing short of catastrophic. He delivers a devastating, point-blank uppercut straight into a thug's jawline. You can practically hear the structural integrity of bone failing as the guy's head recoils violently from the impact. Panjin reaches out and grabs another dude's arm, twisting it effortlessly like a wet towel. The sheer level of cold, premeditated brutality he's exhibiting here is truly on another plane of existence. We see a close-up of a thug's face as he gets caught in the mayhem, displaying a look of pure shock and genuine agony. He absolutely never saw the punch coming before his world turned completely black. Panjin throws a lightning-fast high kick, his foot connecting directly with the side of the guy's head. That dude is in dreamland before he even begins his descent toward the floor below. One of the thugs attempts to sneak up with a baton, but Hanjin just fixes him with those chilling, predatory eyes. You can pinpoint the exact moment the guy realizes he made the worst decision of his entire existence. Panjin dodges a clumsy, wild swing by mere millimeters, reacting with absolutely unnatural reflexes. At this point, he's basically just playing with these guys, showing how hopelessly outmatched they are. He extends a hand and grabs a thug by the throat with a vice grip that's impossible to escape. Look at the sheer, unadulterated terror on that guy's face. He knows he's about to visit his creator. Panjin slams the poor guy face first into the floor with a bone-shattering crash. That's one more body added to the pile of casualties, and Hanjin still looks completely bored by the process. The blonde mercenary, Ginseng, attempts an attack from behind using a wooden club, screaming like a banshee. He's clearly in full panic mode, realizing the meticulously crafted plan has completely imploded. Panjin senses the impending attack and begins to turn slowly, his expression remaining perfectly blank. He looks like he's simply performing a tedious chore, like taking out the recycling on a Monday morning. Ginseng swings the club with everything he possibly has, but Hanjin catches the weapon in midair with just one hand. He glares at the guy, silently asking, "Were you sure this is your best effort?" Panjin delivers a huge, straight punch right through the mercenary's flimsy defenses. The impact of the strike is so powerful that it actually snaps the solid wooden club in half instantly. Ginseng stumbles backward, blood spraying everywhere as he tries desperately to process the events. He notes that the hit connected properly, which is a massive understatement considering his entire face just broke. Ginseng stands there holding the broken stump of his club, looking utterly bewildered and lost. He stares at Hanjin like he's encountering a literal phantom from his worst childhood nightmares. Panjin is now covered in blood and breathing heavily, his muscles coiled and tense for action. He appears to be a real-life monster that crawled from the depths of hell just to ruin these guys' evening plans. Panjin delivers a kick so forceful it literally launches Ginseng right out of the room. This man is effectively a human catapult, and Ginseng is about to experience a very painful landing. Ginseng slams into the balcony railing with tremendous force and tumbles over the edge. Gravity proves to be extremely uncooperative as he begins a three-story plunge toward the pavement below. We see him falling through the air toward the street, looking like a discarded ragdoll beneath the moonlight. This is what generally happens when you try to fight a legendary figure for a few million won. Down on the street, a mysterious girl on a neon green motorcycle observes the entire performance. She pulls off her helmet and appears thoroughly unimpressed by the body falling from the sky. The girl smiles, looking up toward the apartment building with a mischievous, playful expression. She whispers that it all looks so frightening, clearly enjoying the chaos that Hanjin is causing. Ginseng is sprawled out across the pavement, letting out pain groans of absolute agony. He somehow survived the fall, but working away from this disastrous event will definitely not happen for him anytime soon. Jensen begins hallucinating, completely certain that his life is over as he looks up at the girl. He actually asks if he's dead, mistaking her for an actual angel coming to greet him. He stares up at her, totally dazed and covered in blood from his numerous injuries. He stammers in confusion, truly believing he's in heaven, completely disconnected from the painful reality of his situation. The girl simply smiles down at him, leaning closer to his injured form. While she certainly isn't an angel, she's probably the most attractive thing this poor guy has seen all night long. Jensen, being the incredible idiot he is, actually tries to hit on her while dying on the hard asphalt. He actually blushes and asks for her phone number, demonstrating truly messed up priorities. The girl just laughs at the request and then delivers a swift, firm kick directly to his head. That's one undeniably clear way to turn down an unwanted date, I guess. She pulls out her phone and calls someone, maintaining her casual demeanor throughout. She informs them that Park Hyun-jun is going completely crazy and destroying someone's house, then asks what her next move should be. On the other end of the line, Oh Jun-woo sits in the back of his luxury limo, looking extremely stressed. He urgently asks where Han-jun is, clearly anxious to regain control of the chaotic situation. That Bakabe keeps poking the bear with her flirty antics, pushing Jun-woo closer to a total brain meltdown. She claims there is a spicy secret she is itching to uncover. Printing at her screen, she seeks advice on which designer handbag looks more expensive, blissfully ignoring the literal skull-cracking chaos nearby. Girl really has her priorities in order. Jun-woo feels his soul leaving his body, face-firming into eternity from her shenanigans. The poor dude is barely holding on to sanity, letting out a heavy sigh into his receiver. That digital transfer must have cleared immediately, judging by the massive grin plastered across her face. She chirps a thank you to the boss, definitely winning the jackpot today. She spills the beans about the hideout at last, glancing towards the room where Han-jun keeps busy. Jun-woo is inbound to witness this absolute train wreck personally. Within those walls, Han-jun squared up against Jin-sung in a room that looks like a Category 5 hurricane hit it. Carpets are literally covered in humans and sawdust. Choi props himself up, looking like he lost a fight with a lawnmower, eventually conceding that he sees a light. He looks ready to embrace a very long, painful lap. Sung slides his specs back up, offering a forced apology since his whole squad got folded like laundry. He attempts to play it cool despite his army being erased from existence. The guy gets cocky again, questioning why Han-jun is loitering since the white flag was waved. He actually believes he has a fast pass out of this beating. He tries to bribe his way to freedom with cash or recruits, hoping his bank account can stop a fist. He wonders if there is a price for peace, fumbling for his cards. Han-jun remains motionless, delivering a gaze icy enough to freeze a volcano. He utters a flat rejection, which makes everyone in the vicinity regret their entire life choices. In a flash, Han-jun snaps forward and secures a vice grip around the chatterbox's neck. He is not interested in commissions. He is chasing a different kind of closure. Han-jun hoists the guy into the A using roar. Single-handed strength. He snarls about the incoming threshing, finally unleashing years of bottled-up fury on this unfortunate victim. The camera zooms into Han-jun's menacing mug, where his pupils burn with a sinister intensity. He resembles a mythical beast preparing to devour his lunch right on the spot. Jin-sung gasps for air, clawing at the iron fist squeezing his windbag. He shrieks in sheer terror, understanding that no bribe in the world can halt this freight train. Han-jun begins tenderizing his target against the drywall, creating a rhythmic symphony of thuds. Each hit unloads 24 months of resentment directly into the guy's jaw. The tight shot captures Han-jun loading another knuckle sandwich, his fingers stained a deep crimson. He is playing this game of demolition with the precision of a master surgeon. One colossal swing sends the spectacles on a one-way trip to the other side of the room. This moment feels like a warm bath of pure emotional release for our main hero. Sun slides down the masonry like a wet noodle, looking entirely disconnected from reality. He emits pathetic little sounds while his internal gyroscope fails him completely. Han-jun holds back for a grand finale, prepping one last punch to rearrange some features. He wants to ensure this bully never considers a repeat performance in this lifetime. He delivers a massive blow directly to the face, echoing like a cannon blast through the flat. That piece of architecture is definitely going to require a licensed contractor tomorrow morning. He continues the assault without slowing down, wearing an expression of absolute focus. This is not merely a physical confrontation, but a battle against his own dark history. Somewhere in the rear, the actual resident washes his deposit vanishes, his flat falls apart. He shakes like a leaf as each collision rings out like a loud bell. The homeowner grips his skull while weeping over the utter annihilation of his decor. He simply can't wrap his brain around this horror show occurring next to his sofa. The landlord finally loses his cool and snatches at Han-jun's sleeve through a veil of tears. He bellows for an end to the madness, hoping to salvage some floor space. Han-jun turns around, face leaking red fluid and eyes resembling a bottomless void. Despite appearing like a nightmare creature, he actually ceases the fire to everyone's utter shock. The resident is wailing like a siren, pleading for Han-jun to quit wrecking his crib. He's totally crushed, merely a civilian who somehow landed in a cinematic battle zone. He yells at the duo to take the Royal Rumble to the curb where it belongs. He brings up the struggle of solo living without family, making things awkward for everybody involved. Han-jun looms amidst the debris, observing the meltdown with a blank stare. The tiny, microscopic flicker of remorse crosses his features, though it vanishes before anyone can document it. The poor resident is having a major breakdown, screeching about the injustice of his current situation. To be fair, seeing her kitchen exploded would make anyone a total basket case. Giving a heady groan, he inspects the fleshy debris decorating his rug. It is quite the catastrophe, and he knows he is the janitor today. Out of nowhere, the entrance swings wide as Jun-woo enters with massive ego. He scans the chaos, wondering what absolute circus created such a filthy nightmare here. Wearing a cheeky smirk, Jun-woo shoots a glance toward Han-jun. He calls his partner terrifying, secretly thrilled that his human weapon functions with peak efficiency. Baffled completely, the proprietor gestures toward Jun-woo, demanding if he ordered this interior demolition. He seems prepared to rumble with yet another interloper right now, claiming to be the OJ Group bid boss. Jun-woo feigns etiquette, apologizing for the clutter. He probes for the renovation cost, aiming to solve this with cash. Gaping like a fish, the host's pupils expand upon hearing that specific name. He realizes he is currently chatting with a titan of national wealth and status. The businessman suggests fivefold reimbursement immediately, shifting the owner from rage to avarice quickly. The greedy guy questions if the rich dude is actually loaded. Adopting a sinister smile, the resident requests 10 million won, so Junwoo giggles while handing him 50 million. Witness the sheer influence of a thick wallet. Since the local is satisfied, Junwoo aims his chilly focus at battered Jin-sun on the tiles. The polite facade vanishes into thin air instantly. Shaking in his boots, Jin-sun gazes up, labeling Han-jun a freakish beast. He is mentally shattered, baffled by such immense, soul-crushing physical power. With shaky fingers, he attempts to shove himself away, accepting this conflict was a doomed venture. Escape becomes the solitary goal in his panking brain. Desperate and frantic, Jin-sun crawls for the terrace, hoping for a grand exit. Inside his head, he yelps for safety while bracing for a leap. Jumping the fence, he welcomes a 3-floor drop rather than tasting more knuckles. Choosing gravity over pain seems like a smart trade at this moment. During his descent, he howls into the wind while plummeting toward the pavement. He genuinely believes his little aerial stunt will grant him absolute freedom today. Suddenly, the pawn shoots out from above, snatching his coat firmly with relentless string. Pan-jun refuses to let his target vanish into the night yet. Jinsun's mug appears frozen in pure horror as he hangs high above the sidewalk. His pulse is likely drumming harder than a heavy metal concert drummer. Using only a single limb, Pan-jun suspends him there, wearing an icy, robotic stare. He channels some serious robotic assassin energy during this intense standoff. With crimson streaks on his features, Pan-jun remains tranquil, whispering that the playdate is far from over. Poor Ginseng is in for a sequel of suffering. Suspended in midair, Ginseng understands that returning indoors equals certain doom, so he sweats profusely. He hunts for a tiny loophole to break this crushing hold. Reaching into his cuff, he retrieves a concealed edge during a frantic, last-ditch effort. Truly a reptilian coward, he will stoop to any level for survival. Letting out a roar yell, he lashes a dagger toward the limb holding him up. He bets his entire future on this ambush forcing a sudden release. Fabric tears audibly as the metal cuts through cotton, but Han-jun acts with lightning speed. He uncouples his fingers just before his flesh becomes an open wound. Ginseng actually dares to grin during his fall, assuming he successfully fled the scene. He cheers his victory, momentarily ignoring the hard ground waiting below him. That arrogant expression fades fast when Fisk kicks in. Glancing up at the receding balcony, he suspects plummeting might have been a massive strategic error. Screeching like a frightened bird, Ginseng crashes downward. From above, the two observers remain unfazed, casually watching the organic dart descend rapidly toward the asphalt. Landing with a wet crunch, he tumbles across the hard road like a bag of tubers. That level of impact is rough, even for a seasoned street fighter. Other hooligans scatter, hollering frantically because the chief decided to embrace skydiving without a chute. They resemble chaotic poultry while Han-jun stares coldly down. Somehow standing again, Ginseng wheezes heavily while holding his ribs. To be fair, his refusal to perish after such an ordeal is somewhat noteworthy. Resting nonchalantly on the edge, Junwoo surveys the ruin below. He snidely remarks about that survival instinct, finding the entire bloody spectacle rather amusing and comical. Cackling wildly, he sprays red mist while peering up at the pair. He bellows that they are moronic idiots. Pretending he holds the upper hand, he displays a scarlet-coated smirk, mentioning their arrival in a giant pickle, resembling a toddler about to tattle to his gigantic playground protector. Pan-jun and Junwoo simply gaze downward with massive, blank stares, as they just toss this human off concrete and he still acts like the neighborhood bitch. Jinsen leans horizontally against a wall while clutching his midsection, asking if they recognize his boss, effectively admitting he serves as a low-level subordinate. He plays his executive tier card by mentioning his dad leads PJ Haewoon, glaring with wide eyes, suggesting that nautical businessmen are quite lethal in this town. Junwoo makes a small grunt of recognition as everything aligns, knowing the PJ Haewoon brand well, his eyebrows migrating significantly high toward his hairline. Junwoo suddenly reveals a massive, shadowed grin, asking if danger is truly afoot with a heavy layer of mockery, his posture suggesting he is counting future outcomes. We see a frame of a colossal, bright office spy piecing the evening, the home base for PJ Haewoon where the individual Jinsen mentioned regularly works. A mangled and hobbling Jinsen crawls toward a fancy mahogany desk, screaming for daddy, looking like a wet poodle scurrying back home after a physical scuffle. A man with a ponytail named Hwang Kyun, the primary executive, looks up from his ledgers with a very flat, unmoving face, showing no physical signs of warmth. Ginseng is effectively leaking from his eyes, his head being a collection of white gores and purple marks, while his elder watches with no visible change in breath. The ungrips his spawn's jaw firmly, demanding the identity of whoever damaged his legacy, as the internal climate of the room feels remarkably still and motionless. With salt water leaking from his ducts, Ginseng begs his old man to evaporate two guys, requesting multiple associates to handle a simple schoolyard brawl. The thick silence lingers in the suite as Harry observes his trembling child, his face remaining stationary while he contemplates if this task is worth any further effort. He cautions Ginseng that this decision might lead to deep future remorse, not regarding any physical clash, but the significant financial or personal debt being opened up. Ginseng barks back that the potential consequences do not matter, shouting over his injuries that he needs some specific people removed from his sight permanently. Perryon lifts one corner of his lip, noting Ginseng's shift in behavior since leaving home, though he mentions his current appearance lacks any quality of reliability. He seizes Ginseng's chin to orient his pupils upward, lecturing that outsiders won't offer assistance to those displaying any physical tremors or signs of low stamina. He stares directly into his kid's visual organs, telling him to reply for help only after he decides to put his entire life on the table. Ginseng clears the red leakage and moisture from his mug, his face becoming as rigid as a stone, seemingly finished with playing a passive role. He peers upward with giant, lidless eyes, claiming he wants to end those guys regardless of consequences, effectively trading his personal values for targeted revenge. Perryon finally exhibits a bored, upturned mouth, seeing his junior in this state, seemingly pleased that his specific behavioral traits have been successfully duplicated. The executive uses his smartphone to ring someone titled Chief Kim, already dialing in the coordination to transform Hanjin's local area into a zone of high intensity. He tells the voice on the other side that he requires 2 large metal containers, which sounds like a very specific code used for a cleanup operation. He pushes his face toward the device, his facial features twisting significantly, prowling that they are going to show some bold men exactly how low they rank. A line of snowy SUVs and a fast-moving white luxury vehicle weave through traffic, appearing like a very expensive team of professional responders on their way. The wheels screech near a pile of steel beams and dust, where the bright front lights illuminate the night, signaling the arrival of a serious group. A massive swarm of men in formal wear climbs out, trailing behind Harry Yun and a taped-up Jin Sun, working with the steady strides of people with wealth. They work toward a flame where Han Jun and Jun Woo stand with neutral expressions, a classic match between 2 people and 50 incoming vehicles worth of backup. Harry Yun pauses and asks why so many small garden insects are meddling in a juvenile sand's war, addressing them as if they are splatters on a windscreen. He moves his face into their personal space, asking if they have a scheduled date with the Undertaker, waiting for their limbs to start shaking involuntarily. Jun Woo casually wondered aloud if Harry Yun truly believed they hadn't planned for this little reunion, completely unfazed by the small army of muscles standing behind the CEO. Harry Yun made a bewildered noise, struggling to compute Jun Woo's supreme confidence. After all, he wasn't accustomed to hearing lip from anyone he outnumbered. The CEO's complexion instantly went ghost white as the recognition finally dawned on him, shrieking Chairman Oh Jun Woo's name while his tough guy facade evaporated in a single breath. The remaining thugs were equally bewildered, murmuring in confusion and questioning why the chairman was present, suddenly realizing they had just brought a butter knife to a ballistic missile launch. Harry Yun's phone began to rattle violently in his pocket, a perfectly timed interruption that could only have been choreographed by Jun Woo himself. He answered the call in a panic, attempting to brush off Director Nem with an excuse about being occupied, but the report on the line was obviously catastrophic. His jaw dropped to the floor as he absorbed the news that every single transaction with OJ Group for the upcoming 6 months had been terminated, as Jun Woo single-handedly decimated his entire commercial empire in one calculated phone call. Jun Woo let out a massive, exaggerated yawn that nearly dislocated his jaw, appearing utterly bored as he mocked the caller's explanation, noting that Chairman Oh Jun Woo had personally decided to cancel everything for mysterious reasons. He gave the CEO a sinister, knowing smirk that clearly communicated the power dynamic in this industrial yard had just completely inverted. Harry Yun was sweating profusely, staring at Jun Woo in utter terror, as he realized he hadn't just tangled with some punk kid, but with the ruthless man who literally held the fate of his company in his hands. In a pathetic demonstration of submission, the CEO immediately dropped to his knees, bowing deeply until his forehead made contact with the cold concrete, pleading for the chairman to offer mercy just this once, his pride utterly annihilated. Jin Sun completely lost control, yelling at the CEO about his actions and asking if they shouldn't just beat the gap, while his father simply barked at him to be quiet. Finally realizing his son's massive ego had nearly destroyed them all, Jun Woo looked down with a smug, self-satisfied expression, observing that the CEO seemed rather quick to grasp the situation, clearly savoring the spectacle of watching this man completely debase himself. He casually instructed Harry Yun to eliminate those moron-looking fundy first, gesturing directly toward Jin Sun and his crew, treating them as if they were a literal infection that needed immediate surgical removal. The perspective widens to show the convoy of vehicles sitting stationary, the bright headlights illuminating the utterly humiliating scene. It was a total and complete defeat for the PJ Hee-woon crew without so much as a single punch being thrown. Harry Yun remained prostrate on the ground, desperately pleading with the chairman not to destroy him, fully aware that he was just a single word away from total, irreversible bankruptcy. The camera focuses closely on the CEO's desperate expression as he explained that if those shipments didn't proceed, this company would find itself in immediate and deep trouble, essentially begging for his professional life. Jun Woo calmly lit a cigarette, appearing completely indifferent to the man's anguish, explaining that he simply needed to maintain his company's image, as if this were just a routine, everyday business decision. He asked directly how he could possibly work with a company owned by gangsters farther, turning the CEO's own words completely against him, effectively throwing his previous fisherman torque right back in his face. Desperate to salvage the situation, Harry Yun promised to immediately ship his son abroad for studying and ensure he never set foot back in Korea again, literally throwing his own offspring under the bus just to save his corporate profits. Without a moment's pause, the father pivoted and delivered a brutal, point-blank punch directly to Jin Sun's face, with an impact so powerful you could practically hear the jaw cracking from the sheer force. Jin Sun was in complete shock, screaming for his father as he stumbled backward, completely unable to believe the man he worshipped had just turned on him in a heartbeat over a business transaction. Harry Yun continued the assault, raining down punches on his already bandaged son while screaming at the piece of trash to shut his mouth. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what you call a truly toxic family dynamic. Jun Woo simply watched the entire teaching moment unfold, letting out a satisfied laugh, finding the father-son balance absolutely hilarious, which honestly makes him the most terrifying individual in the entire scene. He pointed at the brawling duo and remarked that it was no surprise the kid lived his life that way, essentially roasting their entire family tree while they continued to beat each other senseless. Jun Woo informed them that shipping ginseng abroad wouldn't do anyone any good, suggesting he had something far more educational in mind for the young man instead. He claimed to possess a much better teaching method than merely shipping ginseng away, and the CEO was so completely desperate that he immediately agreed, shouting that he would follow whatever Jun Woo instructed. Jun Woo calmly explained that he had spent 50 million won to repair Jinsen's previous apartment rampage, a negligible amount for himself but a massive, crippling debt for virtually anyone else. He looked directly at the bleeding ginseng and declared that he wanted the son to work by himself to repay that money, emphasizing that he wasn't looking for a check, but rather a proper lesson in good old-fashioned manual labor. The father appeared completely bewildered, questioning how a good-for-nothing like his son could ever manage to earn 50 million won on his own, knowing full well his child had never actually worked a real day in his life. The chilling close-up focuses on Jun Woo's mouth as he spreads it into a wide, malicious grin. He's about to unleash a suggestion guaranteed to ruin Jinsen's life in a completely innovative, new manner. He points directly at the CEO, informing him that since he's a fisherman, his son Jinsen should experience that life on the water. Jun Woo suggests the most grueling, high-intensity manual labor he can possibly devise. Leaning in with a triumphant smirk, he questions whether deep-sea fishing vessels actually pay very much. This serves as the ultimate punishment for a spoiled rich kid used to bullying people from the comfort of his luxurious office. We transition to a wide shot of a deep-sea fishing trawler cutting vigorously through the ocean waves. This radical scenery change from the city shows us exactly where Junwoo's unique teaching method is currently being executed. A massive fishing net is violently hauled out of the water, generating a huge splash. This is clearly brutal and dangerous work, allowing you to almost feel the cold wind and salty spray from the boat. And there he is, Jensen. The former school tyrant looks like he aged 10 years in a week, frantically struggling with the nets while screaming for his father. Welcome to the real world, buddy, where your daddy's name won't save you from manual labor. We cut back to the urban jungle, focusing specifically on the towering glass skyscraper of the OJ group. This is where the true power resides, a world away from the hardships of a fishing boat. Inside the office, Pan-jun sits across from Junwoo. He looks incredibly serious as he tells the CEO that he acts like a genuine villain. Honestly, Pan-jun isn't wrong. Junwoo's methods are completely cold-blooded. Junwoo just works at the accusation, taking a casual sip of his tea. He wonders aloud whether he's truly a villain, completely unfazed, likely viewing the assessment as a compliment given his lifestyle. Junwoo clarifies that their actions are definitely not charitable work. He wants Han-jun to keep a low profile and avoid getting into additional trouble that requires a substantial financial payout to resolve. Pan-jun looks away, muttering that he isn't actually hurt. He maintains his usual stoic, I'm fine attitude, despite barely surviving an intense fight just prior to this meeting. Suddenly, a finger pokes him sharply in the neck. The voice mocks him, telling him to stop acting cool because his bruises are visibly obvious. Talk about a total bustle. We finally get to see the person responsible for the poke. It's the girl from the motorcycle chase. Pan-jun looks completely caught off guard by her sudden, unexpected appearance in the corporate office. Junwoo introduces her, telling Han-jun that she will be working with him to dismantle Nexus. As it turns out, she's an Instagram influencer and the new official informant. This is Choi So-yeon, a girl with an enormous 570,000 followers. She thinks the title informant sounds totally cringe, but her influence and reach make her an undeniably valuable asset. Do-yeon leans closer, admitting she's surprised because the rumors suggested Han-jun looked like a common bandit, but he's actually quite handsome. She definitely operates without any kind of social filter. The close-up frames So-yeon's face as she thoroughly examines him. She possesses a playful yet dangerous combination, which usually spells trouble for our main protagonist. Pan-jun simply stares back with his characteristic blank expression. He clearly isn't used to women being this forward, or he simply doesn't care about his own looks. Junwoo looks annoyed, ordering So-yeon to stop messing around because they are genuinely trying to get some work done. He's the only one keeping his focus on the actual objective. So-yeon just brushes him off with a casual shrug, mentioning that she actually prefers men who look like bandits over handsome types anyway. She proves to be a complete wild card. Ignoring the teasing, Junwoo gets serious and asks Han-jun why he actually called for a meeting today. Han-jun just sits there quietly, letting the two of them continue bickering. Junwoo leans forward, his expression suddenly turning serious as he prepares to reveal some critical information. The lighthearted banter and playful atmosphere have officially vanished. He explains that he called them in specifically to discuss their future strategies. To properly take down a monolithic group like Nexus, he knows they need to be extremely strategic. So-yeon asks the obvious question, wondering if the brilliant plan isn't simply to let Park Han-jun punch everyone into submission. Having seen what his fists can do, she believes that brute force is the only requirement. Junwoo shakes his head, explaining that the current scale of Nexus is far beyond their imagination. Even a powerhouse like Han-jun cannot possibly take on an entire national gang by himself. He tosses a folder onto the table, the label clearly reading Danyeon High School. This represents the next target in the complex campaign to dismantle the Nexus network. He explains that the specific objective is currently located inside that school, which just happens to be a major Nexus affiliate. It appears it's time to go undercover. Han-jun visibly flinches, his eyes widening in complete shock. It's rare to see him lose his composure like this, strongly suggesting the specific school carries some serious history for him. Han-jun mutters the name Kim Dong-han. That name clearly carries significant weight from his complicated past life as a powerful gang leader. Junwoo gives a sharp smirk, confirming that Han-jun has a very good sense. He knows exactly who Han-jun immediately thought of when he mentioned the location. A flashback transports us to the war against Nexus, showing a rain-drenched Han-jun among corpses, accompanied by a single red hate survivor. Meet Kim Dong-han, the former top student of Dong-han High, who stuck by Han-jun like glue until the bitter end. Han-jun glares at the file, murmuring that he recognizes the guy, making it painfully obvious the situation is deeply personal. The memory shifts to Dong-han dragging himself through mud after losing his legs in battle, sacrificing his mobility for the cause. Junwoo insists that recruiting Kim Dong-han is a strategic necessity, rather than just a trip down memory lane for them. Han-jun falls into a brooding silence, his expression clouded by the heavy prospect of dragging an old comrade back into bloodshed. Junwoo urges him to loosen his stiff face, reminding him that business remains business regardless of his sappy personal attachments. The close-up reveals Junwoo's icy gaze, typical of a man who views everyone, including Han-jun's old buddies, as mere pawns on a board. He drops the bombshell that Dong-han works for Nexus now, which seems either like a massive betrayal or a pathetic survival tactic. Han-jun's eyes darken with intensity, as a revelation that his former right-hand man turned traitor is the final straw for him. We shift to a detention center gate, marking the official transfer of President Choi, whom Han-jun recently wrecked, into custody. Nexus elites huddle in a classroom, fretting over how the forced sale of Choi's business is severely cutting into their illicit funding. One member grumbles that replacing Choi's cash flow will be a nightmare, clearly feeling the financial pinch Junwoo orchestrated so skillfully. A scarred guy cackles, mucking Choi for being a decent businessman who clearly lacked the political brain cells to survive the real world. The tense leader reminds them that Choi was still one of their own, desperately trying to keep these snakes from devouring each other. He demands to know who dared to put a Nexus member in chains, sparking immediate curiosity among the gathered group of thugs. The mention of Park Han-jun hits the room like a falling anvil, causing in sudden, heavy silence to choke the entire atmosphere. Focus shifts to a massive, imposing figure at the head of the table, whose silent aura radiates pure, unadulterated menace. He asks who did it with icy detachment, revealing himself as Min Kyunchul, the reigning king of Donhan High School. Kyunchul seems genuinely bewildered, believing Hanjun opted for a quiet life post-trial, proving he has been tracking the legend closely. Suddenly, the rhythmic thud of approaching footsteps echoes through the car door, signaling someone is marching toward the room with confidence. A frantic lackey bursts inside, screaming about big news while looking as pale as if he had just witnessed a haunting. He stammers out the name Park Hanjun, his voice trembling with a terror that reveals the genuine gravity of the situation. The messenger drops the ultimate bomb, revealing that Hanjun is actually a new transfer student who just worked into their domain. The room falls into absolute shock, struggling to process that the man they were just discussing is currently inside the building. Everyone stares at the messenger, wearing expressions that blend pure disbelief with the rising panic of prey facing a predator. Min Kyunchul starts tapping his desk, a nervous tick betraying that the surprise guest has thoroughly rattled his carefully laid plans. With a twisted, sinister smirk, Kyunchul muses that this unexpected development guarantees things are about to get delightfully chaotic today. We cut to classroom 3-4, where the teacher asks a newcomer to introduce himself, while the sign feels like an ominous countdown. Hanjun strolls in wearing a red shirt under his jacket, looking eerily calm while his sharp eyes scan the room during his greeting. He kicks off his transfer by delivering a truly savage introduction, announcing his intention to destroy every single person in the room. He clearly skipped the make new friends orientation. The entire classroom falls into a stunned silence as the students stare at him in total confusion. They can't figure out if he's genuinely dangerous or just a new kid trying too hard to seem edgy. The teacher, completely oblivious to the impending chaos, simply laughs it off, dismissing Hanjun as a typical troublemaking new transfer. He has no idea he just welcomed doom into his classroom. The teacher points toward an empty desk in the back corner. Hanjun begins his work to the seat, completely disregarding the whispers and horrified glares of his new classmates. The teacher gives a half-hearted warning about smoking regulations in the designated corner. Hanjun has already tuned him out, fully engrossed in assessing his surroundings. He moves through the aisle with slow, deliberate footsteps. A noticeable tension fills the air as he passes by the local delinquents, making them shift uncomfortably. Hanjun arrives at his desk and prepares to sit down. The guy next to him, however, is already staring intensely, radiating pure aggression. This is Jo Wooman, who holds the number 12 ranking at Donyon High School. He demands confirmation of Hanjun's identity, making it abundantly clear he's itching for a confrontation. Hanjun completely ignores him, simply settling into his seat in silence. He has officially activated his pretend everyone else is invisible routine. Wooman reveals that Min Kyunchul specifically ordered him not to engage with Hanjun. He seems genuinely offended that his boss would suggest he couldn't handle this himself. He flashes a nasty smirk, convinced Hanjun must be terrified based on his size and reputation. Wooman is making a monumental error in judgment. He leans in close, whispering that he genuinely wants to fight Hanjun one-on-one. He's desperate to test himself against the legendary figure. Wooman explains that he transferred last year and instantly heard all the wild rumors. He now wants to personally verify if the stories about Hanjun are actually true. He suggests they just ignore the others and fight right here and now. He's attempting to be chivalrous in the most bizarre way possible. Hanjun continues to stare straight ahead, giving the guy zero attention or acknowledgement. This complete disregard is driving Wooman absolutely insane. Wooman asks, his voice dripping with venom, if he's actually being ignored. He clearly isn't used to being treated as though he doesn't exist. He challenges Hanjun, asking if he's the type who only reacts when someone actively picks a fight. He's essentially poking a sleeping bear with a short stick. Finally, Wooman reaches out and grabs Hanjun's shoulder, calling him a moron. He just crossed the line, and there's definitely no going back now. Without even standing or turning his head, Hanjun launches a lightning-fast back fist. The sound of the counterattack is nothing short of pure speed. The punch lands squarely on Wooman's face, sending him flying backward into the lockers with a tremendous crash. That's the number 12 student taken out in less than a second. The entire class freezes in shock, their eyes bulging as they watch their classmates slide down the lockers. They realize Hanjun's introductory threat wasn't a joke after all. Hanjun doesn't even bother to stand up. He just leans forward, resting his head on the desk, looking profoundly bored with the whole situation. He murmurs from under his arm not to disturb him. This is peak legend behavior, instantly defeating a top-tier fighter and returning to his nap. Welcome to the new year. We transition to a baseball batting cage, where the sharp crack of a bat hitting a ball echoes through the space. The rhythmic, mechanical sound creates a surprisingly intense atmosphere for a casual outing. Choi Seo-han, acting as the group's resident influencer and informant, leans against the cage fence scrolling on her phone. She expresses complete skepticism about why they're recruiting Kim Dun-hyun. She questions why they would choose him from all the strong and capable guys available. She wonders if it's charity for his leg injury, or just because he's Hanjun's friend, which, in her eyes, isn't enough. Oh Jun-woo gives her a smug look and a short laugh in response. He sarcastically asks when their organization turned into a charity, suggesting Seo-hyun completely misunderstands Dun-hyun's worth. High-speed baseball zips through the air. The pick hit is a blur of motion lines. The power behind the pitch serves as a potent metaphor for the high-impact players in this developing story. Jun-woo winds up his swing, stating that the first word people think of when Kim Dun-hyun is mentioned isn't exactly pitiful. He's about to teach Seo-hyun a lesson in scouting talent. We see a flashback image of Dun-hyun looking absolutely feral, blood smeared across his face. The word tenacity looms over him, defining the core characteristic that makes him genuinely dangerous. Jun-woo points out that despite Dun-hyun's impressive physique, he showed incredible tenacity when facing Nexus. He admires the little guy's fighting spirit, even though his buddy took a pretty severe beating in the process. Another pitch flies in, and Jun-woo hits it perfectly, completely in sync with the mechanical server. He observes that people often misunderstand the true nature of durability, calling it more complex than most realize. Jun-woo pulverizes the ball, explaining that rigid objects often shatter precisely because they lack flexibility. He's essentially arguing that Dun-hyun's greatest asset also served as his ultimate liability. Seo-hyun remains completely unamused, looking bored as she asks why they should recruit someone who is already damaged. She wants a perfectly sharp weapon, not a broken tool requiring extensive repairs. Jun-woo responds with a confident smirk, completely sure of himself. He insists that he has faith in this idea. thinking that he knows precisely how to leverage Dunhine's past defeat into a new, improved kind of strength. He continues his explanation while preparing for the next pitch, suggesting that someone who has previously broken might not return with the same level of rigidity. He seeks adaptability and a sharper, more nuanced perspective. The machine launches another ball, and Jun Woo's eyes narrow in sharp focus. He is multitasking efficiently, treating this batting practice like both a high-stakes meeting and intense physical training simultaneously. He makes perfect contact once again. He firmly believes that Dunhine will be even sharper once he returns to the fight because he understands exactly what it feels like to lose everything. A close-up shot captures Jun Woo's eye, revealing a sharp and calculating gaze. He is a high-stakes gambler who bets on hidden potential, and he sees plenty of it in this so-called broken warrior. He stands there holding the bat like a tactical spear, resembling a brilliant scientist who has just finalized a complex theorem. He is certain that Dunhine is the critical component needed to complete the strategic puzzle. A baseball lies on the ground, utterly shredded and deformed by the sheer force of Jun Woo's powerful swings. It's a slightly terrifying illustration of what happens to anyone, or anything, unfortunate enough to encounter him professionally. Seo-hein just looks at him quietly, likely realizing that challenging a billionaire's personal fascinations is probably as productive as arguing with a brick wall. She reluctantly decides to place her faith in his peculiar scholarly hunches for the immediate future. The perspective switches back to the school grounds, featuring the batting cage as the sun begins its dramatic descent. The vibe transitions abruptly from intellectual plotting to active implementation as they enter enemy territory. The panoramic view reveals Dunhan High School looking particularly bleak and menacing beneath the heavy, gray clouds. This location functions primarily as Nexus's headquarters, and Hanjin just strolled right in like he owns the place. Hanjin's sneakers click against the hallway tile with a consistent, measured rhythm. He radiates an unmistakable steer-clear vibe that practically creates a physical pressure wave around him. The camera closely trails him as he works down the long hallway. The students in the background immediately freeze, turning their heads to stare, sensing instinctively that a new, apex predator has just entered their ecosystem. Two students, looking particularly rough, watch him move past, displaying a combination of aggressive curiosity and potential intimidation. They've clearly heard the whispers about him and are already making initial calculations about the new arrival. The side profile captures Hanjin, revealing his cold, unwavering focus on what lies ahead. He clearly isn't interested in forming friendships or participating in school spirit, as he is here solely to execute a specific task. The hallways behind him teem with rowdy individuals, some casually smoking and others simply causing trouble. This atmosphere stands in stark opposition to a normal high school, functioning more like a specialized academy for future mobbing forces. Hanjin halts at the entrance to a long corridor, peering down at a situation currently unfolding on the lower level. He was specifically searching for one individual, and it seems his search has reached its successful conclusion. The tight shot captures Hanjin's face, revealing total disinterest in the low-level intimidation occurring in front of him. He's seen significantly darker things, but he still carefully assesses all participants in this small-scale drama. Farther down the corridor, a red-haired student endures verbal abuse from a small group of bullies. The hairstyle immediately serves as a clear identification marker, like a neon sign pointing to the target. It is indeed Kim Dunhan, though he presents a starkly different figure. He appears completely drained and defeated, his eyes lacking the fiery spirit we witnessed earlier. He has been reduced to little more than a living punching bag for these pathetic individuals. Pan-jun observes with a completely neutral expression, taking in the sight of his former second-in-command reduced to such humiliation. The disparity between the current positions in the social hierarchy is truly astonishing. The bully lands a hard kick to Dunhan's midsection, yelling obscenities at him. They are treating a previously respected figure like absolute trash, fully aware that he either cannot or simply refuses to defend himself. Dunhan goes sprawling onto the floor, causing his possessions to scatter widely across the tiles. He makes no attempt to cushion the fall, appearing to have completely abandoned the concept of self-respect. The main bully turns his attention toward Hanjun, demanding to know if he intentionally arrived late to school. The group attempts to assert dominance over the transfer student, completely oblivious to the catastrophic error they are making. The group encircles Dunhan, ridiculing him for squandering his entire allowance on a failed bet. They use him as a scapegoat for their own financial misfortunes, justifying the continued physical assault. A vicious punch connects directly with Dunhan's head while he remains defenseless on the floor. The resulting sound effect is sickening, and a visible spray of spittle confirms the severe impact as his head jerks violently sideways. The bullies share a laugh, joking among themselves to keep hitting him since he's already completely out of commission. The casual savagery displayed in this educational establishment is truly difficult to stomach. A bystander is filming the entire ordeal with his phone, cackling about the possibility that Dunhan's legs will seize up if he even attempts to sprint. They're specifically making fun of the permanent damage to his face, like it's a new fashion statement. The ringleader snatches Dunhan by his tangled red hair, forcing him to look up. He helpfully explains that Dunhan needs to prioritize his terror of the bully over his anxiety about his potentially useless legs. It's an expert-level application of intimidation. Another brutal fist connects with Dunhan's face as a torrent of abuse pours out. The victim simply absorbs the assault, his inner strength seemingly pulverized beyond recognition. The relentless pummeling persists with kicks and stomps, the thuds echoing through the scene. Hanjun remains a motionless shadow in the distance, observing the spectacle without twitching a single nerve. A detailed view of Hanjun's expression reveals cold eyes, yet a subtle hint of calculation or perhaps even revulsion flickers within them. He's clearly more than just another face in the crowd. He's an active ingredient in this mess. Over at the OJ Group headquarters, Seo-hein relaxes in a lounge chair, conceding that she understands Jun Woo's interest in recruiting Dunhan. She's beginning to see the logic behind his unorthodox personnel choices, however reluctantly. However, she presents a significant reservation. She views Han-jun as a highly volatile colleague. In her opinion, he's less an asset and more a ticking time bomb. Despite his overwhelming power, she proposes that financial incentives are a superior solution compared to these elaborate recruitment maneuvers. In her worldview, the bank account trumps a traumatized soldier every single time. Jun-woo reviews documents while pondering her suggestion. He acknowledges the simplicity of her approach if Kim Dunhan were motivated by cash, but he understands the man on a deeper level. He inquires whether she understands why Dunhan confronted Nexus previously. The visual memory of the two friends standing united suggests the loyalty was forged in something far more substantial than mere currency. Junwoo explains that the reason was straightforward. Panjun decided to fight. Dunhine wasn't interested in the politics or the goal. He simply supported his friend, a priceless bond that money cannot purchase. Junwoo lets out a small laugh, observing that most people would find it absurd for someone to sacrifice a limb for another person. He considers himself a rational individual, yet he completely recognizes the immense power of such irrational devotion. He points to Dunhine's foul, asserting that the man he found possesses the invaluable trait of fighting alongside his comrades. This is precisely the kind of loyal asset he requires for the impending conflict. A sinister grin crosses his face as he explains that Dunhine experiences his friend's injuries as if they were his own. This makes him effectively a human shield with a severe vendetta, which is an extremely dangerous tool. The camera pulls back for a wide view of the school building as a gloomy rain begins to descend. The dismal weather perfectly reflects the emotional state of the two ex-legends who are about to cross paths. Dunhine sits by himself on an outdoor bench, appearing thoroughly exhausted. He radiates an aura of self-inflicted misery, embodying his own frustrations. He stares blankly at his own hands, sighing heavily with deep fixation. He looks like a man who has completely given up, living entirely in the enormous shadow of his former self. He produces yet another deep sigh and tosses his lighter onto the concrete with a distinct clatter. He looks absolutely finished with everything, not just for the day, but perhaps permanently. A lone seeker suddenly halts directly beside the fallen lighter. Panjun has made his entrance, gliding into Dunhine's personal bubble of anguish without making a whisper. Dunhine raises his head, revealing a face covered in fresh contusions and lacerations from the recent assault. He looks genuinely shocked, as if he's encountered a spectral figure from his history. Panjun hovers above him, his face obscured by shadow. They remain locked in silent eye contact for what feels like an eternity, the weight of the complicated history and shared misery palpable between them. The silence stretches on, as Dunhine gazes at Hanjun with a blend of disbelief and possibly a glimmer of expectation. It's a profound, emotional encounter where a library of unspoken history hangs in the space between them. Panjun breaks the tension with a simple, "Pleasure meeting you, Kim Dunhine." His voice remains completely collected. While seemingly an ordinary greeting, coming from him, it's basically an official announcement that the new round has begun. Dunhine inquires whether the gossip is true, asking if Hanjun really intends to dismantle this entire institution. He's heard the whispers, but struggles to believe Hanjun would actually return to this awful situation. Hanjun counters with a simple, yet unsettling query, asking Dunhine if he genuinely believes such a feat is achievable. He's probing Dunhine, searching for the slightest remaining trace of the legendary fighter in this defeated shell of a person. Dunhine turns his head away, sighing about the significant increase in Nexus's power since the last encounter. His confidence has vanished. He now believes their resources and sheer numbers make them unbeatable. Dunhine mumbles that the battle is over and they have simply failed, his tone dripping with resignation. He has already fully embraced his new position as a victim in this world. Panjun responds decisively with no, his expression suddenly intense. He clarifies that he didn't return to drown in nostalgia, but rather to completely alter what's coming next. Panjun rises to his full height, looking completely resolved as he proclaims that victory will be theirs this time around. The familiar spark of rebellion has returned to his gaze, and it's surprisingly contagious. Dunhine stares back at him with pure astonishment. He is acutely aware of the price required for fighting Hanjun's battles, and he doubts he has any remaining assets left to gamble. Panjun strides away confidently, stating he never enters a fight unless victory is guaranteed. He considers himself a lifelong winner, even when the deck was stacked against him. Dunhine reminds him that this exact winning mentality left him permanently crippled. He nurses his resentment, using his injury as a convenient excuse to avoid returning to the conflict. Panjun continues working without turning back, his silence serving as a greater challenge than any words. He presents Dunhine with a choice, either remain broken or find the courage to stand up. He pauses briefly, instructing Dunhine to watch closely for what comes next. He has officially declared war on the school and generously offers his former companion a front row seat to the upcoming destruction. Mankind Shawl observes them from a classroom window above. He gazes down at the two historical figures, wondering exactly how much chaos Hanjun plans to cause. Panchal scoffs contemptuously, dismissing them as fools for thinking they can still accomplish anything. He finds the idea of Hanjun partnering with an injured individual to be entirely laughable. He turns away from the window, his expression dripping with disdain. He sees himself as the undisputed authority of this school and refuses to allow two former legends to threaten his dominance. The final shot captures Kind Shawl working through the hallway, followed closely by his enormous crew. He orders his subordinates to prepare to take down Park Hanjun. The new era has begun, setting a collision course between yesterday's legends and today's monsters. We transition to a shot of a hospital building under a bleak, nighttime sky. When the scene changes to this location, you know the prognosis is unlikely to be positive. Kim Dunhine sits in a doctor's office, looking completely depleted. The doctor starts by complimenting his efforts in physiotherapy, but a heavy sense of impending bad news hangs in the air. The doctor leans forward across his desk, looking extremely serious. He warns Dunhine that physical therapy isn't enough, and delaying surgery further will drastically reduce his chances of full recovery. Dunhine stares blankly as the doctor urges him to find a larger hospital quickly. He acknowledges Dunhine's tough circumstances, which everyone knows means he's broke, but emphasizes that anything's better than permanently losing his mobility. Dunhine falls completely silent, his features overshadowed by desperation. He is caught between a critical health issue and a complete lack of money, and the immense pressure of the situation is crushing him. Dunhine manages a faint murmur of agreement as he laboriously exits the office. The sound of his injured leg dragging on the floor perfectly illustrates his deep emotional distress. An overhead camera view shows Dunhine standing alone in the center of a dark alleyway, flick with rain. The downpour perfectly reflects his mental state, leaving him feeling cold and isolated. A shoe enters the frame, followed by a voice calling out to Kim Dunhine. The hunter has located its target in the darkness. Dunhine looks up, raindrops running down his red hair. He appears utterly exhausted, yet still manages to fix the new arrival with a sharp, defensive glare. He is Mankind Shawl, looking pleased with himself as he stands dry under an umbrella. He casually asks what the doctor said, clearly pretending to care about the answer. Kyunchul gives a nasty, condescending grin, asking if Dunhine has improved at all. He has clearly shown up to make things worse while his victim is at his absolute lowest point. Danhan refuses to participate in the meaningless conversation, keeping his head down. He demands Kyunchul reveal his true purpose, knowing he only shows up when he intends to shatter someone's resolve. Kyunchul chuckles, mocking Danhan's bruised face while claiming he still considers him a friend and feels sad for his current state. This individual perfectly defines what it means to be a fake friend. We get a chilling close-up shot of Kyunchul's eye as his expression turns predatory. The performance of friendship has officially ended. Kyunchul stands tall, announcing he is there to assess the state of the former high school leader's leg. He is essentially reviewing the damage he inflicted to ensure his victim remains completely incapacitated. He mentions that Danhan had enjoyed a friendly chat with Park Han-jun earlier. This serves as a terrifying confirmation that the organization maintains constant surveillance, even during private moments. Kyunchul flashes a dark, twisted smirk and delivers a horrifying promise, stating that if Danhan somehow manages to recover, he will simply break the leg again. He is literally guaranteeing to reinflict the injury. Danhan stands in the pouring rain, staring down at the ground. He asks Kyunchul a simple question, wondering why he chose to come alone. Kyunchul scoffs dismissively, telling Danhan that he would be unable to challenge him even if his life were completely healed. He is asserting absolute authority, making it clear that Danhan no longer poses any threat. The close-up focuses on Kyunchul's face, his eyes fixed on his target like a hungry wolf. He is done with torquing. Kyunchul delivers a brutal psychic directly to Danhan's face. The bone-shattering force of the impact is perfectly captured on screen. Danhan is sent flying backward, his body skipping across the slick asphalt like a stone skimmed across a lake. He lands on the ground with tremendous force. Kyunchul hovers over him, laughing hysterically as Danhan struggles to catch his breath. He's thoroughly enjoying the spectacle of bullying someone incapable of fighting back. He flashes a cruel, satisfied grin and drops a harsh insult at Danhan. The utter lack of respect in this moment is reaching record-breaking heights. Danhan grits his teeth, blaring up from his position on the ground. Kyunchul twists the knife further, asking if Danhan still imagines himself as an important part of the old crew. Kyunchul advises against having any silly notions of rebellion. He reminds Danhan of when Park Han-jun was forced to get on his knees, deliberately using his friend's pain to crush Danhan's spirit. Danhan is left crawling on all fours, trembling in the pouring rain. Kyunchul coldly delivers a prediction that Danhan will suffer the exact same fate as his defeated leader. He mocks Danhan for choosing loyalty only to end up permanently damaged. In Kyunchul's mind, faithfulness is simply a vulnerability that guarantees destruction. A low-angle shot frames Kyunchul towering over the beaten Danhan. He looks absolutely enormous compared to the broken man huddled on the pavement. Danhan stares up with pure, unadulterated hatred. He spits out the painful truth, accusing Kyunchul of betraying him and Han-jun by joining Nexus. He calls Kyunchul exactly what he is, a backstabber. Kyunchul simply laughs it off, asking if Danhan thinks he's acting like some cartoon villain. He shows precisely zero regret for his treacherous actions. Danhan locks eyes with him and challenges him, asking if he isn't. He refuses to allow Kyunchul to hide behind his smug, nonchalant attitude. Kyunchul exhales slowly, a chilly smirk playing on his lips. He's clearly entertained by Danhan's stubborn persistence against all odds. He begins to work away, telling Danhan to go ahead and believe whatever he wants. He doesn't care about Danhan's opinion because he's already won the fight. He gives Danhan sarcastic praise for continuing to be the cold guy who stayed loyal to his friend. He's openly making fun of the very concept of friendship. Kyunchul offers one final, chilling grin, declaring that he would rather be the bad guy than end up a cripple. It's a harsh dismissal of everything Danhan sacrificed. Danhan is abandoned on the soaking ground, completely shattered. Kyunchul's voice echoes in his mind, suggesting that his loyalty might finally be running out. A close-up on Danhan's face confirms that the despair is real. He has officially reached his breaking point in the middle of the storm. He reaches down and grips his injured leg with a shaking hand, squeezing tightly in an attempt to hold himself together. He's barely keeping his composure. We cut to an exterior shot of Danhan High School in the rain. The gloomy weather perfectly foreshadows the chaos that is about to erupt inside the building. Park Han-jun sits quietly in his new classroom, staring blankly out the window. He appears to be the picture of tranquility just before a massive disaster strikes. Suddenly, the school's public address system crackles to life. The voice says test, immediately capturing everyone's attention in the room. A shot of the wall-mounted loudspeaker confirms the broadcast is beginning. The sound of the announcement feels like a foreboding countdown to disaster. The person on the mic introduces himself as Min Kyunchul. The school's top dog is making a very public play against the new transfer student. Kyunchul announces to the entire school that Park Han-jun, the guy who tangled with Nexus 2 years ago, vowed to destroy them all when he transferred to here. He's basically put a huge target on Han-jun's back. A couple of local bullies in the classroom snicker, calling Han-jun a stupid idiot. They think he's all torque, completely oblivious to the monster sitting nearby. Kyunchul's voice continues over the speaker, asking Han-jun if he truly intends to attack again after they already crushed Danhan. He uses Danhan's defeat to mock Han-jun publicly. We get a close-up on Kyunchul speaking into the microphone, sporting a genuinely nasty grin. He generously admits that Han-jun possesses genuine strength, but then he immediately adds a painful zinger, claiming Han-jun only succeeds by refusing to quit after taking a beating. He's basically labeling Han-jun as an extremely resilient punching bag. Kyunchul declares that he has zero intention of trying to beat Han-jun personally. He's simply far too smart to risk a one-on-one fight against him. Instead, we see a close-up of a student's foot pivoting toward Han-jun. The entire classroom is beginning to shift, preparing to move as a single unit against him. Kyunchul chuckles through the speaker, asking why he would be stupid enough to put himself through that pain. He's dispatching the entire student body to handle his dirty work for him. The hallway was completely packed with students, all converging on classroom 3-4 with a single, verbal intention. It truly resembled an aggressive flash mob. The final panel of the broadcast showed the enormous crowd waiting outside Han-jun's door. Kyunchul's simple last instruction was just, time's up, get him. Suddenly, a huge title card appeared, announcing the special event, the Park Han-jun Rundown. The gauntlet of pain was officially underway. Books. The moment the brawl started, Han-jun was completely engulfed by the horde. He became a chaotic blur of movement, defending himself from a dozen attackers simultaneously while the sound of bones crunching nearly shattered the windows. A student shrieked, asking what was wrong with these guys. As bodies began flying out of the classroom, Hanjun was already converting this supposed rundown into an absolute demolition derby. Hanjun slammed a guy into the steel lockers so hard they buckled on impact. He certainly wasn't pulling his punches, given that the entire student body had decided to gang up on him. He seized another student and drove his face directly into the door with a horrible crunch. The sound of the impact confirmed that every ounce of his stored-up fury was behind each strike. Hanjun delivered a devastating stomp directly onto someone's head, the force of the impact resonating through the very floorboards. He was showing absolutely no restraint or mercy. Hanjun stood over a prostrate figure, his face hidden in shadow and his shirt spattered with crimson. He appeared less like a high schooler and more like a demonic entity fresh out of containment. A student from a different class nervously peered into the classroom entrance, his expression frozen in pure terror. He stammered out a question about the chaos, wondering what exactly the guys from class 7 were up to. He looked inside and witnessed a literal mountain of unconscious teenagers piled up on the floor. It was less a classroom and more a freshly dug mass grave. The narration expressed shock, wondering if he had truly wiped out every single one of them in that brief time. Hanjun had neutralized an entire class in a matter of seconds. We saw a close-up of Hanjun's clenched jaw, his breathing deep and steady despite the exertion. The terrifying implication was that he was merely stretching his muscles. Hanjun stepped out into the hallway, effortlessly working over the growing piles of bodies as though they were just debris. Someone whispered a disbelieving mention of Danyon High as he passed. Hanjun lifted his gaze to the dozens of students still waiting in the hall. His voice dripped with menace as he challenged them to determine which one of them was truly the predator here. A huge wave of students charged forward, screaming at the top of their lungs as they closed the distance. They were hoping pure numbers could somehow take down this monster. Hanjun dove straight into the middle of the crowd, truly resembling a one-man army on a rampage. Someone yelled for him to die, which was ironic, as they were the ones in imminent peril. He landed a brutal elbow strike to a guy's jaw, the impact demonstrating that he hadn't lost any power or precision despite being surrounded by the horde. Hanjun delivered a powerful knee strike directly into another student's face, demonstrating perfect technical precision as he navigated the chaotic mob. We cut back to a completely silent and empty classroom, where Danhyun was sitting with his head bowed. He remained isolated from the massive conflict raging just a few floors above him. The final shot focused on Hanjun in the middle of the brawl, his face covered in blood and sweat. He truly appeared to be an absolutely unstoppable force. But then Danhyun slowly lifted his head, and suddenly there was a new intensity in his eyes. He was completely finished with playing the role of the victim, and the legendary duo was about to reunite. Tune in next time for the fireworks. The rain was absolutely pouring down on Danhyun High, and the gray, overcast sky perfectly mirrored the grim mood for the upcoming disaster inside the school walls. Park Han-jun was a literal one-man wrecking ball in the hallway, sending students flying through the air with every powerful strike. These guys were screaming in terror as the terrifying realization dawned on them that they were trapped with a genuine beast. Han-jun landed a devastating punch directly to a guy's jaw, the impact creating a loud crack that echoed over the chaotic sounds of the brawl. This wasn't a schoolyard fight. It was a precise, systematic dismantling. The close-up showed Han-jun's precise footwork as he planted his sneaker firmly on the tile floor. He was generating maximum power using the environment, causing the tiles to visibly crack under the immense pressure. Han-jun delivered a powerful kick directly to his student's face, causing blood to spray high into the air. He moved with a frightening speed that these low-level goons couldn't even dream of following. The students began to retreat slowly, one of them calling Han-jun a monster in sheer disbelief. They finally understood that being reckless was the exact opposite of Han-jun's fighting style. He was a cold, efficient professional. Han-jun blazed down at the remaining crowd, his face spattered with a mixture of blood and sweat. One of the bullies suddenly felt a sinking dread as he realized Han-jun intended to defeat every single person there. A few desperate students yelled at the others not to panic, urging everyone to grab Han-jun simultaneously. They still held onto the hope that they could win if they could simply pin him down by sheer force of numbers. A couple of brave souls dive-bombed Han-jun, seizing his arms, convinced they had finally snagged the prize. Han-jun, however, was just standing there with a face like a statue, letting them think they had him before he got started. The swarm descended from every angle, arms locking around his waist and shoulders in a frantic attempt to tackle him down. The human avalanche was piling on, aiming to smother him in a messy dug pile. Han-jun glanced down at the poor sapling to his waist, delivering a terrifying, bone-chilling smirk. He gave them a verbal encouragement to proceed, providing a fake feeling of safety before unleashing out a case. He began to unleash short, heavy hammer blows onto the unfortunate souls attempting to restrain him, proving his power wasn't diminished by being grappled. These attackers were having their ribs shattered while simultaneously trying to keep him pinned down. Han-jun then drilled a razor-sharp elbow right into the face of one idiot attempting to pin his arms. He was strategically dismantling the human not with point-blank attacks. He planted a heavy, decisive stomp squarely on a student's foot, the audible crack signaling a new and very painful fracture. He was systematically targeting every vulnerable point they left open. Another attacker shrieked in agony as Han-jun's fist hammered into his stomach. The beast was demonstrating that even when restrained, he remained the most terrifying individual present. Han-jun seized a guy by the skull and slammed his face against the metal lockers with a sickening, heavy crash. He was now weaponizing the very hallway around them. A massive impact rattled the car door when Han-jun delivered the final knockout punch to another student. The roars, terrifying force he was exerting was simply unparalleled. He launched a high, upward kick that connected perfectly with an attacker's chin, sending him reeling back into the terrified mob. Even while surrounded, his balance remained absolutely impeccable. The bully shrieked in terror as Han-jun's fist slammed into his nose, creating a chaotic spray of blood. They were finally realizing that having strength in numbers means nothing if you can't actually touch the guy. Han-jun spun around and delivered a devastating hook punch directly to another guy's temple. He resembled a hurricane of destruction, shifting from one target to another without a moment's pause. A desperate voice from the back screamed at the remaining students, demanding to know how they were letting a single person defeat them all. The collective morale of the mob was completely collapsing as the casualties mounted. Han-jun finished yet another student with a crushing stomp, the sound reverberating through the now quiet sections of the corridor. He had officially neutralized the immediate vicinity. He locked eyes with the next wave of students, his gaze burning with a fierce, murderous intensity. He had completely transformed into a primal monster, and nobody wanted to be the first one to take another step forward. Han-jun unleashed a chaotic flurry of strikes, knocking out 3 additional opponents in an instant. His hands were moving with such speed they appeared as nothing more than a ghostly blur. The three unfortunate thugs were sent flying backward amidst a messy spray of blood and saliva. Panjan had held his position completely, refusing to take even one step back since the battle began. The hallway had been transformed into a complete battlefield, strewn with the unconscious bodies of students who foolishly believed they could stop him. The small number remaining were staring in sheer horror at the massacre. Panjan charged forward once more, his figure appearing as a dark silhouette against the stark fluorescent ceiling lights. He wasn't going to wait for them to approach, he was bringing the confrontation to the next level. He slammed another student onto the ground with a sickening thud, blood immediately staining the pristine white tiles. The corridor was rapidly transforming into something more closely resembling a graveyard with each passing moment. A close-up shot revealed Hanjin's hand, his knuckles completely shredded and dripping profusely with blood. He had obviously pushed his buddy far beyond its breaking point, yet he remained on his feet. Panjin continued his methodical march down the hallway, casually stepping over the accumulating piles of unconscious bodies as if they were nothing more than minor inconveniences. He truly resembled an unstoppable natural disaster. Panjin leaned heavily against the wall, gasping for breath. He was soaked in sweat and splattered with blood, proving that even a rampaging monster eventually reaches its physical limits. A looming shadow fell over him as the next wave of Nexus members finally arrived on the scene. This was a moment of truth. Min Kanshal, the undisputed king of the school, sneered down at Hanjin from the still landing. He taunted Hanjin, asking if the exhaustion had already set in, wearing a ridiculously smug grin. Kanshal stared down at Hanjin with complete disdain. He clearly considered the 100 bodies Hanjin had just defeated to be utterly meaningless, having calculated that Hanjin would exhaust himself for the main event. Kanshal spat directly onto the floor in front of Hanjin, a final display of disrespect right before the true showdown. He was specifically trying to provoke Hanjin into making an impulsive, careless move. He declared that the actual fight had yet to begin, appearing completely unbothered even as his entire school was systematically being demolished. This guy was demonstrating peak sociopathic behavior. Hanjin blade upward, his eyes radiating a weary but lethal determination. He understood this next fight would be an absolute nightmare, yet he refused to back down an inch now. The scene shifted back to the classroom, where Kim Dunhine sat by himself, staring out the window. He could clearly hear the chaos echoing through the hallways, and the look on his face showed his inner turmoil. Dunhine grumbled that Hanjin had completely lost his marbles, convinced his friend was on a suicide mission for challenging every single student by himself. He couldn't understand why Hanjin was repeating this foolish behavior, especially after that disaster from a couple of years back. It was obvious the weight of the past was crushing him. Suddenly, a very fashionable boot stepped into the classroom. Someone important had arrived to see our crimson-haired pal while absolute chaos reigned outside. Seohan, the resident gossip influencer, leaned close and asked Dunhine if he genuinely felt comfortable doing nothing while his best friend was battling for survival. She offered a sunny greeting that felt completely misplaced in the gloomy school atmosphere. Dunhine simply gawked at her, demanding to know exactly who she thought she was. Tapping her chin thoughtfully, Seohan introduced herself as an associate of Hanjun's. She certainly possessed a captivating yet slightly menacing aura. Dunhine eyed her with a weary mix of suspicion and exhaustion, having reached his quota for drama for one lifetime, and wasn't in the mood for games. He averted his gaze, focusing instead on his damaged limb. The vivid reminder of his own failure stung far deeper than any physical punch could ever inflict. Dunhine firmly restated his inability to fight, attempting to stop the discussion before it gained momentum. He had totally surrendered any hope in his abilities. Seohan quickly explained that she hadn't come to recruit him for battle. She had an entirely different objective in mind for this brief encounter. She specified that she simply wanted him to describe the authentic Park Han-jun, attempting to analyze exactly what made the monster tick. She highlighted Han-jun's decision to fight the entire student body, disregarding their explicit instructions to retreat if things deteriorated this much. His refusal to back down truly captivated her. A quick flashback showed Han-jun and Junwoo conversing inside an expensive vehicle, highlighting the stark contrast between a privileged lifestyle and the brutal reality Han-jun willingly selected. Seohan questioned Dunhine, asking if he understood Han-jun's steadfast refusal to give up. She was probing for the underlying truth of their bond. Dunhine recalled Han-jun's statement about wanting to prove he could actually succeed this time around. It had been a serious vow shared between them both. Dunhine's expression twisted in pure torment as he considered that pledge. He felt like he had utterly failed that promise by simply abandoning hope. Flashback showed Han-jun standing tall, his expression radiating absolute resolve. He swore he would emerge victorious this time, and he was currently bleeding profusely to demonstrate it. Dunhine stayed at the floor, his features obscured by the darkness. The crushing weight of guilt was visibly consuming him from within. He heard Kain-chul's phantom voice inside his skull, ridiculing him and dismissing his loyalty as completely worthless. The emotional scars from that betrayal were still raw. He pictured himself lying broken and covered in blood on the wet asphalt, a cripple whose arrogance had finally deserted him. It was a terribly bleak and miserable recollection. Dunhine's hand tightened fiercely around his pants, his knuckles turning ghostly white. He began to stutter, the old rage finally beginning to ignite within him. Seohan stared at him intently and asked if he was certain he wouldn't regret remaining on the sidelines while his closest friend was being pulverized. She was undeniably a master of psychological pressure. Dunhine remained absolutely silent, the gravity of his choice permeating the entire atmosphere. This was a precise moment of transformation for his personality. We returned to Hanjun, whose face was covered in grime and crimson. He appeared ready to drop, yet his gaze remained locked firmly on his opponents. He managed to deliver a desperate, powerful kick to another student. The force of the blow proved he still possessed some fight in his exhausted legs. He violently shoved another individual against the classroom door, delivering one last savage impact. He was eliminating his enemies one after another, even as his own physical strength diminished. Hanjun was gasping for air, sweat and blood coating his chin. He seemed utterly depleted, much like a birthday candle after a particularly enthusiastic wish. A high-angle view revealed the corridor littered with defeated bodies. Hanjun stood in the center of the carnage, a single figure remaining in a literal ocean of his creation. All at once, a measured, taunting round of applause resonated through the hallway. It was the most obnoxious gesture imaginable from someone who hadn't participated in the brawl at all. Hanjun turned his angry glare toward the source of the noise, his expression appearing almost satanic in the stark hallway lighting. He knew precisely who was making that noise. Min Kan-chul sauntered down the stairs, performing a dramatic, sarcastic slow clap. He sneered, remarking that Park Han-jun, predictably, looked completely unruffled and fresh as a daisy. He made a mocking inquiry about Han-jun's solo buddy count, as if comparing the brutal fight to a high-score challenge in an arcade game. Kan-chul flashed a sinister grin and declared that Han-jun's show was over, ready to unleash his elite squad to finish off the thoroughly exhausted legend. Kan-chul dramatically presented Dan Yunhai's elite rankers. Number 5, Jo Soo-yoon, and number 4, Choi Min-wook, stepped forward, looking like actual professionals compared to the sloppy muck. Next up were the real heavy hitters, number 4 Kang Tae-hoon, number 3 Daejul, and finally, the second in command, Dozak, who completely surrounded Han-jun. Kan-chul made himself comfortable on the stairs, explaining to Han-jun that these guys were actual monsters, and he planned to literally watch them rip Han-jun to shreds. Han-jun, looking tiny and fragile, stood in the center of the hallway, encircled by 5 top-tier fighters, panting heavily as the reality of his predicament became clear. Han-jun clenched his fists, adopting a fighting stance, and refusing to surrender, showcasing the truly unbelievable will to survive that Jun-woo had once mentioned. Kan-chul simply erupted in laughter, labeling Han-jun a complete idiot for attempting to resist, convinced that the fight's result had already been sealed. The elite rankers charged simultaneously, their faces twisted into masks of pure aggression, clearly intending to finish the fight, not just engage in a casual brawl. It quickly devolved into a blur of advanced martial arts as Han-jun tried to navigate the onslaught, the loud impact sounds emphasizing their impressive speed. A tight close-up on Han-jun's eyes revealed that his focus was still sharp, as he desperately searched for an escape route from this 5-person ambush. Han-jun barely avoided a kendo stick strike that completely obliterated the wall where his head had just been, confirming that these attackers were not holding back. He succeeded in landing a clean counterpunch on one attacker, only to be immediately struck from the side by another, indicating he was taking significant damage now. Han-jun abruptly halted and glanced back down the hallway, sensing a new presence approaching, the expression of shock on his face speaking volumes. Even Kan-chul, for the first time all evening, looked truly stunned, staring at the far end of the corridor as if he were looking at a specter. An overhead shot revealed the extensive hallway littered with unconscious students, with a lone figure standing at the very end, accompanied by loud and steady footsteps. A side profile revealed the new arrival calling Han-jun's name, a familiar voice dripping with an entirely new level of intensity. The voice declared that Han-jun was incredibly annoying, followed by a close-up on a sharp, focused eye, suggesting someone had just awakened from a deep slumber. It was Kim Dun-han, standing there with his iconic red hair and a heavy club in hand, looking like a complete legend as he complained that Han-jun was having all the fun. A brief flashback showed Jun-woo's open suitcase of cash offered to Dun-han. Apparently, the pity mentioned by Seo-han was exactly the motivation he truly needed. The final image was a moving shot of Han-jun helping a heavily bandaged, crippled Dun-han work, confirming the legendary duo was reunited and Dan Yun-hai was about to learn the true definition of tenacity. To be continued. A wide shot captured Dan Yun-high School beneath a heavy, overcast sky, the gloomy atmosphere perfectly reflecting the intense storm about to erupt inside its hallways. Min Kan-chul and his inner circle of bodyguards casually watched the entrance, looking thoroughly unimpressed as Adun mocked Kim Dun-han for starting another fight, while Kan-chul noted that having both legends appear simultaneously was actually a better outcome. A close-up on Kan-chul's face revealed arrogance beyond measure. He calmly stated they would handle Dun-han and Park Han-jun together, treating two of the city's strongest fighters like an easy afternoon chore. Deeper in the hallway, the war had already begun, with Dun-han in the center, taking on a massive mob of students who screamed in sheer panic as he tore a path right through them. Dun-han stood tall, looking like a complete legend with his fiery red hair and a wooden club, the sound of impact indicating he just delivered a serious beating to the final group. He glanced back over his shoulder, his expression cold and calculating, proving that even with a limp, his powerful upper body strength and proficiency with a weapon more than compensated for it. The hallway was already covered in unconscious bodies as Dun-han held his position, making his presence felt throughout the entire building. One of the Nexus thugs charged ahead, calling Dun-han a weakling trying to seem tough, clearly having missed the crucial memo that a crippled legend remains a legend. Dun-han deflects the blow with casual ease, snatching the attacker's wrist mid-swing. His efficiency makes the thug's movement seem less like fighting and more like a poorly choreographed interpretive dance. Dun-han swings his club horizontally, delivering a devastating impact that snaps the poor fellow's head backward. It looks less like a punch and more like a suggestion to visit an orthodontist and possibly a chiropractor. The thug staggers away from the impact, looking completely disorganized. Dun-han, meanwhile, has already moved on, treating the previous attacker like yesterday's trash and focusing on his next target. He grabs the guy firmly, executing a vicious slam that drives the man's face directly into the tiled ground. This isn't a contest of skill. It's more like a particularly brutal case of a floor meeting a face. While holding onto his victim for stability, Dun-han launches a powerful vertical kick. The satisfying sound effects confirm that none of his legendary kicking strength has disappeared, much to the detriment of his target. The tight close-up shows Dun-han's gritted teeth as he pushes himself past the absolute breaking point. The sheer effort to fight through his injury is evident, yet his iron willpower keeps him enduring despite his body's protests. He transforms into a dizzying blur, spinning and wielding his weapon through the entire cluster of attackers. The echoes of impact reverberate throughout the hall, confirming that he's single-handedly managing this unruly crowd. We are presented with a tight shot of a large, blood-covered fist. Pan-jun has officially arrived, bringing his own brand of chaos. The monster has finally come to assist his comrade. Pan-jun, wearing his dark red shirt, is absolutely laying waste to the group of thugs in front of him. The impacts are deafening, sounding as if he's physically punching people straight through the metal lockers. The two legends finally join forces, fighting side by side and clearing the entire hallway of Nexus members. This terrifying synergy is a perfect example of two guys who have survived hell and now apparently want to bring it to everyone else. A random survivor in the background is having a full-scale meltdown, demanding to know how any of this is happening. He simply cannot comprehend how a worn-out guy and an injured cripple are systematically dismantling an entire school's organization. Pan-jun winds up a punch with enough kinetic energy to stop a speeding freight train in its tracks. The surrounding crowd is utterly bewildered in a thought bubble, wondering exactly where these two acquired such ridiculous power. Dunhine mirrors the motion exactly, swinging his stick with a terrifying intensity. They are operating in perfect sync, moving together like a single, unstoppable two-headed hydra of pure destruction. They are fighting back to back, creating a 360-degree do-not-enter zone around themselves. It truly doesn't matter how many warm bodies Nexus throws at them. They cannot penetrate this defensive fortress. They pause for a mere split second, standing back to back to gasp for air amidst a literal ocean of unconscious thugs. This iconic image perfectly demonstrates how deep the partnership truly runs. The tight close-up reveals both of them covered in blood and gasping heavily, showing they are dangerously close to their physical limits. Nevertheless, their eyes remain full of an intense, fiery determination. Panjun glances downward, muttering a heartfelt apology for past events. He's finally making amends, and you can almost feel the heavy emotional burden carried by that simple word. Dunhan looks off to the side, confessing that he blamed Hanjun constantly while living with his injury. This marks the first time he's being completely honest about the profound resentment he has carried. Hanjun turns to leave, noting that Dunhan would never have engaged in that fight if he truly believed they would lose. He's directly challenging Dunhan's memory of the loss that ultimately broke him. Panjun lowers his head with a somber expression, recognizing that Dunhan literally sacrificed his legs for the shared cause. He has been carrying the immense guilt of his friend's injury every single day since. Dunhan gives him a weary look and clarifies that he understands it wasn't actually because of Hanjun. He is finally letting go of the anger and realizing they were both simply victims of the larger system. He looks Hanjun directly in the eyes and confesses that he merely wanted someone to blame because facing the truth was too painful to process. This marks the exact moment the friendship finally begins to mend. Panjun offers a small, incredibly rare smile upon hearing Dunhan's confession. For a man who normally looks like he just lost a bet with a grim repo, this represents a tremendous moment of emotional relief. The heartfelt moment is immediately shattered by Kain Chol, who steps forward and declares their emotional bonding to be a complete waste of time. He's clearly done with watching from the sidelines and intends to finish everything now. Kain Chol looks completely unhinged as he screams that if they want to commit suicide, we'll certainly facilitate it. He unleashes his entire aura, creating an atmosphere that is truly terrifying. Dunhan offers Hanjun a confidence smirk, looking like his old self for the first time in what feels like forever. He is absolutely unfazed by the school's supposed top dog. Dunhan turns to face Kain Chol, aiming his club and declaring that this particular challenge belongs to him. He is claiming the final boss for himself to prove that his tenacity has not dwindled. Kain Chol ignores a response completely, lunging forward with a massive knee strike that completely shatters the floor beneath him. This guy is, without a doubt, a certified monster. Kain Chol gives off a savage glare as he begins his assault in earnest. He is far from a standard schoolyard bully. He is a high-level martial artist who fights with deadly intent. Dunhan narrowly dodges a lightning-fast kick, the air displacement sounding like a near miss. The sound of it whizzing past confirms he almost had his head taken off right there. Kain Chol kept up his assault, yelling insults at them for imagining they could possibly win or even escape the situation. He was busy torning and taking them apart simultaneously. He drove a vicious knee strike right into Dunhan's abdomen. The air audibly exploded from Dunhan's chest cavity as the blow made him collapse forward in agony. Kain Chol immediately followed with a powerful maneuver, launching Dunhan spinning across the room. His brute force was clearly in a completely different league from the weaklings they had faced before. Dunhan slammed into the floor with a bone-jarring impact that rattled the entire building. He was in terrible condition already, while Kain Chol hadn't even worked up a slight glow. Kain Chol hovered above his defeated foe, shouting in victory. He reveled in the humiliating spectacle of the legendary Dunhan reduced to scrambling on the ground once more. The close-up shot revealed a wide, frightened eye. Dunhan was clearly recognizing the immense difference in strength between them. This battle was rapidly proving to be unwinnable. Dunhan remained on his hands and knees, fighting for breath and looking utterly devastated. The spark was diminishing in his gaze as he finally accepted that his physical self simply couldn't match his resolve. Panjun appeared, carefully securing a blue fabric wrap around his fist. He had witnessed sufficient cruelty, and he refused to permit his friend to be permanently injured for a second time. Panjun rose to his feet, casting an intimidating shadow over the gymnasium. He seemed colder and more concentrated than ever, having fully committed to the conflict. Panjun put a hand on Dunhan's shoulder, promising him to hold on for just a moment, because everything would be finished quickly. He was clearly assuming control of the battle, sounding like he was planning something illegal. Kain Chol immediately started insulting Dunhan again, calling his attempt at heroism another ridiculous choice. He completely failed to understand the powerful bond connecting these two individuals. Dunhan looked down, whispering stupid thing to himself. The fury was visibly beginning to bubble up inside him as he absolutely rejected being labeled a failure once more. Dunhan lifted his head with a terrifying stare, telling Kain Chol that someone lacking friends would naturally view loyalty as idiotic. He had successfully reignited his fighting spirit. Kain Chol looked utterly disgusted by the discussion of friendship, dismissing Dunhan as a pathetic loser fit only for the dumpster. He was finished with words and prepared to end the battle immediately. He launched a massive, wide swing, shouting about who exactly was pitiful now. The astonishing quickness of his attack was truly impressive. Dunhan managed to deflect the punch with his wooden club, but the incoming power was so immense that the wood began to literally fracture. He was holding onto his defense by a thread. Kain Chol was truly stunned by the block. His eyes bulged as he questioned what had just occurred, unable to fathom that Dunhan possessed any remaining strength to halt his strike. Dunhan unleashed a rapid sequence of strikes with the fractured tip of his stick. He was clearly emptying his fuel tank into the single, frantic counter deck. Close-up showed a heavy foot stomping the ground with a sound that reverberated throughout the entire school building. This had officially transformed into a clash of titans. Dunhan connected with a crushing strike right on Kain Chol's jaw, causing him to cry out in genuine pain. It marked the first instance tonight where the Alpha Predator had sustained real damage. Kain Chol managed to seize Dunhan's arm. His features contorted in a furious expression as he snarled in irritation. He understood that he could no longer afford to treat this person as a game. Kain Chol utilized his greatest size and weight to sling Dunhan across the space. Dunhan went flying right through a glass divider, which exploded into a deafening cascade of shards. Dunhan slammed into the floor in a shower of broken glass and rubble, making a huge sound. The impact would certainly have finished a standard person, yet he continued to draw air. Kind Chul flashed a twisted, wide grin, plainly delighting in the sight of his rival being systematically destroyed. He was completely unhinged and obsessed with this level of brutality. He glanced at the shattered pieces of Dunhan's stick, warning him that he would now need to fight with only his fists. Kind Chul assumed Dunhan was finally vulnerable and without options. Dunhan was breathing heavily, his shirt thoroughly drenched in a mix of blood and sweat. He resembled someone who had just completed a cross-country race through a combat zone. In a classic move of heroic defiance, Dunhan began tearing his shirt apart. He was casting off his remaining composure and getting ready for serious, no-holds-barred confrontation. He ripped the garment entirely off and tossed it away, defiantly asking Kind Chul, who exactly decided that. He had officially transitioned into a state of uncontrolled rage. Kind Chul simply guffawed at the display, proclaiming it hysterical. He remained certain that Dunhan was merely a punchline he hadn't fully delivered yet. Dunhan launched himself forward once more, his bay torso covered in abrasions and raw determination. He wasn't the broken man from before, but a person with absolutely nothing left to sacrifice. He tears his shirt off and wraps it tightly around his hand, creating a rough, improvised glove. It's a classic move that screams desperation, proving he's absolutely focused on winning at any cost. He winds up for a massive punch, his muscles straining, preparing to unleash a blow fueled by years of pent-up anger. This isn't just a physical attack, it's an emotional explosion. Dunhan lands a direct and heavy strike to Kind Chul's face. The bone-jarring impact of the hit is intense, like a train hitting a brick wall. He doesn't hold back, raining a relentless flurry of punches on the shocked Kind Chul while screaming a demand for him to die. He's literally throwing everything left in his exhausted body. Kind Chul effortlessly snatches Dunhan's arm mid-swing with a loud crack. Even now, his raw physical strength is still enough to completely halt Dunhan's desperate momentum. A close-up shows Dunhan's face, stunned and completely exhausted. His all-or-nothing assault was just casually blocked by a guy who still hasn't broken a sweat. Kind Chul delivers a crushing knee strike directly to Dunhan's stomach, putting his full body weight behind the blow. That sound indicated this match was probably over. Dunhan is pinned against the lockers, Kind Chul's face right in his own. He looks subtly spent, his body finally failing after the ridiculous amount of effort he just put in. Kind Chul mockingly tells him that neither of them are the people they used to be. He's a new king of this territory, making sure the old one knows exactly who holds the power. Kind Chul delivers a final, sickening headbutt that snaps Dunhan's head backward with a loud crack. It's the ultimate disrespectful finishing move to end the fight. Dunhan's eyes roll back from the force of the hit as he groans in total agony before everything fades to black. He gave his genuine all, but the skill gap was simply too vast to overcome. Kind Chul stands there absolutely panting for air, looking like he just finished a marathon through a meat grinder. Meanwhile, Dunhan is barely conscious on the floor, looking like a total goner after the brutal exchange. Kind Chul leans over, his face a mess of blood and bruises, and delivers a chilling warning. He tells Dunhan that the price for what happened today will be astronomically high, confirming he's an exceptionally sore loser. The brute starts to walk away, his heavy footsteps echoing through the silent hallway. He thinks he successfully finished the job, leaving the defeated warrior to rot on the floor. But suddenly, Dunhan calls out from the ground, his voice raspy but full of venom. He asks exactly where the gorilla bastard thinks he's going. The trash talk while dying is legendary. Kind Chul stops dead in his tracks, his eyes wide with shock and pure rage. He turns back, calling Dunhan a ghastly wretch for still being able to torque after taking that kind of beating. Then we get the massive title drop. It's not over yet. You can almost hear the boss music ramping back up for a truly unexpected round 2. Kind Chul loses all control and launches a brutal punch right into Dunhan's face with a loud crash. He screams that the not over yet torque is completely delusional nonsense. He continues the assault, landing another heavy blow while mocking Dunhan's helplessness. He demands to know what a guy in that condition could possibly do against him. Despite the pummeling, Dunhan slowly pulls himself into a kneeling position, blood dripping from his chin. He stares at the floor and repeats those 3 terrifying words again. It's not yet. Kind Chul delivers a point-blank strike that looks like it should have snapped Dunhan's neck. The sheer, terrifying stubbornness on display here is actually unbelievable. The impact is so tremendous it sends Dunhan spinning through the air in a blur of motion. Kind Chul is putting his entire weight into making sure this guy stays down for good this time. Dunhan hits the ground with a sickening thud, sprawling face first on the cold tiles. It really looks like this is finally the absolute end of the line for our persistent friend. We see a close-up of Dunhan's face against the floor, his eyes completely glazed over as he struggles just to stay conscious. He has been pushed far past the breaking point. Kind Chul stands over him, puffing and puffing, looking down at the wreckage he created. He is finally satisfied that the nuisance has been definitively put down. He spits out one last insult, calling Dunhan a bastard with a look of pure contempt. He's completely drained but believes he has finally won this long and frustrating war. Kind Chul turns around and starts walking away again, his heavy footsteps signaling that he's done with this whole mess. But then, the voice from the floor stops him cold once more. Dunhan asks where in the world he thinks he's going, his voice sounding more like a low growl from a basement than a human being. This guy is literally refusing to stay down, like a broken action figure. Kind Chul freezes completely, his back to the camera, looking exactly like he just saw a ghost. The sheer disbelief coming off him in this panel is almost palpable. Dunhan actually begins pushing himself back up, his face covered in blood but his eyes full of an insane, unyielding fire. This dude's tenacity is genuinely starting to make me nervous. His fingers scrape across the tiles, desperately pulling his buddy back toward the brawl. He insists, with a truly inspiring amount of stubbornness, that the fight isn't finished yet. Kind Chul twists his head around, and wow, he looks completely unhinged. He's starting to figure out this isn't just a regular person, but rather a stubborn force of nature that simply refuses to lose. Kind Chul shouts at him to quit as he launches forward for one final, desperate haymaker. He's completely panicking, trying to shut Dunhan up before the vibe shifts completely against him. Dunhan roars like a beast as he prepares to meet the attack head-on. He's not even bothering to dodge, instead embracing the chaos for one last, all-or-nothing maneuver. In a spectacular panel of action, Dunhan lands a massive flying punch that smacks right into Kind Chul's chin, showering the area with gore and saliva as the fight turns for good. Kind Chul recoils completely stunned, wondering inwardly if his face has been sliced open. He's astonished that someone who looked like a dormant just moments prior could possess this kind of power. The tight shot shows Don Hein's crimson-seared fist as he retracts it. He isn't simply striking. He's physically carving his way through the enemy's defenses. Refusing to pause for a moment, Don Hein sprints forward again, a streak of ginger hair and unfiltered rage. He's achieved a truly destructive, almost hypnotic flow state. His features are caked in sweat and blood as he announces he'll see this through to the finish. He's doing it for his pledge to Hanjun, which demonstrates incredible dedication. He pulls back a huge fist, his arm resembling a powerful mechanical cylinder. The roar force practically jumps from the illustration as he gets ready to finish things permanently. Don Hein snatches Kai Kal's shirt and informs him that a person like him wouldn't understand why losing isn't an option when his buddy's reputation hangs in the balance. He shoves his face close to Kai Kal's, radiating pure menace. He confesses that if he fails now, he simply cannot face Park without feeling embarrassed. Don Hein lands a savage, skull-rattling headbutt that reverberates through both bodies. This is a definition of gritty, no-holds-barred combat. Kai Kal feels disoriented. His neck snaps backward as his eyes begin to spin. He remembers Hanjun's determination and understands that Don Hein possesses the exact same frantic energy. Don Hein retracts his fist for the decisive blow, as a voiceover reiterates his singular concentration. He has completely zeroed in on his target with perfect accuracy. The punch finds its mark precisely on Kai Kal's mug. It's a solid, powerful impact that officially concludes this feature presentation. Kai Kal stumbles backward, blood gushing from his nose as he attempts to grasp that he's being completely taken apart. The schoolyard monarch has officially begun his descent. The close shot focuses on Kyunchol's gaze as his senses begin to dim. He understands that the person facing him holds a level of genuine peril he failed to recognize. A quick sequence reviews Don Hyen's backstory, his fractured limb, the downpour, the ridicule, and how all that suffering is being funneled into this one triumphant instant. Don Hyen's stare glows with an almost supernatural intensity. He has completely exceeded his boundaries, driven only by the overwhelming need to uphold his word. He tightens his hand once more, his knuckles resembling solid metal. He's preparing a hit powered by every past defeat he's endured in his life. Don Hyen executes the definitive, final blow, the sound of the collision echoing like a rifle shot down the corridor. We receive a disturbingly precise close-up of Kyunchol's features as they deform from the sheer impact. That isn't just a simple knockout. That's a full-on factory reset. Kyunchol launches backward with a powerful slam, landing on the ground like a sack of rocks. The mythical top fighter has officially lost his crown. Don Hyen looms above the fallen figure, panting heavily with bowed head. He is entirely beaten up, smeared in sweat and crimson, but he remains the last man standing. A focus on his lower body reveals one limb, clearly the damaged one, trembling violently from the effort. He forced his broken physique to achieve a miracle, and it paid off. A tight shot captures Don Hyen's face as he struggles to recover his breathing. He appears totally exhausted, like someone who just traded their entire essence for the single victory. He notices a sound from behind and begins to pivot. His defense is still active even though he can barely stand upright. He's prepared to continue fighting if necessary. It turns out to be Park Hyun-jun, the main character finally meeting up with his companion, looking just as fierce and resolved after completing his own ordeal. Hyun-jun gazes at Don Hyen with a blend of admiration and concern. He has witnessed the fallout and fully understands the sacrifice his buddy made to secure that victory. The hallway looked like a particularly messy horror movie set, filled with unconscious Nexus members. Hyun-jun looked less like a high schooler and more like a grim reaper who just finished his shift. Don Hyen began to trip over his own feet as the fight's adrenaline finally evaporated. He mumbled something about Hyun-jun being completely insane for pulling off the victory before gravity claimed him. Before Don Hyen could faceplant on the linoleum, Hyun-jun was there immediately to grab him. This awkward rescue sealed the friendship with a powerful, slightly bloody, penjik. Don Hyen used Hanjun as a human crush, both gasping for air in the suddenly silent hall. Battered and bruised, they had successfully reclaimed the territory from the local Bullies. Hanjun managed a small, exhausted smirk. It was the first time he'd let any feelings show, and honestly, a moment of satisfaction was absolutely earned. Hanjun teasingly referred to Don Hyen as a broken fool and asked about the grin. Don Hyen just laughed through the bleeding, relieved to finally contribute to the fight alongside his friend. The pair began to limp away down the lengthy, body-littered corridor. They left a path of devastation in their wake as they hobbled toward the exit. A screen featuring fluffy white clouds and the triumphant words, "Good job," popped up, offering a much-needed moment of calm after the bloodbath. They truly deserved the praise. Unfortunately, the piece lasted about 2 seconds. A new person, Lee Si-jang, the actual 34-year-old head of the gang, walked in, surveying the destruction. He quipped, "What exactly happened here?" He wondered aloud if Kain Shal had caused all this, or if it was actually Park Hanjun. The name had clearly reached his ears, and he found the rumors intriguing. Si-jang glanced around the wrecked classroom, sarcastically mentioning how appealing the school looked now thanks to a single individual. He was surprisingly calm about such a huge defeat. He let out a deep, annoyed sigh and flashed an unsettling smile. It was clear he wouldn't let this public embarrassment slide without delivering some serious consequences. He commanded his top-tier enforcers to grab Hanjun and fracture specifically 3 parts of his body. The exactness of the requested punishment was genuinely chilling. Si-jang started moving, his footfalls heavy with authority. He offhandedly told someone nearby, "Don't do that," likely preventing one of his underlings from being too impulsive. He paused, looking perplexed as a different group advanced from the other end of the hall. The corridor was quickly becoming congested with major figures. A sharply dressed man with glasses, Junwoo's legal representative, emerged into view. They proposed that the teenagers settle their differences while the grown-ups managed the actual negotiations. The lawyer appeared totally unfazed as he suggested a temporary truce for the students. Lee Si-jang stared back, instantly recognizing that Hanjun possessed significant financial and legal resources. Sejun fixed the lawyer with a penetrating, unreadable stare. He was calculating the danger of challenging someone capable of affording a high-end legal team. The scene shifted to the quiet, empty corridor, where the post-fight lull was abruptly replaced by a tense, high-stakes business negotiation. Sejun commented that Hanjun apparently had deep pockets. He understood that the fighting had moved from physical violence to financial power. He plopped down in a student's chair, sarcastically inquiring whether legal precedent forbade beating up wealthy individuals. He was clearly a pragmatist who wasn't intimidated by the legal system. A heavy black briefcase suddenly hit a nearby desk with a sharp thud. The official negotiation between the adults was now commencing. Jungwoo's spokesman sat opposite Sejun, declaring that he intended to be blunt. He appeared prepared to propose a deal that couldn't possibly be rejected. A close-up showed the lawyer adjusting his spectacles. He announced that he had brought something specifically chosen so Sejun wouldn't feel let down. We zeroed in on the lawyer's eye, which appeared remarkably keen and menacing. This man was truly a predator wearing business attire. The final image showed Lee Sejun's face breaking into a wide, ravenous smile as he saw the briefcase's contents. Panjun's little war had just received a significant injection of cash. To be continued. Lee Sejun peered into the open briefcase, acknowledging that Jungwoo was more than just a wealthy child playing around. He conceded the guy understood negotiation, but then clarified that he only took payment in the good stuff. He bent closer, narrowing his eyes at the contents with a puzzled expression. He tried to decipher precisely what kind of strategy Jungwoo was executing with all these documents. The briefcase was packed with folders, one specifically marked Danyon High School immediately attracting his attention. This wasn't cash. This was something far more menacing. The case held more than just documents. There were photographs of secret gatherings and hardware like hard drives and optical discs. This was essentially a jackpot of potential blackmail information. Lee Sejun flips through a yellow folder, his face turning pale as he realizes his entire life story is being treated like a bargain bin biography. Baemjun, the legal, adjusts his specs and drops a bombshell, noting that the contents of this file will be tomorrow's front page sensation. Flashbacks reveal Danyon High was merely a training camp for young thugs, effectively turning innocent pupils into expendable tools for organized crime syndicates. Lee Soo-jang sweats bullets as his embezzlement schemes from his school coffers are exposed, realizing his untouchable status has expired faster than milk in summer. Between illicit real estate deals and massive tax avoidance, the lawyer shows he has enough scandalous evidence to bury this guy a dozen times over. With the boredom of a grocery shopper, the lawyer invites Lee Soo-jang to point out any omissions, fully aware he holds the man's destiny tightly. Plumped in his seat, Lee Soo-jang whimpers in total defeat, clearly regretting that he brought a butter knife to this ruthless legal machine gunfight. He glares at the lawyer with weaponized intensity, silently weighing whether a return to primitive violence might salvage his rapidly disintegrating legal standing. Surrounded by hired goons, he launches a final pathetic attempt at intimidation to escape the crushing weight of these legal revelations. Bam Queen remains utterly unfazed, casually wondering if the boss believes he possesses 9 lives while making his thugs look like total kindergartners. He calmly muses on the futility of murder, knowing he is merely a small mouthpiece for a far more powerful and vengeful corporate machine. Staring Lisa down, the lawyer asks who wins when a street gang meets a legal army, essentially bringing a nuclear warhead to a street brawl. He notes that a homicide charge would be quite inconvenient for a man already juggling a dozen felonies, trapping Lisa in a lethal stalemate. Lee Soo-jang looks ready to pop a vein, finally grasping that his crude physical tactics are useless against a system that writes the rules. Clutching his head in pure exasperation, he reaches his absolute limit, clearly defeated by the exhausting mental gymnastics of this high-stakes standoff. The goons wisely retreat, sensing the boss is folded, while the lawyer remains perfectly composed as the room's suffocating tension begins to finally drain. Lee Soo-jang exhales a final, heavy breath of defeat, acknowledging there is no avoiding a surrender to the demands of the ruthless Enmu. He eventually asks for the terms of his surrender, ready to sign away his remaining dignity just to avoid the local prison's lovely accommodations. The lawyer flashes a predatory, chilling grin and claims the request is minor, which is definitely code for something completely catastrophic. The final demand is simple, hand over the entire school, effectively stripping Lee Soo-jang of his power, his money, and his illicit operations. Lee Soo-jang stares blankly into the void, his soul clearly vacating the premises after losing his entire empire in one miserable, lone afternoon. The scene shifts to a sunny hospital exterior, signaling that while the schoolyard warfare has ended, the long road to healing is just beginning. Panjun sits on a bench looking battered, and Seo-yoon approaches with clear concern, calling his name as if checking for signs of life. Staring in disbelief, she wonders if he is part machine, having expected him to be comatose rather than sitting upright after that brutal fight. She demands to know how he survives a brawl with the entire school, scolding him for being far too durable for his own personal safety. Panjun drops his stoic facade momentarily to inspect his bandaged arm, muttering that he's definitely not fine, showing some rare human weakness. The surgical suite doors creak open with an abruptness that interrupts the chatter, pulling the complete focus toward the impending medical update. The doctor emerges looking completely drained, while Han-jun and Seo-yoon stand frozen, anticipating the crucial update on their friend's survival status. The physician sighs, marveling at how Danyon endured such immense trauma, confirming his reputation as the toughest kid to ever walk the halls. A glimpse into the ICU reveals Danyon hooked to life support, with the doctor admitting he arrived in a state of absolute medical catastrophe. Then the miracle arrives, the surgery proved flawless, and he anticipates a stellar recovery for that busted limb. Han-jun and Seo-yoon finally exhale, relief washing away the stress, marking the first genuine victory since this chaotic saga began. Pan-jun flashes a swug grin, secure in the knowledge that he honored his pact and saved his buddy. Cameras pan over the shimmering city where the OJ Group tower looms, signaling that the next phase of Jungwoo's master plan is active. Lounging at a fancy bar, Jungwoo taps his screen, looking like a guy who just successfully deleted his most annoying browser history. A reporter wraps up her dia, thanking Jungwoo for her interview, blissfully unaware she was just a prop in his elaborate PR charade. She hopes his hollow platitudes inspire the youth, but Jungwoo offers a generic nut, masking his ruthless corporate agenda with practice charm. As she retreats, Jungwoo marks her departure like a hunter eyeing his next conquest, having finished his stage performance for the day. Headlines about Danyon High being a total gangster den are hitting hard as Jungwoo's media blitz systematically torches the competition. He smirks at his phone while scrolling, savoring how he weaponized the truth to win a war that mere fists could never settle. The reporter wanders off as Jungwoo starts to rise, but a sudden intruder enters the bar, shifting the vibe toward total chaos. Jungwoo senses the mood flip and realizes an unexpected guest has arrived, noting his staff would never shift his schedule for some nobody. He pivots to find Kim Ka-won-soo, the Silverlock King of Nexus, standing there clutching a drink with a look of pure mockery. Ka-won-soo wonders aloud if the president himself set up this chat, easily seen through the thin veil of this whole charade. A label identifies him as a Nexus prodigy Kim Kai-won-soo, who looks every bit as lethal as the urban legends claim. Junwoo plays a fake humble executive, bowing to the honor of meeting a celebrity while secretly plotting his next aggressive move. Tae-won-soo lets out a cutting chuckle at the praise, clearly unimpressed by Junwoo's fancy suit or his hidden security detail. They stare each other down in the lounge. Junwoo slumped back while Kai-won-soo looms over him like a storm waiting to break. Junwoo drops the masquerade, asking about the tone and whether Ki-yeon-soo has somehow forgotten the boss he is addressing. Ki-yeon-soo just flashes a relaxed grin, knowing his own street value and totally unbothered by Junwoo's hollow business threats. He remarks that times have changed, acknowledging the tangled history while flexing his current status as a big dog in charge. Junwoo admits the past is dead, claiming they are just a bored CEO and a game of chatting, trying to keep things civil for a second. Ki-yeon-soo sips his cocktail, pretending to respect his superior with enough dripping sarcasm to fill the entire bar. Junwoo notes that his rival knows the game but clarifies he is a vengeful soul, warning he never forgets a slight or lets a grudge slide. He unleashes a chilling glare, declaring he is the new master of Donyeon-hai and officially marking the school as his own turf. Ki-yeon-soo stays perfectly calm, feigning ignorance about the school drama, a master at keeping his true cards hidden from view. He thumps his glass down and prepares to leave, concluding that this pointless meeting has officially run out of steam. Rising with a mukbo, he bids a pleasant farewell, maintaining the polite game of persona right up until the final exit. In a bold act of defiance, he slaps Junwoo on the shoulder while passing, a blatant insult to the man's fragile ego. Ki-yeon-soo sneers with delight as he storks off, having achieved his goal of staring his enemy down and getting the last laugh. He performs one last exaggerated bow, keeping up the charade because he knows he is being watched and loves the spotlight. We watch his back as he struts through the pub with total swagger, knowing the chat finished but the real case just ignited. Chae-in-soo grumbles Junwoo name under his breath while plotting, deciding that the Donyeon takeover will definitely result in severe consequences. A zoom shot captures his wild eye as he issues a grim vow, warning that next time they clash, that poker face will crack. He casts a sinister glance behind him before vanishing into the shadows, signaling that the silver-haired predator is back on the prowl. A side angle shows Chae-in-soo marching into the gloom, looking dangerously sharp while already fixated on his next brutal mission. Back inside, Junwoo exhales a heavy, exasperated breath, finally grasping that his optimistic peace talks were a total waste of time. He glares at his empty mug, reflecting on the lingering anxiety that has festered since the last confrontation 2 years ago. Plumping back, he wonders if his lack of fear is odd, essentially challenging his own nerves while sizing up his old rival. He rubs his face in pure annoyance, admitting that Chae-in-soo's mere presence boils his blood, reigniting a fury more potent than before. A sleek black Benz steers through the midnight streets like a blurry missile, as all major players accelerate toward a violent crash. Inside the car, Chae-in-soo interrogates his partner about whether Hanjin and Junwoo might quit, refusing to underestimate those cunning agitators. He notes that the public provocation demands a crushing response, fully embracing this escalation as a challenge he is ready to meet. Leaning into the receiver with a frigid stare, he orders his men to stay alert because a massive storm is brewing. The final panel zooms in on his icy eyes as he predicts this war will be the biggest in Korean history. To be continued. We view a colossals, high-tech skyscraper lighting up Seoul, serving as the ultimate villain lair where elites scheme in the clouds. Polished dress shoes click sharply against the marble floor, signaling the arrival of someone with enough authority to command this room. The visitor steps into a lavish penthouse filled with high-ranking thugs, prompting a greeting that breaks the silence of this wealthy parlor. Meet Jongdae manager Choi Tae-soo, who acts like a grumpy executive complaining about his schedule rather than a hardened gang boss. Then we have Lee Moon-gil and Kim Jae-hyuk, with the red-haired Moon-gil looking far too chill as he discusses the latest assignments. Cho Cheon-yu hangs by the window with his whiskey, observing the Seoul cityscape as if the high-stakes meeting is merely background noise. The lens shifts to Baek Dun-shin, who looks like a polished boy band star despite being lethal enough to break every bone in your body. Finally, there is the grizzled Nam In-soo, covered in scars and sitting with crossed arms that radiate pure, unadulterated lethal energy. Tae-soo and Moon-gil mock our lead Hanjin, joking about how the Nexus boss squandered his fortune just to ruin Hanjin life. Dun-shin asks who this Park Hanjin guy is, clearly unimpressed and clueless about why all the top brass had to assemble here. Moon-gil offers a condescending smirk at the rookie ignorance, prepared to deliver a history lesson that will shock the smug newbie. Moon-gil erupts in hysterical laughter, finding it hilarious that these fresh recruits have no clue what kind of monster Hanjin truly is. Since the kid only started last year, Moon-gil decides to enlighten him about the terrifying legend they once struggled to contain. Dun-shin grins back, expecting a tall tale, blissfully unaware he is asking about the man who nearly demolished Nexus all alone. A flashback shows Hanjin looking like a lethal shark, as Moon-gil explains how he controlled a territory that Nexus could never breach. The memory continues, showing Hanjin standing proud while the Nexus thugs look like startled kittens. It was a total embarrassment for the national gang because that tiny squad held them off forever. The Seoul brawl gave smaller outfits hope, causing a domino effect of raids against Nexus. Panjun wasn't just a brawler, he was the icon of a rebellion that almost toppled the empire. Moon-gil leans forward, his expression shifting to serious for a change. He tells the crew that if they had silenced Hanjun back then, they wouldn't be sweating in this boardroom today. An unexpected disaster caught the gang completely off guard. Despite using the full muscle of the syndicate, they struggled to find a tidy way to put the beast down for good. A chilling memory displays Hanjun as a dark shadow oozing pure malice. Moon-gil admits that even with superior numbers, Nexus kept getting pummeled in every single encounter. A shattered Nexus ring sits on the floor, proving their authority was crumbling. Moon-gil confesses that their entire organization was teetering on extinction because of one stubborn man. Dun-shin looks genuinely stunned, his eyes wide as the scale of this nightmare hits him. He is starting to realize the loser they are discussing is actually a certified legend. Moon-gil flashes a dark, knowing smirk. He clearly finds it amusing to watch the rookie finally treat this situation with the gravity it deserves. The final flashback shows Hanjun looking like a literal demon from hell. Moon-gil wraps up his story by calling him a maniacal monster, and the art really confirms it. Dun-shin gazes down, letting out a dismissive and condescending chuckle. He tries to mask his obvious nerves by pretending the rumors are just dramatic urban legends. Moon-gil's face turns as cold as a frozen tundra. He does not appreciate the new kid laughing at a threat that nearly destroyed their entire illegal operation. Dun-shin goes too far, mocking the seniors by asking if the stories just confirm they were all weaklings back then. You could hear a pin drop in that tense room. The atmosphere in the suite is suffocating enough to slice with a blade. Dungeon rises to his feet, ready to challenge the veteran branch managers right there. Moondil steps right into his personal space with a murderous grin, telling him to check his ego. He's one syllable away from teaching the punk why he holds rank. A hand grips Moondil's shoulder, stopping the brawl before any furniture gets wrecked. The other managers are clearly fed up with his petty office bickering. Kim Jae-hak tells Moondil to let it slide, noting that the newcomer actually has a point. He is acting as the voice of reason among a group of lunatics. Choi Tisu nods in agreement, looking totally bored by the ongoing drama. He just wants to reach the conclusion so he can return to his busy schedule. Tisu reminds them that those monster tales are 2 years old. He feels like Nexus is overreacting to someone as minor as Park Hyun-jun, a classic villain blunder. Namin-soo, the scarred boss from Inshin, finally decides to chime in. He disagrees, stating there is nothing wrong with being cautious when dealing with a guy like Hyun-jun. A close-up shows Insu gripping a whiskey glass until his knuckles turn bone white. This guy is obviously taking the threat more seriously than his peers. Insu leans back, looking quite menacing as he claims today could become a day of great infamy. He senses that the current peace is about to be shattered. An extreme close-up of Insu highlights the massive scar slicing through his face. He looks like a veteran of the streets just waiting for the next war to erupt. Fresh footsteps into the suite, and the energy in the penthouse shifts instantly. The big boss has finally decided to bless the meeting with his presence. Kim Si-won-soo, the top dog of Nexus, enters with a radiant and entirely fake smile. He greets them all as if he is encountering dear friends at a party. Si-won-soo stands at the head of the lounge, peering down at his seated managers. He asks if this is a full roster, maintaining that cheerful yet terrifying vibe. He sits on the sofa, apologizing for the surprise meeting but promising a nice dinner once they wrap up. He is a truly polished and professional manipulator. The grin vanishes as he drops the bombshell that Park Han-young is on the move. He calmly declares that war is the only logical path, making it official policy. Si-won-soo notes that while it is his call, he felt it was common courtesy to consult his managers. He is effectively forcing them to be accomplices in his next move. The managers listen in stunned silence, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. They know that when Si-won-soo calls for war, the streets will turn crimson. Choi Tisu raises a hand and calls out to his boss, attempting to interject. Even among high-ranking mobsters, there are unspoken levels of authority you do not cross. Tisu pleads for a reality check, questioning if launching an all-out war is truly the wisest play, as he clearly fears the burning consequences and heady prize. Kainsu barely blinks, glancing over to suggest that Tisu is throwing a dramatic tantrum over the trivial matter of one solitary skull falling under their control. The wide-angle frames Kainsu as a monarch surveying his restless peasants, his regal posture making it obvious that he finds dissent highly offensive. The tight shot reveals a shadowy, sinister grin on Kainsu's face, signaling that this guy is definitely harboring some wicked schemes behind his calm mask. Choi Tisu is now sweating bullets, gazing at Kainsu with wide-eyed terror as he realizes he just poked the sleeping bear with a very short stick. The room's tension is so thick you could cut it with a blade, while the deafening silence from his terrified subordinates only turns the heat up further. Standing tall like a looming titan, Kainsu finally drops the act and bellows, demanding to know why they think his grand plans are just a petty fuss. Tisu trembles violently as the crushing aura of pure malice floods the space, proving once again why Kainsu sits comfortably at the top of the food chain. Bowing his head in defeat, Tisu lets sweat drip onto his clothes, utterly crushed and far too scared to lock eyes with the monster he just challenged. Namin-soo finally cuts through the suffocating gloom from across the room, coolly remarking that he hardly considers Kainsu's strategy an overreaction at all. Insu meets Kainsu's gaze with a bold proposal, eagerly volunteering to spearhead the offensive and act as a primary blade against Hanjun. A genuinely wicked smirk spreads across Kainsu's lips, clearly thrilled to see his underlings foaming at the mouth for a brutal, personal bloodbath. Kainsu clasps his ring-adorned hands together, tossing out a loaded inquiry about Insu's confidence, knowing full well the target is no easy mark. He reminds Insu that the legal games from 2 years ago are off the table now, especially since Hanjun has a dangerous new backer lurking nearby. Namin-soo traces the jagged scar on his face with a chilling expression, signaling that he has been rotting away for 2 years waiting for this rematch. Prowling like a starving beast that finally broke its chain, Insu insists he has been ready to tear someone apart since the very second he walked away. Acknowledging the history, Tahansu leaves the revenge to Insu before turning to the rest of the room to demand a final consensus on this conflict. Tisu and Kahanjae instantly pledge their support, desperate to stay on the boss's good side and avoid becoming the next victims of his fury. Lee Moon-gil just shrugs off the gravity of the moment, admitting he is strictly here for the mindless violence and could care less about the complex politics. Even the greenhorn Don Kahan chimes in with a cucky grin, mockingly urging them to bring the heat while clearly underestimating the nightmare he is inviting. Kai-hansu formally wraps up the meeting, tossing the mission to the Inshan branch with a fake, sunny smile that masks his underlying hunger for chaos. Namin-soo exits the room with a wide, deranged grin, muttering about how the long wait to settle his ancient debt is finally reaching its glorious end. Dooming in on his eyes, it is clear that all traces of humanity have vanished, replaced by a singular, frantic desire to burn Park Han-jun's world down. We shift to a pack of roaring bikes tearing through the midnight streets, signaling that the Inshan strike force is already tearing up the asphalt. The motorcycles streak through the industrial zone like neon ghosts, with Namin-soo burning rubber in a desperate, rapid-fire rush toward his bloody retribution. The entire crew screeches to a halt at a lonely lighthouse, the designated meeting spot where the lowlifes and monsters of the city go to plot. A massive mob of thugs fills the area, creating a chaotic, post-apocalyptic vibe that looks like something pulled straight from a dystopian wasteland movie. Punched by a flaming barrel like a demonic commando, Namin-soo rallies his troops, announcing that the moment of ultimate glory is finally upon them. He peers up with a lethal intensity, roaring that today is the day they finally execute Park Han-jun, sending the gathered crowd into a complete frenzy. A wave of shock ripples through the pack, as most of these grunts have only heard rumors of Han-jun and can barely process they are hunting a legend. One chunky brawler in the front row gapes like a landed fish. He wonders aloud if this is legit, looking quite flabbergasted by the broadcast. That large fellow flashes a creepy, jagged smile. He queers if slaying Park Han-jun is truly on the menu, peering far too giddy about homicide. Panjun and his buddy wander the town. They maintain a chill atmosphere despite the chaotic turf battle raging nearby, hearing only their own echoing steps. Panjun maintains his typical stone face, revealing basically no feelings despite the surrounding turmoil. He truly is the human embodiment of a statue. The pair pass a scene wrapped in yellow caution tape, probably leftovers from a recent riot. Neither gives it a single look as destruction is now normal. Junwoo offers a cheeky smirk and checks if the other man tastes some resentment. He is obviously poking old wounds that define the past. Junwoo confesses that, although he is familiar with his partner's tale, he remains a total enigma himself, teasing facts to keep him hooked. He brings up his boatloads of cash and a deep grudge against the grey-haired Nexus boss, Kim Chin-soo. It is a bait that finally snags attention. Panjun halts mid-step, evidently mulling over the query. He is eventually noticing that his associate is a complete puzzle wrapped in mystery. He interrogates whether the plan involves spending riches on a simple vendetta. Our protagonist is at last scrutinizing the intent behind the checkbook. Junwoo waves him closer and declares the moment for honesty has arrived. He escorts his friend to a secluded area to share some secrets. They settle into a tiny kitchenette, which clashes hilariously with the host's mountain of wealth. Tension builds as they prepare for a history lesson. Junwoo delivers a real shaka. The capital financing this conflict is not actually out of his own pocket. He looks solemn starting his admission. Panjun merely glares, his gaze getting sharper. He definitely did not foresee such news from a guy who behaves like he owns the city. He explains that the dough reel belongs to whoever holds the deed to their current location. The plot is thickening faster than cold gravy. Time for a memory lane trip. We witness a junior, way more nerdy version of Junwoo from 2 years prior before life hit the fan. The young boy sprints through a car door as if his existence depends on it. It resembles typical campus intimidation, yet with a unique twist. Junwoo chats about a former comrade. We view them getting targeted by generic hallway bullies who mistakenly believe they are totally untouchable. This buddy was someone from his childhood days, a connection so ancient that its beginning was lost to time. It is a sad intro. They were tight enough to punch each other and giggle afterwards. They were basically brothers in a society that gave zero hoots about them. The shared residence appears calm beneath the moonlight. However, given the narrative, that tranquility is destined to expire very shortly as peace ends. These two were massive computer nerds, at last finishing a huge venture on their portables. They genuinely believed they were ready for wealth. They created an automated market bot, and while they teased its ugly looks, its utility was game-changing. This was their escape from poverty. That software was artistic genius, tracking each global factor and strategizing for all scenarios. They were basically using crystal balls to get wealthy. Junwoo recognizes his pal's mental brilliance, mentioning that he programmed the entire system alone. One was a brain, while Junwoo acted as backup. However, everything shifted once Nexus knocked Tanjin down. That single occurrence vibrated across the municipal crime world, impacting every resident nearby. We witnessed the instant Hanjin fell, a total drubbing that announced the dawn of Nexus' absolute dominance. It was gloomy for anyone outside the gang. Once the alpha was removed, Nexus began feasting on everyone left. The safety Hanjin offered vanished, allowing the local predators to swarm inside. Some Nexus goon traps Junwoo's bestie, asking why he failed to obey their commands. They were making every independent squad grovel for mercy. Here sits Kim Jong-soo, the mastermind pulling every string, viewing the slaughter with an indifferent look. He truly delights in playing God with lives. Those brutes were merciless, crushing anyone congregating without Nexus approval, effectively strangling every bit of freedom left in the room. Junwoo's pal wasn't built for surrendering, so he battled with every scrap of his energy despite the hilariously impossible odds stacked high. Grabbing a chair, he went full berserk on the dunes, refusing to play the role of some pathetic, drinking violet for their amusement. Watching his desperate face while he wailed, one could tell he knew he was completely outmatched yet chose to keep swinging regardless. Junwoo dived into the chaotic melee to shield his brother in spirit, acting like a rabid chihuahua biting at a very grumpy bear, sprinting through school corridors while pursued by an actual mup. The duo engaged in a frantic sprint just to keep breathing today. They naively thought the sheer insanity might outwit the thugs, yet this desperate gamble was basically just a hilarious pipe dream. Nexus ignores every rule in the playbook, demonstrated clearly when they turned a massive building into an oversized, terrifying backyard bonfire. As Junwoo desperately lunged for the inferno to save his buddy, a firefighter tackled him, leaving him subbing like a broken accordion. Chatting Hake's name while the world burned, Junwoo suffered an emotional wound so deep it could basically star in its own horror movie. He later berated the Nexus dunes for their lethal incompetence, though the jerks just stood there looking bored enough to take a nap. Grabbing one by his shirt, he demanded a reason for such vile cruelty, piloting the awkward gap between his grief and their indifference. The thug shoved him away with a wooden board, casually treating a human life as if it were worth less than a soggy sandwich. They blamed the deceased boy for being impolite while they were just puffing on cigarettes, proving their sociopathy is truly world-class. Wailing in pure anguish, Junwoo realized he was trapped among total psychopaths, causing his sanity to pack its bags and leave town. Collapsing amidst the debris, he accepted his total futility. Just a smart kid with some code fighting a nation of armed maniacs. Retreating into a gloomy, trash-strewn hole, he gave up on existence entirely, feeling about as sturdy as a wet paper towel. He confessed to Hanjin that the will to defy Nexus had evaporated, leaving him feeling like a broken toy beyond any repair. Teetering on the figurative ledge, he contemplated checking out Earl since he was currently sitting at his absolute rock bottom. He desperately wanted to delete his miserable history and all the associated drama. A moment so dark it could win a Bloom Award. Suddenly, a flicker on his computer monitor caught his attention, and his eyes lit up with a spark of genuine, unexpected curiosity. He realized the automated trading bot he and Hike constructed had been grinding away, earning cash while he was busy moping around. He decided to peek at the account figures, though he remained entirely unprepared for the shock currently headed for his eyeballs. His hand locked onto the mouse while the data loaded, creating a level of suspense that could make a statue sweat nervously. His mouth hit the floor in disbelief, staring at the glowing display like he had just discovered a ghost doing his taxes. The algorithm transformed the tiny stack into hundreds of millions, turning Hike's final project into a wild, money-branding financial beast. He didn't find joy in the loot, but rather blinding fury that his partner wasn't around to enjoy the massive, unexpected jackpot. The crushing isolation of his massive wealth was agonizing, as the one person who truly deserved to share it was Langan. Leaning forward, his demeanor shifted from a tragic narrative into the cold, calculated vibe of a guy with a new plan. That burning resentment gave him a fresh purpose, and he decided instead of dying, he would much rather watch Nexus crumble. He details plans to burn through Haik's riches to crush Kim Ki-yeon-soo, urging Han-jun to drain every cent since that money was essentially forged in a friend's spilled blood. Pan-jun poses a $1 million inquiry, curious why Jun-woo chose this precise moment to spill his guts, clearly hunting for the hidden agenda behind such sudden honesty. Jun-woo skips the pleasantries, admitting he is mentally twisting Han-jun to trap him, which is a uniquely savage move to pull on a business partner. He aims to shackle Han-jun to the mission by tethering his sense of duty to those dark, haunting memories, ensuring he cannot simply walk away. Our scene shifts back to the modern day where a fancy Rolls-Royce hurtles through the busy urban streets, moving at breakneck speed. Jun-woo chats with So-yeon, cackling about his pathetic sub-story, proving he is a top-tier puppet master who enjoys painting himself as a total loser. So-yeon, busy shoving, mucks his vulnerability while asking if he thinks he has found a new buddy in Han-jun, finding his transparency hilarious. With a sly grin, she reveals the target is Incheon, signaling the board is officially set and the deadly game is now picking up steam. Jun-woo's driver warns that the Incheon dunes charge blindly, noting that guys who overthink every single move often crumble a dense drawer. Mindless street brawling. Jun-woo falls silent, mentally mapping out every potential disaster, as this aggressive strategy feels like a direct assault on his calculated comfort zone. He cracks a wicked smile, completely agreeing with the assessment, because he finds the prospect of a chaotic brawl rather invigorating instead of frightening. Suddenly, a swarm of thugs on motorcycles surrounds the car, pulling off high-speed stunts that are completely reckless and defy the laws of physics. The bike slides across the pavement in a flurry of sparks and metal, transforming the highway into a high-budget action movie set instantly. The thug faceplants right onto the windshield as they screech through traffic, proving these Incheon maniacs have absolutely zero regard for their own safety. The Rolls-Royce weaves through a dense cluster of zooming motorcycles, creating a blurry, frantic mess of twisted metal and high-speed motion. Jun-woo just laughs amidst the wreckage, whispering with manic glee, proving he is essentially an adrenaline-addicted lunatic with a death wish. The driver yells for him to brace as they drift through the ambush, with the situation spiraling into absolute insanity as the attackers close in. The car slams into his side with a bone-jarring impact, shattering the luxury frame and escalating the skirmish to a lethal degree. To be continued. So-yeon is unraveling on the other end, sounding incredibly stressed as she demands answers, sensing that the entire operation has gone completely sideways. Back inside the vehicle, a battered Jun-woo slumps in the rear, looking dazed while the aggressive Incheon gang closes the trap around him. The aerial view reveals the car pinned by bikers, one of whom mucks the cash cow, showing zero respect for the vehicle they just totaled. A rough hand snatches a phone from the floor, showing that these thugs are methodically cutting off his lines of contact during the assault. Namanzu, the scarred Incheon kingpin, answers the call with a nasty smirk, teasingly asking if Seo-han is Jun-woo's lever to rattle her nerves. Seo-han grips her device white-knuckled, while Insu tells her to warn Park Han-jun that this kidnapping was merely bait to lure the big dog out. They have strapped Jun-woo to a bike like some discarded luggage, while Insu warns that they are waiting at the East Incheon Center for the finale. The backers peel away, leaving the glowing phone abandoned on the asphalt, a cold reminder that the billionaire's lifeline has been tossed into the dust. Seo-han screams into the silent phone, realizing in a panic that Jun-woo's trapped in the claws of some truly dangerous, deranged criminals. She hunches over, struggling to comprehend the wreckage of the plans, muttering that the Incheon crew must be insane to try such a stunt. A zoom on her furious face highlights her annoyance, as she insists she is pretty but definitely not his girlfriend, proving she values her status even while panicked. Meanwhile, Pan-jun stalks through the neon night like a vengeful shadow, already locked onto his target and ready to ruin the lives of everyone involved. Pan-jun recalls Jun-woo confessing that his burning rage is his sole lifeline, proving their alliance relies on total wreckage rather than some sweet friendship. The memory lingers at the checkered kitchen table where the calm atmosphere masks the truth that Jun-woo is essentially spending stolen money. Pan-jun stares blankly at the confusing Ren, wondering aloud why Jun-woo chose this specific moment to dump all his heavy emotional baggage. Jun-woo admits without hesitation that he manipulated the story to trap Han-jun, which is honestly a terrifying yet oddly impressive display of honesty. His goal is crystal clear, as he wants to chain Han-jun to the mission of crushing Nexus, essentially crafting a lethal human weapon. A shot of boots hitting pavement signals that Han-jun has absorbed the message and is ready to move on with his dark plan. Sporting a face of icy, unshakable resolve, Han-jun commits fully to this vicious war, swearing he will never look back or quit early. As he starts to stroll away, a loud shriek destroys his cinematic exit, proving that some people just have zero appreciation for dramatic timing. Pan-jun pauses and tilts his head, fearing the frantic shouting of someone clearly desperate to interrupt his brooding time in the street. Seo-han zooms in on her neon bike like a reckless disaster, nearly flattening Han-jun while looking like she carries some truly awful news. She yells for him to hop on while looking remarkably sharp on her ride, making it clear that they have absolutely no time for small talk. She blurts out that Incheon dunes have nabbed Jun-woo, her expression a wild blend of frantic worry as she urges him to get moving. Recognizing the name Incheon, Pan-jun wears a look of grim familiarity that indicates this rescue mission has become deeply, aggressively personal for him. The setting jumps to the East Incheon distribution center, a bleak, sprawling warehouse that serves as a perfect backdrop for a sinister kidnapping. Jun-woo blinks awake with a groggy, beaten face, yet his sharp mind is already scanning the room to figure out his miserable situation. Tied to a chair in the middle of a desolate warehouse, he grumbles to himself about feeling like a character in a cheap action flick. Rows of crates and dusty shelves create a labyrinthine nightmare, making any rescue attempt look like a total headache for his allies. Silence hangs heavy around the motionless conveyor belts as Jun-woo waits in what basically feels like a massive, industrial-sized storage tomb. Surrounded by a bunch of eager Incheon thugs, Jun-woo hackles them, wondering if these are really the infamous dunes he heard about earlier. Despite being restrained in a chair, Jun-woo keeps trash-talking like he owns the place, even as the camera frames him as totally outnumbered. When a gargantuan figure looms toward him, Jun-woo lets out a surprised noise, realizing this is definitely not a typical low-level grunt. Enter Baek Ban-yeon, the massive second-in-command, who looks capable of snapping a boulder with his fingers while asking if he should silence Jun-woo. Jun-woo remains suspiciously calm, eyeing the giant with a calculated gaze as if he is hunting for a structural weak point to exploit. Naminsu tells his henchman to hold off because Junwoo is just bait for Han-jun, wearing the bored expression of a tired villain. Inzu cackles while introducing himself as the leader of the Incheon crew, puffing his chest out about a title that hardly makes him intimidating. Junwoo chuckles at this stupidity, mocking them for kidnapping a powerful CEO and triggering a disaster that will rain hell upon them. Sporting a creepy grin, he praises the blind loyalty as if he were interviewing these thugs for a job instead of being held captive. Naminsu is clearly losing his cool, ready to start snapping bones because he hates how the billionaire is laughing at his entire organization. Junwoo turns up the heat, labeling the entire Incheon squad the biggest group of losers he has seen all week, just to bait them. He reminds them of that humiliating time 2 years ago when they were crawling at Han-jun's feet, effectively torching their fragile egos. Inzu grimaces with sheer loathing, spitting out the word pathetic while reliving the nightmare of Han-jun wrecking their reputation. Junwoo keeps baiting the beast, questioning if they genuinely believe they can survive Han-jun, making Bunyeon boil over with fury. Bunyeon grips Junwoo by the collar, complexion flushed red, while roaring with a type of red enrage that screams total incompetence. Dismissing his lackey, Inzu decides to handle the pest personally, looming over Junwoo with clear and extremely unfriendly intentions. Junwoo remains glued to his seat, staring back and bothered as the massive bus towers above him like a grumpy skyscraper. Inzu notes that Junwoo possesses dangerous insights about Incheon, feeling a grudging respect even as he contemplates murder. Attempting to rewrite history, Inzu claims Han-jun bowed solo while Incheon stood tall, a delusional fairy tale to soothe his fragile ego. Junwoo chuckles at the irony, mocking the pathetic, faux brotherhood and the cheap, honor-obsessed delusions these thugs peddle. Digging into their trauma, Junwoo reveals the former leader kneeled solely to shield his crew, exposing their boss as a selfless protector. Despite his call being yanked, Junwoo keeps his cool, winning the mental duel as everyone feels the tension thick enough to slice. Reaching his limit, the hulking Banyeon prepares a lethal haymaker. Utterly fed up with the suit-wearing smartass mocking him, he throws a massive punch, threatening murder for one more syllable, seemingly sealing the fate of our bound, sassy protagonist. Junwoo offers a defiant grin and speaks again, proving he is a top-tier troll who loves flirting with an early grave. He doubles his sass with another remark, showing a level of disrespect that is frankly impressive while staring down death. Banyeon shrieks in incoherent fury while swinging wildly, having completely lost his marbles just as Junwoo calculated earlier. The frantic scout bursts inside, hollering for the bus because the main event, Park Han-jun, is currently en route. Inzu snaps his head around with intense focus, realizing the trap snapped shut and real combat is now inevitable. Junwoo wears a slug's work, knowing his role is finished and Han-jun will soon transform this building into a clinic. Mockingly, Junwoo suggests saving energy for Han-jun, acting like a combat coach while pushing his captors to the limit. The large thug quakes with rage, his expression contorted into a grotesque mask of hatred like a toddler missing nap time. He pulverizes a wooden crate in frustration, desperate to smash Junwoo but held back by Inzu, which fuels his internal meltdown. Banyeon storms away in a huff, leaving Junwoo bound to his chair, seemingly having a wonderful time in captivity. They topple Junwoo over, leaving him floored while Inzu approaches with a look of pure, unadulterated disdain in his eyes. Inzu concedes that arguing is pointless because Junwoo always has a sharp comeback ready to undermine his fragile authority. He finally admits the old Incheon boss did kneel for Han-jun, acknowledging the uncomfortable reality Junwoo forced upon him. Bending down, Inzu vows to demonstrate how much Incheon has evolved, promising a violent reckoning to restore their pride. The scene shifts to a desolate highway at night, providing a chillingly quiet lull before the impending chaotic storm. A motorcycle suddenly tears through the dark with Han-jun and So-yeon, speeding toward the warehouse like a neon comet. They weave through city traffic with reckless speed, and Han-jun looks eager to abandon the bike to start brawling. A sharp focus on Han-jun reveals his steely gaze, fueled not by fear but by pure fury toward the dunes holding his partner. So-yeon screams into the gusting air, wondering if the entire local motorcycle gang joined this parade. She spots a glowing sea of chrome hungry for their bumper. Without any warning, the asphalt turns into a lonely desert. She whispers some confusion, sensing this pursuit just got upgraded to a spooky mystery. She checks on her driver, remarking that the Siri Hush is a major vibe killer. Her internal alarm starts blaring about the suspiciously empty highway. The stork pilot extends an arm, signaling toward the upcoming horizon. He offers a calm alert regarding the obstacle, speaking with a deep mumble. So-yeon looks like she swallowed a ghost while staring ahead. She understands his concern now, realizing they are totally cooked beyond any repair. A fortress of hulking, grumpy meathead spans the entire width of the concrete. They are not moving an inch, eagerly anticipating a mechanical collision. Leading this mob is the legendary extra-large cutlet, the counterfeit leader. He appears way wider up close, definitely acting as a boss today. The hero dismounts his ride, followed closely by his nervous companion. The crowd roars for blood, signaling that Bud is to swarm him like ants. Our man remains frozen, totally chill, serving a frosty stare that should have triggered their escape instincts. He is surrounded, yet he radiates shark energy. The round leader possesses features vibrating with intense anger and popping arteries. He spent his entire evening dreaming of this extremely violent reunion. The imposter turns his back, ordering the fighter to zip it and trail behind. He boasts about skipping a murder because they exhibit classier intentions. He casts a lethal side-eye while stating the local code of strictly solo combat. It looks like the main character is entering a gauntlet. Stay tuned. The duo follows a literal mountain of a man towards some warehouses. This giant looms tall, appearing to dine on granite, making the pavement tremble. So-yeon starts flapping her gums about the bruiser's incredible size, mocking his wide frame. She mentions he is easily the loftiest specimen she encountered. She actually tests his triceps with a finger, inquiring if his vitamins were mixed with Noonan sludge. The girl lacks any survival instinct or manners. The Titan marches forward without a sound, pretending she is invisible. The protagonist trails them, focusing hard on his mission while ignoring the girl's jokes. Her cheery face decays into a pout as the realization of her social failure sets in. She grumbles to herself, baffled that her charm is failing. She rants about his grocery expenses and his struggle to find shirts that fit. The behemoth looks incredibly annoyed while she roasts his massive footwear. The monster finally cracks, delivering a venomous look. He growls for her to keep quiet, though his words sound weirdly muffled, betraying his inner nerves. So-yeon grins and plays with her locks, immune to his scary aura. She claims her inquisitiveness is natural, then loads up a really toxic question. A memory pops up of the hero towering over kneeling city thugs. She asks if this entire group folded like wet laundry a few summers back. She approaches him, whispering if his grudge stems from an old defeat. She finishes by labeling them failures, basically an invitation to get head. The camera focuses on his skull, which looks like a boiling teapot ready to whistle. The quiet is scary, thinning at a very violent tantrum. The wall of flesh rotates with death in his eyes, the speech stumbling as he asks if she is baiting him. His patience has officially expired. He stands tall above the girl, casting a shadow that hides the sun while threatening her. He is done playing nice and wants to snap ribs. The fighter glances back, sensing the imminent brawl starting to brew. He seems oddly uninterested, simply anticipating when the big lout will trip over himself. Panjun intervenes to support his partner, casually remarking that her facts are solid. He effectively douses the situation in lighter fluid with those words. She offers a sneaky look, relishing the chaos she manufactured. She trusts her bodyguard to tank whatever punishment her reckless insults bring her way today. The beast receives a dark zoom-in shot as he delivers a final warning. This fury is beyond human vocabulary, readying him for an all-out assault. He lowers his arms and squeezes his hands, producing some satisfying puffs. He has abandoned speech, opting to demonstrate exactly why he is feared locally. The brute hurls a colossal fist at Hanjun, who stands embedded with hands tucked deep in his pockets, prepping a brief seminar before the boss encounter. Hanjun returns a frigid, piercing glare, totally unimpressed by the incoming knuckles, having mentally mapped out the whole brawl before it even truly commenced. A flashback reveals the Titan is a literal super infant within a hospital nursery, sporting an abnormal physique that marked him as an oddity from day one. By his teenage growth spurt, he ballooned to 217 centimeters and 243 kilograms, appearing like a massive, misplaced mountain even in a standard doctor clinic. He notes his Dunkatsu nickname was earned through sheer mass and dominance, standing now in the shadows as an undefeated, sentient armored vehicle. The bold script announces that for the initial instance in his existence, this serves as a prologue to the massive reality check Hanjun is about to serve. Hanjun lands a pulverizing right hook square on Dunkatsu's mandible, the contact so volcanic it sprays blood and saliva, instantly muting the overstuffed giant. Dunkatsu goes airborne, this hefty frame spiraling backward through the atmosphere, thinking in total disbelief that he is actually being launched like a discarded toy. He strikes the concrete and skids across the industrial facility with a thunderous crunch, his status as a human tank getting revoked in one swing. Dunkatsu face plants into the grip resembling a toppled monolith, Panjun having not merely bested him but thoroughly shredded his oversized ego. The background dunes are losing their fragile minds, shrieking in pure shock that the heady hitter just took flight. Baffled this strongest asset got handled so easily, Panjun retreats with a measured stride, tossing a glance at the cowering thugs, finished with his casual warm-up and ready for the main attraction. The remaining henchmen watch with petrified visages as he strolls further into the depot, realizing they are currently occupying space with a certified apex predator. Panjun and Seohine plant their feet in the warehouse hard, where a pack of suited thugs waits and the ambient pressure feels ready to explode. The head suit commands his squad to prep for a strike once they draw near, tempting to mask their internal panic, though their eyes betray true terror. We get a panoramic view of the distribution center standoff where Hanjun remains fully encircled, yet he is clearly the only one driving the situation. Seohine flashes a cucky grin, mocking the ancient one-on-one combat policy, genuinely stoked to witness Hanjun dismantle their entire syndicate piece by piece. Suddenly, the voice echoes toward Park Hanjun, who looks down to find a trussed-up Youngwoo sprawled awkwardly on the floor nearby. Jungwoo squirms against his restraints, demanding Hanjun expedite his rescue because his legs are going numb, maintaining his grumpy demeanor even while kidnapped. A boot steps right beside Jungwoo's temple, and a frigid voice orders all the dunes to retreat, the room's energy instantly turning lethal and heavy. The lackeys scramble in a frenzy as Nam and Su enters the illumination, the mere aura of the commander sufficient to send them sprinting for cover. And Su casually peels off his leather jacket, revealing a ripped and scarred torso, shedding his layers for the duel he has anticipated for 2 long years. He rotates his shoulders and cracks his vertebrae, resembling an elite athlete stepping into a prize-fight arena, laser-focused on his target across the way. And Su casts a sinister, murderous look, announcing that this specific adversary is his, officially staking his claim to topple the legend himself. The 2 combatants square off amidst the warehouse, and Su remarking that it has been quite a while, acknowledging the bloody history as the tension hits peak levels. Panjun stares back with a completely vacant expression, casually asking if they have met, committing the ultimate insult by failing to recognize his opponent. We zoom in on Hanjun's visage as he inspects Insu, clearly hunting for structural vulnerabilities rather than trying to dig up ancient memories. Insu grows visibly agitated by Hanjun's total lack of recognition, asking if he remembers Nam Mansu's brother, stirring a bit of grudge from their old feud. A close shot of Insu's scarred face reveals a vein throbbing in his forehead, as he boils over with 2 full years of concentrated, petty hatred. Without a further syllable, Insu lunges ahead, the concrete floor fracturing under his pressure, moving with a blurring velocity unseen from any prior antagonist. Panjun holds his position while Insu zooms inward like a frantic mosquito, preparing to absorb the impact with zero hesitation. Insu scores a lucky scratch on the face, marking a historical moment where Hanjun actually leaks some fluids during an honest brawl. Seohine perches on the bound Jungwoo while gasping, screaming about the crimson leak and noticing that Insu isn't just some harmless clown today. The dusty henchmen erupt in celebration, hoping the leader might clinch a victory, getting totally stoked to see Hanjun finally looking humanly vulnerable. Insu resumes his brawling posture, ordering Hanjun to quit the yapping and throw hands, desperate to deliver a sweet, horizontal nap to his rifle. Insu anchors his heel and rockets forward once more, refusing to allow Hanjun a single moment to catch a breath or ponder life. He delivers a colossal direct strike, his knuckles whistling through the atmosphere, channeling every ounce of his saltiness into the single, anger swing. Hanjun's pupils dilate as the knuckle sandwich approaches, mentally admitting the velocity is impressive, facing a quickness that matches his own lightning reflexes. The camera zooms into Hanjun's iris as a grim realization hits that evading this incoming projectile is basically a physical impossibility. Trapped with nowhere to run, he must eat the impact directly on his stubborn shin. Insu connects a meaty fist against Hanjun's skull, creating a kinetic blast that rattles the rusty walls of the entire storage facility. Hanjin's cranium jerks back from the sheer momentum, representing the biggest predicament he has encountered since this whole story kicked off. Ensu retracts his hand while mentioning the embarrassment the local tough guys endured years back, battling to restore his ego and achieve a bit of vengeance. He appears completely unhinged while vowing to settle all outstanding debts with Hanjin today, having fully embraced his inner, violent psychopath mode. He swings a gigantic looping strike, his limb becoming a hazy spear, attempting to conclude the scuffle before Hanjin can find his groove. The tight shot captures dancing toes as Ensu utilizes fancy steps to keep Hanjin wobbling while showering him with a torrential downpour of blows. Ensu boots Hanjin in the ribcage with a sickening thud, leaving the hero in a world of hurt and looking rather worse for wear. Hanjin's sneakers scrape the pavement while retreating from the non-stop pressure, barely maintaining his balance as his knees start feeling like cooked noodles. Ensu dives forward for a final grapple, displaying smooth expertise and currently outclassing the local myth in ever conceivable martial arts department. Yet another smack lands, making Hanjin look increasingly like a bruised banana, while the audience screams as the hero gets thoroughly dismantled. Ensu leaps into the atmosphere for a flying knuckle bum, resembling a hungry leopard putting his whole weight into this concluding haymaker. Hanjin desperately raises his forearms as the blow arrives, spraying perspiration and ruby drops everywhere from the violent collision of meat and bone. Focus shifts to Hanjin's peepers, which momentarily reflect panic, before a terrifying change occurs as his internal monster begins its morning coffee. Ensu lashes out, but Hanjin simply drifts aside while muttering, explaining that the momentum of the scrap just performed a complete 180. Hanjin explodes with rapid-fire responses that Ensu fails to track, regaining his dominance through a clinic of absolute, surgical precision and skill. Hanjin retreats briefly to clean his lips, peering hyper-focused as if he just finished updating his internal software to exceed Ensu's frame rate. Ensu mentally panics as a realization hits that Hanjin was merely warming up, gazing at those sneakers and knowing he walked into a snare. Denkatsu wobbles in the background, grumbling that such anger is impossible to extinguish, proving the working meat shield still wants a piece of Hanjin as well. Hanjin observes the wrecked Ensu and commands him to rise, repeating the earlier taunt and joking that he has barely broken a sweat. The last image depicts Hanjin's eyes shining with scary dominance from behind his fingers, signaling that playtime is over and the city is about to learn why this chapter won't end quietly. We start with a flashback of Ensu training like a caffeinated maniac, pulverizing a punching bag until it begs for mercy. Still haunted by the memory of his city's thugs kneeling to Hanjin and swearing to never be that pathetic again. The thunderous thud echoes as Ensu lands a massive blow, focusing his entire soul on perfecting his strikes, since every connection is just another reminder of the humiliation he is trying to scrub away. The relentless rhythm of his fists against the bag tells a story, as he visualizes Hanjin, the jerk who embarrassed his entire hometown 2 years ago, standing right there in the gym. We get a zoom-in shot of his fancy footwork, showcasing the deadly precision he has cultivated, driven by the paranoid fear that even 1 second of laziness would cost him his sweet revenge. Ensu is basically a vibrating tornado of aggression as he shreds the bag, muscles bulging and sweat misting the room, transforming from a simple trainee into a fully certified human weapon. The narrator reminds us that Incheon takes intense pride in having the country's toughest fighters, so when Hanjin worked all over that pride, he basically became public enemy number 1. We glimpse the source of his PTSD, a sunset where the Incheon crew bowed to Hanjin without a fight, which is a kind of soul-crushing shame that changes a guy forever. Turns out Ensu was a total boxing prodigy back in the day, but he quit because the sport was a snooze fest with too many rules holding back his chaotic potential. He dumped his gloves like bad habits because ring boxing just did not provide the thrill he craved, since he had zero interest in chasing points for a trophy. He really wanted a world where he could push his limits to the breaking point, and despite looking like a scrawny snack next to those burly thugs, he feels absolutely zero fear. The gang boss eyes the kid with total bafflement, mocking him as a tiny junior member, having no clue that he is currently sizing up his future regional manager. The giant meathead gets right in his personal space to tell him this is not a playground, which is a massive blunder because the guy is about to receive a crash course in pain. Ensu reps a lightning-fast uppercut into the guy's jaw with a sickening crunch that makes your own teeth ache just by looking at it. The dune goes flying backward into the furniture like a discarded action figure, while Ensu does not even break a sweat after flattening a guy twice his size. Ensu flashes a wicked, predatory grin and calls the downed guy a talkative punching bag, effectively cementing his status as the scariest dude in the building. Suddenly, a dozen thugs with improvised weapons surround him, but Ensu just drops into a stance and invites them to dinner, clearly enjoying the impending chaos. Over 2 years, Ensu turned into a working disaster, dismantling 27 schools and 13 gyms while scattering 4 different gangs like confetti, proving he was not fighting but hunting. A massive caption reveals the brutal truth that he gained his strength through pure street-level warfare, as he is definitely not a boxer but a professional brawling specialist. Ensu stands alone in a grim alleyway amidst a heap of defeated bodies, his back turned to the camera as every victory brings him closer to his final target. Despite the fresh scars marring his face, his eyes are locked onto one objective, getting payback against Park Han-joon because no other achievement holds any value. Back in the current fray, Han-joon looks completely bored as if he is watching paint dry, which is exactly the level of disrespect that makes Ensu want to explode. Ensu charges ahead, howling that Han-joon is belittling his fury, and unloads a furious hail of punches while trying to provoke a reaction from the living legend. Han-joon stays on defense or perhaps just waits, prompting Ensu to taunt him by claiming that if the legend is truly this weak, then Incheon's stark shame feels even more embarrassing. Ensu has a face twisted in genuine rage while pouring every bit of his painful past into his heady strikes, essentially fighting his own bad memories alongside his opponent. The text screams that Han-joon is mucking his white-hot anger, with Ensu interpreting the guy's icy, silent demeanor as a direct insult to his life's mission. It is a chaotic blur of action lines as Ensu launches a rapid-fire barrage of strikes, desperately attempting to overwhelm Han-joon with raw speed and relentless volume. Han-joon is actually eating several blows to the face, with the visceral impact markers popping up everywhere as blood sprays, suggesting the legend might finally be in actual trouble. We shift focus to Junwoo and Seo-han watching from the sidelines, their eyes wide as the sheer intensity of the violence leaves them frozen in place. Junwoo looks legitimately rattled, asking how it is even possible for someone like Park Han-joon to be losing ground. As his faith in his top asset starts to crack, Junwoo tries to keep his cool, telling Seo-han that they just need to watch the show, betting everything on the idea that Hanjun has more tricks hidden away. Junwoo revisits his deep dive on the meathead, uncovering a bombshell that flips the script on how he actually throws hands. The massive secret drops. Park Han-jun is actually sired by an MMA gym boss, making you expect a pro, but the truth is way more chaotic. This fellow never mastered a single formal technique, preferring to spend his existence powerlifting and sprinting through thunderstorms like a fitness nut. Feast your eyes on those granite back slabs, a specimen born with terrifying power and endurance, allowing him to wreck Nexus while being technically illiterate. Junwoo gambles that once the tank cracks the code of Insu's rhythm, the game changes, yet a giant floor threatens to tank that optimistic prediction. Insu is wise to that evolution trek, refusing to let the giant install the latest updates, so he fires a supersonic kick to keep him busy. A stiff fist cracks his shin with mean intent, as the aggressor keeps swinging wildly to conclude the fight before the big guy fully rouses. Cranium rattling and juices flying, he eats another shot in a savage showdown between a surgeon's accuracy and a brick wall's stubbornness. Imagine a puffy glove thumping a heavy bag, but remember that the damage from a padded mid is just a polite suggestion of pain. Injuries dealt by naked knuckles are a whole different nightmare, since a pugilist's raw hand is basically a lethal street-legal firearm. See the impact up close to witness the wreckage, as naked knuckles are enough to shred skin while the striker seeks lasting injuries. The play-by-play confirms the fighter is weaponizing his ring experience to turn his opponent's mug into ribbons, opting for surgery via blunt force trauma. Drenched in his own crimson, the monster remains upright like a tank soaking up punishment to charge his ultimate move, the true blunt for pain. Inzu keeps the pressure high by prepping another massive hit, knowing that any hesitation will cost him the fight. Driven by adrenaline and resentment, he zeroes in on his target like a focused predator. The thunderous blow sinks deep into the midsection, sending out a visible ripple that suggests someone just set off a small explosive inside him. The giant slides backward like a derailed train car, carving trenches into the pavement with a strike that would turn a regular human into origami. Check out the windows to his soul, where the vacancy sign just turned off, replaced by a scary glow that says the boss fight has begun. The brawler rushes back, howling for the dude to stop being so annoying, clearly offended that his best stomach punch didn't result in an immediate nap. Another crack echoes as a hit connects, but he is finally moving with purpose, graduating from being a punching bag to a proactive threat. Sinking his weight and whispering about the floor, he prepares to change the momentum of the scrap. He transitions from a clean boxing match into a much dirtier and more desperate wrestling struggle. He dives in, putting the waist like a needy ex, prompting the boxer to look down and ask what kind of awkward cuddle this is. The striker starts laughing, wondering if the oaf actually believes a simple takedown works against him, assuming this is just a pathetic last-ditch effort. Jaw clenched tight, he clamps his limbs like a hydraulic press, utilizing his absurd abdominal power to anchor the brawler in place. Rubber screeches against the floor as the lead starts to lose ground, proving those stories about mutant levels of raw physical force were true. Digging in his heels, the fighter attempts to halt the human bulldozer with a pain noise, his face twisting as he refuses to become a carpet. Bafflement washes over him as he notices the opponent isn't just grabbing him, he's basically trying to garden with his body and plant him deep. Showing off some wild gymnastic skills, he braces against the ground to shove back, activating every muscle in his torso to counter the clinch. The boxer is legitimately stunned by the sheer horsepower, marveling that he is being shoved around by nothing but some ridiculous, overdeveloped core muscles. Enzo throws himself backward to ditch the grapple, realizing he is stuck in a lethal game of tag where he needs space for his boxing. Enzo scurries toward the storage racks, fearing he will get flattened against the steel beams like a pancake, losing his grip on the flow. Enzo flashes a wicked, toothy grin and admits that his boxing career was just the appetizer before the main course of pure chaos. The giant text bubble insists that boxing is merely his foundation, implying this guy has a bag of tricks far deeper than simple jabs. He drops into a wider, feral stance and claims the title of street fighting champion, effectively tossing the boxing rulebook into the trash. Enzo plants a brutal knee into Hanjun during a lunge, cleverly turning his opponent's own reckless kinetic energy into a major headache. Hanjun spins through the air like a discarded toy, his feet leaving the ground as the sheer impact nukes all his forward momentum. Hanjun slams into the concrete, bouncing like a rubber ball, marking the first time he has been properly grounded by a single hit. The ancient fan club in the back is losing their minds, chanting for Enzo to finish the job and finally reclaim the lost dignity. Enzo resets his posture with a stone-cold expression, warning his crew not to celebrate prematurely since killing a monster takes serious work. Enzo glares at the ground in fighter, noting round one is over and acknowledging that a beast like Hanjun does not go down easily. A panoramic shot captures the duo in the empty warehouse, the thick silence hanging heavy as they prepare for the next round of Valence. Hanjun rises with murderous intensity, panting as the exhaustion sets in, while Enzo casually points out the blood leaking from his eyes. Through Hanjun's blurry perspective, Enzo explains that his fading vision will ruin his balance and turn his reflexes into sluggish mush. Enzo charges back in like a madman, intent on using this window of injury to dismantle the legend piece by piece for good. The close-up reveals Enzo banking on the lawn hull, knowing that every extra second of this brawl swings the odds into his favor. Hanjun unleashes a desperate, wall-shattering punch, hoping to end the fight before his crumbling vision leaves him totally blind and helpless. Hanjun wears a mask of feral focus, his face hidden under bands while his survival instincts take the wheel for a wild ride. Junwoo and Seo Han watch with unreadable faces, realizing they are witnessing a stark scrap that could end in anyone's victory. Enzo displays his bloody, unhinged smile, mockingly asking if Hanjun even remembers his own identity amidst this glorious, messy beatdown. Hanjun blazes back with wide, hyper-focused eyes, finally syncing his internal rhythm to the frantic dance of Enzu's sudden movements. Hanjun lands a monster punch square on Enzu's jaw, sending a spray of sweat and blood flying as the legendary finish finally begins. Enzu stands stunned and bloodied as Hanjun gracefully dodges his signature attack, triggering a silent panic about being completely figured out. Hanjun ghosts past another swing, and while Enzu prays it is just dumb luck, the grim reality of his total failure sinks in. It was definitely not luck as Hanjun delivers a skull-rattling punch to Enzu, making it look like his head might actually cave in. Hanjun slams his foot into the concrete, grounding himself with enough raw power to suggest he is ready to wrap this fight. The momentum is shifted as Hanjun storks forward with relentless fury, forcing a staggering Ensu to retreat under the mounting pressure. Panjin drops a mountain-splitting overhead strike, proving he is done playing defense and is now strictly in the business of breaking bones. Then Rada hypes up Ensu's legendary speed by watching a falling leaf, serving as a reminder that this guy moves at light speed. The leaf gets sliced into ribbons before hitting the floor, yet even with that blistering pace, Ensu might not be fast enough today. Despite the blistering pace, Panjin is just built of sturdier stuff, looking like a bloody, dirt-covered hunter who never breaks his intense, predatory stare. We catch a glimpse of why Hanjin triggers such primal fear, since this absolute titan has dismantled entire squads of pros without breaking a sweat. From the sidelines, Junwoo coolly dissects the carnage, knowing that no matter how fast someone is, they cannot stop Hanjin once he unleashes his roar, overwhelming force. Do-en looks baffled, finally asking the billion-dollar question of why Hanjin let himself become a human punching bag if he was this powerful all along. Denwoo clarifies that Hanjin was not merely absorbing punishment, he was actively cataloging every single impact to master Ensu's specific fighting style. He notes that while Ensu's fluid dance between boxing styles would baffle any average fighter, it is merely a trivial riddle for someone like Hanjin. Panjin's steely gaze confirms he has finished downloading the data, having fully mapped out every limit and movement pattern that Ensu possesses. Ensu winds up and launches another punch with a thunderous roar. Even with that windy whoosh, Panjin remains unbothered, having already predicted the exact path of the strike before the fist even fully extended. A cold dread washes over Ensu as he realizes every desperate attack is just feeding more intel to Hanjin, tightening the trap around his own neck. A zoom-in view of Ensu's eye reveals nothing but sheer, unadulterated terror, confirming that he finally understands the legend has truly awakened. Panjin turns the exchange into a blurry mess of counters, leaving the supposed Speed King looking like he is stuck in slow motion compared to the beast. Ensu is spiraling, thinking about how he trained like a rabid dog for 2 years just to get crushed, pouring every scrap of his energy into these futile swings. But Hanjin has solved the puzzle already, drilling a heavy, clean shot right through the confused Street Fighter's guard to leave him totally stunned. Watching the bloody Hanjin, Ensu wonders if this is what people mean by natural talent, realizing he is tangling with a bona fide apex predator. Panjin shifts his stance with a menacing intent, preparing to showcase the massive, soul-crushing chasm that actually separates the levels of ability. A sudden, massive shockwave of pure velocity blasts from Hanjin as he stops playing around and starts moving with a speed that defies every law of physics. Panjin dips under a high jab so fluidly that he is basically a phantom, leaving Ensu to swing at empty space while his doom is already looming. Panjin closes the gap in a heartbeat, his face obscured by wild hair while he readies a finishing blow, cranking the tension to a breaking point. The lens locks onto Hanjin's piecing eyes as he navigates the brawl with surgical precision, effortlessly slicing through the remaining layers of Ensu's defense. Refusing to fold, Ensu screams with a face twisted by demonic fury, clearly ready to embrace death before he lets his shattered ego drop any further. He coils his body for one last desperate, kamikaze strike, pouring every shred of his remaining existence into this singular, final effort. Blood sprays everywhere as Ensu forces his broken body past its structural limits, practically tearing his own muscles apart to line one last pathetic hit. Ensu's internal monologue becomes a panic chant about needing more speed, as he spirals deep into a state of total, unhinged delirium. The air erupts with the wet thuds of impact as Ensu unleashes a frantic, chaotic storm of strikes that amounts to little more than a bloody mess. He bellows in frustration, clearly obsessed with the idea that he must keep hammering away until he can finally tag the guy who is ghosting him. Panjin stands motionless, radiating an eerie calm within the hurricane, while Ensu finally realizes with horror that he cannot touch his opponent even at full power. Junwoo has returned to his lounge mode, chin on his palm while he watches the closing act of the show, knowing exactly how the finale plays out. Junwoo flashes a smug grin and declares that it is lights out, confident that his hefty investment is finally about to yield a golden return. Panjin snacks Enso's arm and delivers a bone-rattling counter that finds the jaw, a perfectly timed wallop that sends spit and crimson spray flying into the air. Panjin leans close to the staggering Enso to whisper that he is dreadfully slow, which is definitely the meanest way to add insult to injury. Enso is absolutely seething with rage, his face a bruised mess of broken pride as he mutters incoherent curses while his world spins. Panjin follows up with a heady blow that nearly detaches Enso's head, creating an echo so deafening it rattles the entire warehouse. Enso drifts into a blank void as his consciousness abandons him, marking the final end of his participation in this brawl. A flashback reveals Mansu by his bike, claiming he would trade his dignity for the safety of those youngsters any day. Mansu flashes a firm grin while preaching that true strength is protecting others over preserving an ego, a concept Enso never grasped. Back in reality, Panjin towers over his crumpled rival like an unstoppable natural disaster, completely unfazed by the surrounding mess. Enso stares up from the floor with a racked visage, his glazed eyes confirming the painful reality of his crushing defeat. The scene shifts to a sunset where Mansu explains that failing to save what matters makes you the saddest soul alive. Mansu turns with a grim expression, piloting the heavy burden the Inchin gang has dragged around for 2 whole years. Panjin lands a final, theatrical punch on the already beaten Enso just to ensure the message is delivered loud and clear. The sickening crunch echoing through the room signals that the Inchin branch has finished putting up any resistance. We see the humiliating day at the beach where the Inchin gang was forced onto their knees, chaining the city of warriors. Mansu screams at his pathetic crew, desperate to ignite a spark of defiance within his spiritless and battered group of men. He warns them that submission is a collective disgrace, insisting he wants their pride restored rather than gratitude for his help. Mansu gets right in their faces, shouting for those fools to stand up because he is defending their honor, not just lives. He reaches out a hand, snarling that staying in the dirt ensures they will never recover what they have falsely lost. The gang finally rises to fight, proving that Mansu was the only visionary who truly grasped the gravity of the situation. We see Hanjin from back then as a silent victor, serving as the impenetrable wall that Inchin could never hope to scale. In the present, the final crimson spray confirms the fight is over as Hanjin reclaims his total authority over the gang, and so gasps for oxygen through a face that is now so mangled and swollen he resembles a victim of a high-speed collision. He wobbles and collapses as his stamina fails, while his panicked lackeys shriek in agony at seeing the leader fall. A hand grabs Tonkatsu by the shoulder, accompanied by a voice that is clearly not interested in a friendly conversation. A bat thuds against Tonkatsu, mocking him for just standing there like a statue while the collective dignity goes up in flames. Katsu sweats like a nervous wreck, realizing that Hyunjun is operating on a terrifying tier of power that feels supernatural. Hyunjun looms over the kneeling Insu while the warehouse light stretches shadow into that of a king collecting his due. Hyunjun looks like a complete demon with his gore-splattered face and raging eyes, peering more like a beast than a man. The tight close-up focuses on the deadened stare of Hyunjun, confirming there is absolutely no room left for any mercy. Katsu gazes at his ruined leader and wonders if Mansu is witnessing this disaster, feeling the crushing weight of the collapse. Katsu remains frozen in terror, convinced that the brutality Hyunjun displayed is beyond human, proving he's a literal monster. Internally he confesses that his pants are nearly soiled and fleeing seems like a grand idea, since Hyunjun's presence decimated his soul. Observing Insu's mangled mug makes him grasp that ditching his butt is a no-go, because bailing now would surely seal their tragic fates. That poor cutlet of a man bellows a savage, stomach-churning yelp, attempting to summon some bravado to confront the literal monster, shouting that the blame lies on him. He commands every inch in hoodlum to dogpile and delete Park Hyunjun, effectively demanding a complete bloodbath. Hyunjun glances behind, pupils expanding as he senses things going south fast, whispering a soft refusal while the angry crowd begins to surge. These dunes sprint ahead wielding heavy hardware and sticks, hoping to squash Hyunjun via group effort, leaving him trapped inside a frantic mosh pit. Out of nowhere, Insu discovers enough lung power to screech for a ceasefire, his vocal command packing enough punch to freeze the whole squad. Insu gazes skyward, his inner fire officially extinguished after concluding a 2-year quest fueled by nothing but petty grudges and bitterness. His lower limbs quit working with a meaty smack, causing him to collapse onto the pavement, having finally retired from the violence business. For the finale, Insu smashes his forehead against the dirt before Hyunjun, conceding the match while the icon remains the reigning monarch of Incheon. With the saga set to proceed, things kick off with a moody flashback regarding the town's collapse, mentioning how embarrassment consumed him previously, which preps us for a massive upcoming secret. Viewers witness that notorious beach evening where a youthful Insu stares in shock as his idolized sibling grovels before Hyunjun without throwing a single fist. This recollection stings his ego like a rusty blade, and a tight shot of clenched molars hints that a hidden perspective eluded him until now. Returning to current times, a leaking and bruised Insu stares intently at the floor beneath him, lastly embracing his predicament. He confesses that the puzzle pieces finally fit while the crushing reality of losing hits his brain. Hyunjun looms above him like a scary statue, making Insu grasp that a boss has legitimate motives for choosing to eat humble pie occasionally. Retrospective scenes depict old boss Mansu among his followers, bearing a solitary burden that others missed, opting to surrender for his team's safety rather than fear. The dramatic visual shows a pigtail striking the hard ground, labeled as the heady load, signifying that the smooth shows massive duty rather than being yellow. Currently, Insu dives deep into the apology, planting both kneecaps in front of Hyunjun, effectively mimicking his older sibling's previous act of total martyrdom. A side view captures Insu looking like a dirty mess, realizing his brother ditched his ego and ignored the haters to focus on long-term survival. The reality finally clicks, showing his brother did not cower before Hyunjun, but actually shielded the entire Inshan mob from an unwinnable slaughter. The bulky pork cutlet guy is steaming mad, jaw locked and blood vessels bulging, unable to tolerate another Inshan captain acting like a total doormat. Our beefy friend loses his cool, yelling for Insu to quit kneeling, utterly baffled why the chief is quitting while the entire squad is watching. The other Inshan members stay blankly while Katsu keeps ranting, labeling Insu a total wimp and demanding he stop behaving like a pathetic former failure. Insu stays perfectly still while kneeling, features obscured by darkness, as Katsu continues his loud attempts to verbally harass his superior into standing up. Unexpectedly, the sharp clack of fancy footwear on the road silences the noise, as a fresh challenger enters the fray and resets the entire mood. Junwoo wanders through the line of thugs looking chill, asking if they are blind because Insu is basically sacrificing his dignity to keep them alive. Junwoo towers above the prostrate Insu, eyeing the mob with disdain, laughing that they forced Hyunjun to try hard when they never stood a chance. Displaying peak confidence, Junwoo pats Insu's noggin like he's a golden retriever, insulting the whole group while the Inshan Dunes watch in pure disbelief at his Kuki's work, as he explains the cold truth that victory belongs to the last person upright, which obviously excludes the currently kneeling Insu. Big pork cutlet looks like he is on the verge of a stress-induced aneurysm, torn between his fury toward Junwoo and the fact that his leader just quit. The camera stays on Hyunjun's frozen, piercing gaze while Junwoo commands Insu to lift his face, marking the end of the brawl and the start of real business. Insu looks up, locking eyes with Hyunjun, as the apex predator and his former target finally observe each other as equals after the dust settles. Junwoo spits casually to the side, looking like he's completely bored with his current status as a kidnapped victim. Out of nowhere, Junwoo winds up and clucks Insu right in the skull, a crisp strike that leaves everyone, including Hyunjun, totally baffled. Insu wobbles, clutching his head and screaming in confusion, unable to believe the person he spent 10 minutes healed just punched him in the face. Junwoo tidies his collar with total satisfaction, explaining that the hit was payback for the abduction, and you really have to admire that level of pettiness. The tight shot of Junwoo's face shows a massive, comforted grin, as he mumbles about how good it feels to finally settle his own personal score. Junwoo treats the whole kidnapping as a minor annoyance, telling Hyunjun he thought about calling the cops but decided a punch was more satisfying. He sighs and suggests they wrap it up here, indicating he is finished with the punching, though his financial schemes are only just beginning. Junwoo stares at the battered Inshan squad and drops a truth bomb, revealing he knows they are all drowning in debt to Nexus, which fuels their violence. He mentions that every single person in the Inshan branch is buried in financial ruin, acting more like indentured servants to loan sharks than actual gangsters. A flashback to Mansu at the lighthouse proves his point, showing how the leadership took massive loans to stay afloat, digging a hole they could never escape. Junwoo looks at them with judgment, noting that the blood money they fight for is the very thing that keeps them trapped under the corporation's heel. Then he drops a financial nuke by announcing he's settled their debts, effectively buying the freedom of every person in the warehouse with one bank transfer. The entire building falls into a deep silence, while Insu looks like his spirit departed, stuttering out a shocked question as his freedom becomes real. Outside, a fleet of expensive OJ Group cars is parked, representing the corporate muscle that just destroyed a gang's leverage without throwing a single punch. Insu is still trying to wrap his brain around it, asking why a stranger would pay millions for some thugs, having never seen this kind of generous manipulation. Jungwoo explains his reasoning, stating that if he didn't pay, Nexus would keep being annoying, then asks if they really think he is just a charitable idiot. A notification appears on a mobile screen, confirming a sent message from the Technical Academy, showing Jungwoo is playing a much deeper game. Jungwoo shows the device to the stunned Inshin crew, revealing he didn't just pay their debts, he paid their tuition and is forcing them to study. He tells them to graduate, work hard, and reimburse him later, having basically scouted an entire army of fighters and turned them into his future employees. We see a shot of Enso in his normal life, working 3 delivery jobs to pay Nexus, as Jungwoo admits he knows how exhausting this struggle was. Panjun observes the scene in silence, realizing that Jungwoo's bank account is often much more terrifying than his own physical strength. Jungwoo gives a surprisingly kind smile, saying he saw the hard work and decided to help, acting as the ultimate master of corporate charity. Seo-yun starts mocking Jungwoo, laughing because his cheeks are turning crimson for acting heroic, while he tells her to scram in total embarrassment, and so is overwhelmed with feeling, his teeth clenched as he fights back tears, finally seeing a path out of the misery that crushed his family, and so performs a deep, respectful bow of thanks, but adds that he cannot live with a debt to anyone because his pride is still strong. Panjun looks on with a dark, heavy gaze, seeing the power dynamic shift and knowing that the Inshin group is no longer their enemy, and so looks Jungwoo straight in the eye, promising that he will pay back every single cent, having found a new reason to work that isn't crime. Jungwoo just brushes it all off and struts toward his limo, clearly finished with all the dramatic emotional nonsense. He keeps working without a glance, telling the squad to scram because their awkward vibe is truly painful to watch. Typical Jungwoo, playing the hero and then acting like he despises everyone he just saved. Panjun stands grounded in the courtyard as the black vehicles vanish. The Inshin war has reached its finale, and the local power structure is fundamentally shifted, and so pivots to face his gang, shouting orders with a fresh sense of authority. The crushing weight has finally vanished from his weary shoulders. Standing with his back turned, he tells them not to feel shamed. He absorbs the defeat entirely so his loyal crew can finally work away with their heads held high. A wide shot captures Enso gazing at his soldiers. He might have lost the physical brawl, but he finally recovered his dignity. Facing his entire troop, Enso bows his head to apologize for failing them. It is a rare moment of genuine vulnerability for such a hardened boss. Then Katsu is actually bawling his eyes out, letting out a pitiful wail as he washes his leader bow. The devotion in this mob is stronger than any standard contract, and so grinds his teeth while silently swearing to never let his brothers down again. He is done playing a puppet for the Nexus overlords. He drops the major bombshell. From this moment, Inshin is separating from Nexus, officially severing all ties with the National Criminal Organization. The yard erupts into wild cheers as Enso tells them to live with pride. The gang roars back in agreement, finally reclaiming the collective soul. We shift to a sunny Seoul morning, with the giant OJ group tower gleaming in the light. The chaos has ended, and a new era of growth begins. The bubble confirms our suspicions. With this, the Inshin chapter is finished, leaving only the larger organization to deal with later. Jungwoo's back in his fancy office, sipping tea and praising everyone for their work. He acts as if he didn't just survive a kidnapping and burn through a fortune. Panjun lounges on the couch, watching Seo-hyun vibrate with pure adrenaline. He wonders aloud what has gotten into her today. A close-up of her screen exposes the truth. Jungwoo wired her 40 million won for the rescue, which explains her total mental collapse. The tight frame shows Seo-hyun wearing a devilish grin. She is officially the wealthiest informant in the annals of gang conics. Seo-hyun performs a ridiculous victory dance, cheering for COO Jungwoo. She jokes that she wishes he would get kidnapped daily if it meant another massive payday. Jungwoo is fuming with his face turning beet red, telling her to watch her mouth while he's right there. Seo-hyun just giggles, too rich to care about his mood. The dust settles as Seo-hyun leans back next to Hanjun, appearing much more relaxed now that she is absolutely loaded with cash. She eyes Hanjun with a mischievous smirk, randomly noting how broad his back appears. She is definitely developing a major crush on our stoic lead. She inches closer, asking if he has plans this weekend. You can practically see the hearts in her eyes while Hanjun just stares back with a blank expression. We get a gorgeous close-up of Seo-hyun giving him a seductive, lingering gaze. She is clearly up to no good. The final panel poses the ultimate question about going shopping. Panjun looks like he would rather fight another school than visit a mall. To be continued. We return to the city on a clear day, scoping out a massive luxury shopping center. It seems like the crew is taking a break from crime for retail therapy. Seo-hyun is having the time of her life, cackling behind her hand as she observes Hanjun. She finds his fashion struggle hilarious, wondering if he might actually look cute. A shot from behind reveals that the coach he chose is truly absurd. Jungwoo stands in the background looking like he is questioning every life choice he ever made. Panjun stands still like a budget drug lord draped in a giant white fur and gold chains. Seo-hyun justifies the look by claiming bandit chic is trending, but Hanjun wishes for the floor to open up. The runway show continues as she stuffs him into a studded leather jacket and biker gloves. She calls him a raka, clearly using him as her personal human doll. Seo-hyun is doubling over with laughter while snapping photos on her phone. She demands he strike a musician pose while Hanjun just stands there, dying inside. Zooming in on that phone screen reveals Hanjun looking positively lethal, his face a portrait of sheer volcanic rage that would make Seo-hyun wish she had never been born. Jungwoo teases Hanjun about his new death metal aesthetic, warning Seo-hyun to back off before he snaps and starts throwing punches at the first person he sees. Seo-hyun finally surrenders, promising to hunt for a less offensive outfit, her focus sharpening as she combs through the racks realizing she narrowly escaped disaster. The fitting room door flies open with a sharp clatter, instantly silencing the room and thick with a palpable shift in the shop's frantic energy. Seo-hyun pivots, her face twisting into pure shock as she realizes the simple, modest choice might have actually been too effective for her own good. Hanjun emerges rocking a tailored dark button-down with rolled sleeves, looking dangerously sharp and infinitely better suited than that ridiculous fur coat nightmare. Dazed by his transformation, Seo-hyun admits he looks incredible, so Hanjun pragmatically resolves to buy the entire stock to avoid future fashion-induced headaches. While strolling through the mall, the pack of Western dudes spot Seo-hyun, and the predatory glares signal that trouble is definitely brewing on the horizon. Those creeps are whispering in English, behaving like they have never encountered a woman before, and radiating the kind of vibes that require a restraining order. Recognizing the famous Choi Seo-hyun and her massive follower count, they start evaluating her like a high-end luxury product instead of a breathing human being. The tight zoom on the leader's icy blue eye makes him look like a total shark, clearly plotting his next move with predatory intent and zero social skills. The buff blonde meathead asks his buddy if he should hit on her, prompting a skeptical reaction about her fame, but his own arrogance blinds him to reality. With a smug, repulsive smirk, he tells his friend to relax, truly believing his gym-sculpted muscles and trash-deer charm are enough to conquer anyone he chooses. Glancing toward Han-jun and Jun-woo, he insults them as tiny fish, arrogantly assuming Seo-hyun is desperate, which is a massive lapse in his judgment. The dramatic shadow close-up frames him calling Seo-hyun a toy, mocking him as the absolute worst, and we all know Han-jun is ready to humble him. The buddy looks impressed by such blatant narcissism, while the blonde jerk signals him to watch the show as he approaches the famous influencer. As Seo-hyun brows the Rex, a shadow looms over her, and a pushy voice interrupts her shopping by demanding her attention with an excuse. The blonde guy invades her personal space, suggesting they ditch the mouth for his favorite spot, proving he is entirely devoid of common decency. Seo-hyun wheels around with a look of absolute revulsion, not bothering to hide her disdain as she snaps at the weirdo for his bizarre behavior. He leans in closer with a gross grin, mocking her temper as if her obvious irritation is just a fun little game for him to win. Seo-hyun tries to click away in her heels, but he follows, claiming he likes career as if being a tourist gives him the right to harass strangers. Zooming in on Seo-hyun's tight jaw reveals she is hovering on the brink of absolute fury and ready to unleash total chaos on this clown. Crossing the line, the blonde guy grabs her arm with a rough, violent grip to stop her from leaving, which is a massive mistake. Suddenly, another hand clamps onto the bull's arm with an iron grip, and the hunter realizes he has just become the prey in record time. Seo-hyun blares at him, demanding he release her while revealing she heard every single derogatory word they spat about her earlier today. The blonde Dune freezes as Han-jun towers over him, and when Seo-hyun insults him to his face, the panic starts to visibly set in. His face flushes crimson with unbridled rage, teeth grinding because he cannot fathom being disrespected by the people he just dismissed as weak. Snapping completely, he swings a desperate, heavy fist at Han-jun's head, bellowing nonsense about his twisted plans for Seo-hyun's afternoon. Han-jun remains perfectly anchored, launching a blindingly fast counterpunch straight into the guy's face with enough force to rearrange his entire skeleton. The blonde thug staggers backward, blood spraying everywhere as his cheap necklace shatters, proving he folded like a house of cards from one strike. That golden boy gets launched into a shelf like a human missile, proving that Han-jun treats creeps with the same care as spoiled milk. His buddy loses his marbles, howling like a wounded coyote while flailing his arms at Han-jun in a pathetic display of accidental yoga. Han-jun snatches the fist midair with zero effort, making the poor sap realize he just tried to punch a mountain that eats people. Shrieks of absolute dread erupt from the coward, who starts praying for his life before the strike even makes its grand debut. Han-jun drops a tectonic foot slam that rattles every shelf, turning the scuffle into a very painful lesson about respecting personal space and basic lores. Our duo looms over the human garbage pile with zero sweat, Han-jun looking particularly dapper in his fresh threads after finishing the chores. Jun-woo strolls over, eyeing the heap of sleepy thugs and his crew with a face that says he needs a vacation. With a weary groan and a facepalm, Jun-woo mumbles the names, clearly tired of his friends turning a simple retail therapy trip into a gladiator arena. The camera pans to the tall buildings while Jun-woo offers apologies, though his associates look about as repentant as a cat after eating a canary. Dark streets glow with neon signs as we transition to the Nexus Play Zone, a fancy drinking hole where the local mobsters play hide and seek. Rowdy, tobacco-filled gambling den awaits inside, serving as the secret engine where the town's biggest stacks of cash change hands under the table. Say hello to Troy Tisu, the regional director who handles gambling and corporate cuts, specifically mentioning how they just fired the entire Incheon regional office. Staring at his hand, Tisu admits those Incheon punks were always useless, though he confesses that Jun-woo Kid actually has some massive brass balls. The fact that Jun-woo settled every single bill in Incheon shocks him, earning a bit of respect for such a wallet-busting flex on the organization. Choppers at the center erupt into frantic screams for support, labeling Han-jun the late Bruce Kim's fighting spirit because his striking velocity is purely supernatural. Han-jun keeps the party going by tossing imported dunes through vast displays, clearly using their faces as a way to vent his pent-up anger. Gripping the leader by his neck like a vengeful spirit, Han-jun ignores the tearful pleas for mercy by claiming he failed his foreign language classes. Seo-hyun relaxes on a nearby seat while munching snacks and rating the performance, but Han-jun points out that the terrified thug actually begged in perfect Korean, making the fake language barrier joke peak comedy. The store boss rushes onto the scene, peering ready to keel over once she spots her ruined inventory and the blood-stained floor tiles. She bellows about the destruction of her boutique and promises to dial the cops, giving everyone a front row seat to the ultimate customer service disaster. Seo-hyun lets out a tiny, insincere squeak of sympathy and offers a hollow apology while the manager continues to vibrate with pure, unadulterated rage. The boutique is completely trashed with shards and stains everywhere, prompting the manager to mumble about the massive invoice she plans to send for the repairs. Over at the den, a lady with chaotic knors on her fingers while gazing at the deck, knowing her whole future depends on these slips of paper. Tisu chats on his cell about their upcoming strategy to ignore Han-jun, proving he can destroy family savings while checking his notifications simultaneously. A zoom in on his wireless earbud highlights his status as a tech-savvy mobster, a man who views human suffering through the lens of a quarterly earnings report. With a wicked grin, he asks if she is ready to flip the final card, obviously getting a kick out of watching her mental health crumble in real time. Her fingers tremble like leaves in a storm while she goes for the gamble, her pulse beating so loud it probably vibrates the entire table. The boss reaches out with a perfectly still hand to reveal the outcome, his expression showing all the emotion of a wet piece of cardboard. The 10 appears, making the quiet room feel incredibly thick with tension. She completely loses her mind, clutching her scalp and wailing like a banshee because her entire world just vanished into the house's pockets. He displays a 22 to clinch another win, potentially using a deck full of surprises, while his facial muscles stay completely still. He informs the lady this is her third financial collapse, noting her debt to the firm is over 100 million, exceeding all limits. He sits back with his lips turned up, describing the match as a small game, while the stakes on the table look quite heavy. Two large suits grab her elbows firmly, as he explains the strategy for finishing assignments, which usually marks the end of civil torque. She squirms and they crep, requesting an immediate exit and mentioning that this entire scenario is unfolding at an unexpectedly high velocity. She begins yelling that she accepts the terms, having decided that the other possibilities look significantly more painful than the current plan. Fluid drips from her eyes as she agrees to previous conditions, basically trading her future self to avoid the current financial storm outside. He watches her with the focus of a scientist, appearing more interested in her functional utility than the moisture on her current face. He moves closer with his teeth showing, inquiring if she is really comfortable, while mentioning the supposedly close status as total best friends. The lady is covered in moisture and muttering her agreement, though her current posture is as stable as a house of white cards. He reaches into his gray blazer for a small rectangular object, as the atmosphere in the room gets thicker than a chunky winter stew. He slides a photo across the table, hoping she will not have regrets, as he builds a trap with her acting as the snack. She stares at the wooden surface with fingers interlocked, looking like a person asking for a pass after making a very large mistake. The final frame shows the objective, the picture of a smiling Seo Han, confirming the group found a door to the social influencer. Big Kim exerts massive effort in the clinic, the veins bulging and heavy breathing, refusing to let old injuries keep him on ground. The person in a pink coat spots him lifting excessive weights, warning him that overdoing the training is a quick trip to regression. He requests more repetitions with very vascular arms, but the trainer orders him to get off the workout gear with a stern gesture. Jun arrives at the medical center and works the car door with Kim, mentioning the surgery looks like a successful investment for his portfolio. He looks over the training progress and asks for details, while keeping his face set with a very subtle and intentional upward tilt. Kim dips his head and says thanks, promising to pay back every single coin after his legs start acting like reliable limbs again. Jun waves it away with a hand, telling him that fighting the corporation is purely optional if he is feeling too much pressure. He gazes at the carpet and whispers his thanks, noting that having an ally is a fresh experience for a former lone legend. Jun halts and turns his head with a curious noise, sensing that there are more words lurking behind the other man's quiet face. The camera focuses on his eye as his features harden, and he mentions his history with the firm exceeds a typical work arrangement. He stands firmly and says the fight is only done when he wins, stating his desire to swing as his own personal will. Jun displays a very wide grin, thinking his companion is a reliable guy, having recruited a fighter with a very durable internal motor. We see a wide shot of the tall clinic under a blue sky, as the scene transitions from healing up to strategic planning. In the city, the tall headquarters of the conglomerate rises up, serving as the spot where they plot high-level corporate power moves. Jun returns to his desk with Hanjin, sharing the update on health status, while Hanjin offers a tiny quiet sound of vague approval. Jun hits the table with a firm palm, signaling the end of small torque and readiness to push the next human chess piece. Time to clock in because the romantic vacation is dead, and our messy brawl with Nexus is finally getting spicy. Lounging on the couch, Jungwoo notes that Inchin fell for the trap perfectly, so he is currently picking the next victim within that shady crew. This boss reveals Tisu's dossier, the play's own manager acting as a personal piggy bank for Inchin while supporting the syndicate's entire money system. Jungwoo clarifies that Tisu is the main atmospheric pressure keeping Nexus afloat, porting heaps of cash from their sketchy, blood-sucking loan shark operations. With a look that could kill 1,000 plants, Jungwoo declares Tisu is the primary sacrifice, since he wants to kick the gang right in the collective wallet. Panjun stays quiet with a face as stiff as a frozen steak, prepared to be the chainsaw that chops down that financial support beam. The camera pans across the sunny high school grounds, looking innocent enough for math homework, though we know some truly sketchy business is buried there. Junwoo and Hanjun hide in a giant empty factory to grill a kid, making the hushed conversation feel like a tiny speck in a very dangerous ocean. Sporting a grin as phony as a plastic plant, Junwoo thanks the student, obviously milking the small for every bit of gossip on Tisu. The zoom-in view of the teenager's eye displays sheer horror, since he knows that betraying Nexus is a shortcut to an early grave. Shaking like a paint mixer, the kid huddles on a stool while gnawing his digits, looking like a total emotional disaster. He babbles a question about his safety while staring up with puppy eyes, finally understanding he has waded into waters filled with very hungry sharks. Junwoo slides closer with a sugary, fake smirk, whispering for the boy to relax and speak calmly, mastering the nice guy routine next to Hanjun's scary vibe. The boy gnaws his fingertips until they bleed, creating a sickening crunch that indicates his mental state is rapidly crumbling into dust. He mutters that Choi Tisu is a hellspawn creature, probably having endured some psychological trauma from that play's own administrator. Everything goes dark while someone asks if he is some famous social media celebrity, marking the start of the memory that wrecked his entire existence. The flashback reveals the kid as a handsome, polished youth who loved hearing compliments daily, mostly because his ego is larger than a hot air balloon. He flashes a cucky grin, saying his ultimate goal was mass adoration and wearing the trendiest clothes, basically worshipping his own digital reflection every morning. He describes the realm of internet celebrities as a royal court, where he desperately craved a throne next to those high-profile kings and queens of content. However, real life slapped him hard, showing a sad profile with only 100 followers, since his boring posts failed to attract even a single new fan. Sitting in a trash-filled bedroom, the loser glares at his screen and wonders why nobody likes him, embodying every failed internet star ever born. The caption highlights his misery, explaining that he almost threw in the towel and abandoned his quest for fame right then and there. All at once, his pupils dilate as he lets out a shock noise, triggered by a phone alert that would flip his world upside down. He displays a portrait of superstar influencers boasting massive followings, stunned that he was truly invited into their exclusive social circle. He saw this message as a shiny golden ladder to climb out of his pathetic life, believing these popular kids were his express ride to stardom. The fellow grabbed the rare chance of mingling with that stylish bunch, believing his hidden genius was finally getting some spotlight, while a text bubble screams his annoyance at the long wait for recognition. The mask creator orders him to go live immediately, clearly preparing him for a public debut under the guidance of some extremely suspicious characters. The show kicks off with him hanging with his idols, as weird strangers post that his handsome mug makes them wet their pants, which is just typical internet craziness. His crowd of admirers surged past 2 million, transforming him into a household name whose face was displayed across every smartphone. Alerts are flooding his screen as he earns a new follower, making him feel like a god who can conquer the world with these digits. reality hits him like a freight train, proving his peak was brief. Since ever shiny opportunity demands a payment he is soon to owe. Seasons change and his so-called allies reveal their jagged teeth, pulling him toward the neon glow of the Nexus Run bar for him. His buddies drag him to a casino, where a masked clown dares him to gamble, bragging about yesterday's gains to set the trap. Beads of sweat roll down his forehead as he stutters that wagering is too intense, yet his pathetic need for popularity keeps him rooted. The influencer drops his friendly facade instantly, his shoulders tensing up as the mask of kindness is discarded for pure hostility. He insults the kid for being a dullard, questioning his capacity for excitement just to bully him into risking his cash for validation. The chilling greeting halts the student mid-step, instantly turning the room from a lively bash into a cage full of 100 predators. He warns the boy to scram, claiming he picked the worst crowd, threatening to revoke his membership to the elite inner circle forever. Abandoned in the shadows outside the lounge, he glues his eyes to his screen, grasping that his entire relevance hinges on these snicks. Very soon after, 2 million fans vanished instantly, reverting him back to a total loser. His count sits at a measly 271, marking a public digital assassination of his social status. Azum reveals his vacant, traumatized state because no amount of content can fix his reputation after being officially banned. He even tries a tragic eating stream, shoveling noodles into his mouth for scraps of attention, desperate to recapture his fleeting glory. The lunatic clutches his scalp while screaming about needing more clout, his hunger for digital fame having shattered his fragile sanity. The tight frame on his frantic iris shows he finally understands that in this hollow ecosystem, popularity is survival and he is bankrupt. He slinks back into the bar, humbled enough to grovel at the feet of the jerks who orchestrated his social downfall. He begs the brothers to make amends, clinging to the hope that their proximity will restore his numbers, proving he is truly pathetic. The masked man flashes a wolfish grin, knowing he has successfully baited the hook and reeled the little idiot right in. He sneers while asking if his pet project is enjoying his life, fully aware the boy is drowning in a deep pit of misery. He demands to know the current balance, pivoting from just bullying him for fun to outright stripping his bank account bare. He confesses his thirst for applause outweighed the terror of falling, realizing he has spent his life crafting this personal prison. A screen note confirms his gambling addiction, showing him hunched over the felt table with his fingers trembling from pure panic. The panoramic view reveals him buried in lost poker chips and failed hands, having blown his entire stake in the playroom. He yanks at his lucks while realizing he just wagered his father's hard-earned savings, meaning he is totally and utterly cooked now. The giant graphic appears warning that a stranger has arrived, signaling the appearance of the true mastermind behind his wretched downfall. The dapper gentleman approaches the ruin of a man at the table, feigning concern to mask his role as a manipulative predator. A zoom in on the boy's teary pupil recalls the shining light among the elite, introducing the overlord who controls his hollow existence. Choi Tizu steps forward, looking like a runway model with an icy, ardent grin, clearly the apex hunter ruling this dark ocean. Back in current times, the lad labels Tisu a total monster, admitting he was gullible enough to swallow the hook when offered a loan. Shivering, the boy discloses a crushing monthly interest, realizing he is trapped in a financial nightmare that will take a decade to escape. A flashback reveals Tisu looming over the table, with the student grasping way too late that he was ensnared by design from the start. Clutching his own throat, the kid curses his foolish gambling addiction, yet his burning fury is truly aimed at the shark who rigged everything. He suffers a complete breakdown inside the warehouse, wailing that he feels his sanity slipping while staring at his own pathetic reflection. Jungwoo gently pats the boy's knee, soothingly insisting that none of this is his fault, artfully manipulating his witness through calculated kindness. Pointing out that the student was robbed of his bright future, Jungwoo paints Tisu as the ultimate villain to kindle a desire for vengeance. With an icy glare, Jungwoo dismisses the Nexus crew as pure garbage, formally initiating a ruthless crusade against their entire illicit gambling operation. Looking up with teary eyes, the lad finds rare comfort in someone who finally treats him like a human rather than a loser. Jungwoo whispers for him to be patient, promising that the wicked Tisu is about to face a very painful and overdue reckoning. The scene closes with the duo standing united for their next move, as Jungwoo gives a chilling vow to settle the score permanently. The Treksu kid storms the casino entrance, shouting for Nexus like he suddenly grew his spine after shivering like a wet dog earlier. Jungwoo waits inside looking dapper, casually inviting the kid to play a little game to kick off his scheme to wreck the branch. The close-up captures the lad's waning courage as he gulps nervously, realizing he has marched right into the jaws of the hungry beast. Remain calm. Jungwoo orders the boy to gamble like his life depends on it, leaving the kid wondering if his mentor has lost his marbles. The lad throws a fit about keeping his secret, terrified that crossing the threshold means there is no turning back from betraying his masters. Rubbing his temples at the whining, Jungwoo asks if this risky move is not the smartest way to avoid future trouble for the poor sap. Donning a serious expression, Jungwoo reveals his goal is the total eradication of the Nexus Playism rather than a measly, petty victory. Eyes wide with shock, the boy screams in disbelief as he grasps that Jungwoo is orchestrating a full-blown corporate execution of the gang branch. The blunt text card reminds the kid that this is no charity work, as Jungwoo is prepared to pay handsomely for the dangerous task ahead. Inside the casino, a shady manager demands proof of funds, while Jungwoo guarantees that Han Jun will be watching from the shadows like a hawk. As the word money echoes in his mind, the boy hears Jungwoo promise to provide every single stack required for this high-stakes venture. Digging into a black bag, the kid reveals enough 50,001 bills to make anyone dizzy, turning the table into a mountain of paper. Bolstered by the cash, the lad demands chips and eagerly promises Jungwoo half of the massive fortune he plans to win back today. The dealer stares at the mountain of cash in a daze, having never witnessed a schoolboy flashing such ridiculous amounts of currency before. Sporting a greasy, predatory grin, the dealer mentally salivates over the sucker, already calculating exactly how he plans to swindle the kid. Looking confused, the lad scratches his head and wonders how gambling will possibly dismantle Nexus, missing the nuance of Jungwoo's complex trap. With a sharp, predatory smirk, Jungwoo explains that they intend to bleed the organization dry by treating the gang like a buffet. Looking absolutely wicked, Jungwoo declares he has a special way to crush this game, signaling that Nexus is in for a world of pain. The wide shot reveals the high-stakes table where Jungwoo notes that a crooked dealer rarely triumphs when faced with a truly cunning player. As the smooth torque drones on, we notice the dealer practicing his sleight of hand, though Jungwoo is no fool and knows exactly what kind of den he has wandered into. A bold caption drops the bomb, revealing this joint is a rigged slaughterhouse for savings rather than a legitimate place to test your luck. The lad sits huddled behind a mountain of plastic discs while the dealer preps the next drawer, creating enough tension in the room to cut with a dull spoon. We zoom in on the dealer, whose jacket sleeve is hiding a rather suspicious accessory. The 10 is stashed right there in his cuff, proving he is a cheater obsessed with ensuring the house keeps its grubby hands on every cent. The kid realizes he is being played for a sucker, grumbling under his breath while watching the dealer pull those amateur and greasy maneuvers. Shaking like a leaf, the boy asks why Jungwoo tossed him into this crooked pit, terrified that the hard-earned cash is vanishing into the bus's pockets. Jungwoo narrows his gaze and explains they are going to weaponize that stunt, as he has no intention of following house rules when he can simply rewrite them. Taking a long, shaky breath to find some courage, the kid prepares to bet his entire existence on Jungwoo's wild and chaotic gamble. In a moment of pure insanity, the boy shoves his pile of chips forward and bellows that he is all in, trusting the master plan blindly. The massive sign reminds us that gambling has its own dark code, and in this ruthless corner of the world, that code is written in crimson ink. The dealer sneers with malicious glee, mocking the kid's bravado while anticipating an easy payday from another poor sap who does not know any better. Jungwoo whispers that once a dealer is caught red-handed pulling a stunt, the house rules conveniently flip to favor the person who did the catching. Without warning, the entire glass gambling table explodes into a million glittering shards, and the fun game abruptly turns into an all-out street brawl. The dealer tries to maintain his cool, demanding silence while acting as if this minor carnage is just a standard introduction to the high-stakes session. The narration hammer drops, knowing that being exposed means total bankruptcy for the dealer, and Han-jun is the guy holding the wrecking ball. Like a vengeance-fueled demon dropping from the rafters, Park Han-jun descends from above, looking ready to collect some very painful debts. Han-jun delivers a brutal vertical kick straight to the dealer's jaw, sending a delightful spray of blood and spit flying across the chaotic room. The dealer goes airborne before crashing into the floor like a sack of damp laundry, marking the official conclusion of this rigged card game. As a crook lies groaning on the towel, this hidden card slides out to expose his pathetic cheating antics to the entire gawking audience. The kid cackles like a lunatic, reminding the dunes that the rules are clear. Find a cheater and the other guy walks away with the whole bounty. With a grin wide enough to swallow the room, the lad reaches for the loot, feeling the intoxicating and slightly dangerous rush of sudden wealth. The narrator points out the obvious truth that these thugs will never let them work out with the cash, as the card game was merely the appetizer. A wall of angry suits surrounds them, led by a thug who demands to know why they are trashing his lovey with such aggressive behavior. Han-jun stares back with eyes cold enough to freeze hell, looking every bit the lethal powerhouse who is about to handle the situation personally. Han-jun turns into a blurred whirlwind of violence, tossing those expensive suits around the room like they were nothing more than discarded trash. The floor becomes a soundtrack of screams as Han-jun slams another dune into the floor, proving that even in a suit, he is a working disaster. The text message remains chillingly brief, suggesting that if the house refuses to play fair, you simply force them to play by your violent rules. Grabbing the dealer by his greasy hair, Han-jun drags him back to the wreckage to ensure the game continues with absolute and forced honesty. Standing tall over the remains of the table, Han-jun assumes the role of the new dealer, making it clear that any further refusals will end very badly. Han-jun orders the trembling croupier to spin the wheel while hunting for the next trick to expose the crooked operation. Han-jun slams his hand under the table, making the dealer howl in pain as he systematically dismantles every cheater present. Han-jun has pulverized the red roulette ball, leaving sparks and debris cascading through his fingers like a broken light show. Han-jun stares down the manager, demanding to know if they were pulling a fast one, effectively bankrupting the house edge. The dealer is weeping with hands raised, finally realizing that even a battalion of dunes cannot shield him from Han-jun. Han-jun lands a jaw-shattering blow that ends the match, proving he's the one holding all the cards now. Over at the warehouse, Jungwoo is howling with laughter, finding the complete financial wreckage of the arcade quite amusing. Jungwoo grins, noting the violence was necessary since they were merely playing by the corrupt rules of these swindlers. We transition to a night shot of the local Nexus branch, the secret lair where the money-obsessed boss hides. Tisu lounges in his lavish office looking sour as an underling whispers news about his empire falling like cheap dominoes. He learns 3 branches went bust today, begrudgingly respecting how efficiently Jungwoo is dismantling his entire illicit operation. Tisu glares at the door, remarking that he is dying to meet the genius who is busy dismantling his livelihood. Actually, he already has company, as Soyeon sits calmly across from him looking as stylish and composed as ever. Soyeon demands to know if she was summoned just to deal with this pathetic dead woman cowering in the background. Tisu plays the suave gentleman, apologizing for the fuss while promising to offer her a very lucrative business proposition. A close-up of Soyeon's eye reveals her blatant boredom, showing she has zero interest in his tired corporate theatrics. Tisu cuts to the chase, demanding she betray Oh Jungwoo's plan, foolishly hoping a bribe will grant him victory. Tisu holds up 3 fingers, offering triple her current pay, clearly blinded by the arrogance of thinking money solves everything. Soyeon beams with naked greed, shrieking in delight so loudly you can almost hear a digital cash register ringing. She demands the transfer immediately so she can spill the beans, confirming she is the most charming mercenary around. Tisu chuckles, amused by her mercenary spirit and convinced he has finally identified the crack in Jungwoo's armor. His expression curdles into a mincing sneer, warning her that lying will have consequences she will surely regret later. He hints at execution, while his 2 professional dunes loom behind him like silent, lethal statues of pure muscle. We are introduced to Charlie, a bald guy with a goatee who looks like he has forgotten how emotions work. Then there's Rodriguez, a granite-jawed brute who looks like he worked straight out of a low-budget action flick. Soyeon remains completely unbothered, checking her phone to confirm the payment while the debtor trembles in pure horror. Soyeon smirks, teasing him about their next move as if she were about to disclose top-secret government intel. Suddenly, Soyeon starts a countdown from 10, leaving Tisu staring at her like she has completely lost her marbles. The countdown rolls on as Tisu grows visibly irritated, demanding to know exactly what she thinks she is doing. With 3 seconds left, the atmosphere in the room grows heavy and sharp, nearing an absolute point of collapse. One strike lands from Seo Han, leaving Tisu bug-eyed like a goldfish, while headlines scream that Han-jun is busy redecorating Pleasant Central with his fists. Those giant office entrance portals basically decide to quit their jobs, flying away because Han-jun knocked with a level of force usually reserved for demolition crews. Tisu pops up like toast, wearing a look of pure confusion while his bodyguards pretend they aren't terrified, finally grasping that he got played like a cheap kazoo. The supposedly top-tier security dudes are now part of the hallway carpet, taking an unscheduled nap after a scuffle that barely outlasted a hearty sneeze. One lonely sneaker makes a dramatic entrance over a snoozing guard, signaling that the neighborhood predator has officially walked into the chat to handle business. Pine June moseys through the debris clouds with a work that says your life insurance is about to expire, peering like a collector here for some very overdue payments. We get a big screen look at the main guy's gaze, which is about as warm as a freezer, as he corners the head honcho of the facility. Tisu is producing enough moisture to fill a swimming pool while whispering the hero's name, seeing that the previous timer was actually a guest announcement. The Trek-uniformed youngster wanders in right behind the muscle, shouting at the corporation with the confidence of someone who just hired an invincible older brother. The small fry shouts for them to start the mash. Meanwhile, Hanjin prepares to uninstall everyone's software, because this round is only just loading up for round 2. The Nexus corporate base gleams under city lights like a fancy disco spot, but internally it is basically a fancy waste disposal site where the biggest local creeps gather. Deep in the gambling dens, things get awkward as Park Hanjin faces a sea of muscle by himself, projecting a vibe so spicy that the air conditioning starts to fail. Security dudes shout for backup while running ahead like starving mutts toward a stake, betting on the meth when they should have probably checked the health insurance first. A zoom-in view of Hanjin reveals an eye that is purely business, indicating he has already figured out the quickest way to disassemble every man wearing a tie. A pair of sentries run forward with faces only a mother could love, getting way too close, though our man is still keeping his arms comfortably parked. Moving faster than a decent signal, Panjin throws a foot so hard it evicts Dune's footwear, while the victim turns into human Argami from the physical awakening. Panjin becomes a human blender in the middle of the hall, limbs moving so quick it looks like he has 10 of them, while teeth decide to relocate elsewhere. Our main man is chill in the middle of chaos as a dude makes a rapid acquaintance with the wall, while nearby Tisu watches his private army vanish. Tisu stares at the sleeping pile of employees nearby, feeling his ego disappear faster than a paycheck, while drops of panic form as he discovers his castle's floors. Inside Tisu's brain it is pure screaming as he looks for an exit, realizing the monster he thought he could handle is currently turning the place very quiet. Panjin boots a guy in tan clothing straight to the clouds, making him exhale all his secrets at once, leaving Tisu to observe the consequences of his actions. Tisu is basically a vibrator on high settings now, muffling his gasp as he attempts to track the combat, suddenly aware that his own turn is coming soon. Panjin towers over the whimpering chief with a face that could freeze boiling water, while the story tells us that trying to stop him is entirely useless. The script confirms once again that Tisu's wallet and influence mean squat against a natural disaster in sneakers, as the feline finally pushes the rodent into the corner. Panjin throws a fist that literally hurts the atmosphere, creating a wave of brightness and dust, showing that he is not just fighting people, but everything nearby. Tisu takes a high-velocity flight across the room into his fancy desks, proving that the big shot is now nothing more than a stuffed toy in a blender. Tisu holds his leaking mug together while gasping for a little oxygen, seeing his master strategy get deleted from history by just two very aggressive, bare knuckles. Frazzled and falling apart, Tisu howls for his ultimate insurance policies, yelling for the duo known as Charlie and Rodriguez to come and rescue his miserable behind. Two human refrigerators and distance attire arrive, and the chrome-domed one casually asks if murder is on the menu, making it clear they are not here for games. Tisu wears a grouse, red-stained grin from the carpet, panting for them to handle the trash however they want, giving his full legal blessing to end this. A guard yanks his blazer off, exposing limbs covered in old battle marks, while they shed outer layers to get ready for a hardcore round of wrestling. The massive twins stand still, their cotton shirts looking quite small for their chests, as Charlie gives the go-ahead to try and mash Hanjin. Panjin waits in the middle, surrounded by pairs of thick arms, looking like the most lethal item in the place despite being at a height disadvantage. We see a close view of Hanjin whose shadow covers his face, showing steady pupils as he waits for a specific moment to finish the fight. Tisu holds his head with both hands while moving quickly towards the hallway, muttering something about the rear fire escape while his feet prepare to move. A frame shows Tisu's shiny leather footwear as he starts a very slow and quiet work away, sliding toward the exit while his helpers keep working. Tisu moves his legs at a high velocity, his soles making a rhythmic tapping noise on the floor as he officially leaves his assigned defensive position. He moves his legs faster towards the exit, deciding that long periods of thinking are not useful when currently being followed by a very fast athlete. Tisu takes a quick peek over his shoulder at the big shadows fighting Hanjin, noticing they look stout but it still makes his heart jump quite fast. Panjin acts like a speedster, jumping over the wooden slab of the tavern to gain high ground, using the furniture while the heavy guys give chase. Charlie and Rodriguez hang over the flat wooden surface, scanning the dim corners, thinking they have trapped him when Hanjin is actually leading the dance. Without warning, Panjin delivers a very fast blow from the side, moving at a speed that the two large individuals simply fail to register in time. Panjin holds the back of both Charlie and Rodriguez's necks, basically treating the massive guys as if they were groceries he was carrying to the car. Panjin drives their faces into the floor with a very loud thump, leaving the two top guards sleeping on the carpet in a horizontal position. Elsewhere, Tisu is still jogging through the hallways while speaking his own full name out loud, trying to maintain his confidence even as he flees nearby events. Tisu tightens his mouth, reminding his brain that he achieved his goals through alternative methods rather than being handy with his knuckles or his fists. He succeeded not through brawling, but by managing funds and using helpers, shown by scenes of him standing over rivals while using his wallet as leverage. Tisu heads out into the street, thinking the common social structure will eventually stop Panjin, while he plans his next few sneaky moves on the pavement. Inside, Panjin concludes the business with two audible cracks, ensuring that Tisu's reach won't be bothering anyone for a very significant amount of time from now. A wide view displays Hanjin amongst the ruined furniture inside the main office, standing alone while the entire room feels very quiet and very empty. Ziohan returns to the site, tapping on her phone screen, casually wondering if the leader bolted while she demonstrates a total lack of any facial reaction. Panjin shifts his head toward the hallway, his sight remaining quite fixed on the distance, as if aware that the current pursuit sequence is not finished. We observe Hanjin's scuffed but focused visage, as he maintains a physical stance that suggests he will follow Tisu across many different map coordinates. The picture changes to a nice view of the central skyscraper during the morning, showing how the business side of the conflict is still quite active. Junwoo produces a laugh in his personal space, calling Tisu a small rodent, finding the whole getaway hilarious while he compliments Hanjin for his success. Junwoo adjusts the knot on his neckwear, stating that his search team will locate Tisu's position before the coffee on his desk gets cold. Junwoo looks over the town with a focused stare, muttering that the visible patterns of his opponent are now making a lot more logical sense. Junwoo refers to Tisu as a clever little animal who overthinks, suspecting the man is currently checking for shortcuts out of his current complex situation. Back at the main office tower, Junwoo remains certain that his fiscal and statutory tactics will eventually force the target out from his hiding spot. A lower-income apartment complex is shown where Tisu is currently sitting in a small room, which is a major downgrade from his luxury office. Tisu is sipping from his cup, his eyebrows lowered in an intense angle while he invites nearby individuals to cease vocal activity, appearing slightly tense. Conversations with a keyboard enthusiast follow, as Tisu admits his muscles aren't quite ready for Hanjun, desperately seeking a digital shortcut to victory. He curves his mouth upward behind his glass, suggesting a lazy path forward, seemingly ready to embrace another round of less than ethical business adventures. The electronic operator inquires about completed tasks while handling multiple luminous monitors, serving as the hidden technological support for Tisu's grand plans. Turning his chair with a broad horizontal lip movement, the technician predicts Hanjin's fall, aiming an online campaign meant to lower his social credit score. Taesu displays a similar to the expression, having located a virtual combat zone where fists are useless against servers and bandwidth. The decisive key press initiates the sequence, officially launching an internet-wide search party for the guy everyone seems to dislike today. Leaning back, Taesu observes the vibrant blue luminescence from the screens hitting his retinas, waiting for the electronic signals to show ahead. A massive graphic pops up offering 2 billion for the target, showing how Taesu is crowdsourcing the removal of his primary headache. He explains that beyond the public arcade fame, the regional location was secretly generating large amounts of capital for much darker projects. Revenue flows from an unapproved internet gaming site, where digital spinning symbols help keep the books suspiciously high for several years running. Mobile images show a massive online group of nearly 90,000 individuals, essentially a large army of potential participants at Tisu's disposal. Tisu reveals a high-value offer placed on Hanjun, turning the main character into the most expensive target for every city dweller. Near some park trees, 2 younger males view the notice, laughing about the billions of one mentioned while looking incredibly focused on the currency. Another person stares at his glowing display, eyes widening significantly as potential wealth could change anyone's career path from bystander to predator. A man with a top knot finds the situation amusing, noting the danger involved but suggesting the payout covers the collective future hospital receipts quite nicely. Knowing fear keeps most at bay, Taesu bets that a literal mountain of cash can convince anyone to set aside the self-preservation hardware. Tisu pulls his lips apart in a satisfied gesture, effectively turning the metropolitan landscape into an open pursuit for his private entertainment. The digital menu shows payouts for broken parts, essentially turning human fragility into a high earning points accumulation system for local participants. A large youth in a school environment sees the notification and heads for the door, deciding the curriculum is less lucrative than bounty hunting. Tisu mentions how a solitary successful effort brings extreme fortune, specifically targeting those who lack substantial bank accounts and high school demographics. Friends encourage secrecy while ditching the lectures, as the entire academic population prepares for a massive search for the wealthy reward. Close to a female's face, Tisu assumes that Hanjun is completely oblivious to the intricate network currently tightening around his position. Within shadows, a man in a brimmed hat tracks the target, while narrators hint at unidentified masses preparing for a high-value physical confrontation. With a very wide display of teeth, Tisu looks forward to his goals, seemingly ready to celebrate a victory he hasn't quite achieved yet. He believes silence is golden until Hanjun meets his end, pupils expanding as he watches the clock move toward zero. Timers decrease on the display, marking the onset of the hunt where the whole urban populace aligns against the main fellow. Hanjun enters a marketplace alone, working toward dense throngs of people while numerous individuals keep their gaze firmly fixed on him. He moves past a schoolgirl in uniform, maintaining a regular pace on a street that looks identical to any other Tuesday afternoon commute. Viewed from the side, the man keeps his features flat and unmoving, even as the collective focus of the neighborhood starts to intensify. The schoolgirl halts Hanjun, mistakenly calling out a different name before offering a clumsy excuse for her supposed error, nailing the innocent student act. She bows in a show of false humility, but Hanjun just observes her with suspicion, sensing her pathetic facade does not quite add up. A zoom shot captures her mouth twisting into a jacket, nightmare grin, while she murmurs something and completely abandons her harmless character. Whipping out a concealed blade, she lunges forward, shrieking about claiming her prize, marking the brutal start of this 2 billion won hunt. Hanjun attempts a quick escape, yet he is being tailed by a persistent schoolgirl whose heavy footsteps suggest she has zero interest in an autograph. His eyes narrow in a sharp close-up, sensing the approach of someone else without even turning, proving his spatial awareness is honestly supernatural. Lightning fast, Hanjun pivots and snags her wrist mid-strike, revealing a hidden knife tucked away in her uniform, quite the edgy accessory choice. Folding her arm effortlessly, he sighs at her ineptitude, noting she lacks nexus training, while she screams about lost cash and he looks subtly bored. While he keeps her restrained, the backer creeps up swinging a lead pipe, and the word money appears, signaling this is definitely a coordinated ambush. The backer swings with everything, yelling about snacking those 50,000 won, as a wave of greedy bystanders decides to dive into the carnage. We get an intense frame focusing on Hanjun's eye as the heavy pipe whistles dangerously through the stagnant afternoon air. He calculates the exact trajectory in his head without even breaking a bead of sweat. Casually parrying the pipe with his forearm, Hanjun maintains his grip on the girl, proving he can juggle 2 amateur assassins like a total legend. The schoolgirl stares at the blunt end of the weapon, eyes wide with genuine panic, realizing she has wandered into a lethal combat zone. Hanjun delivers a crushing blow that sends the biker reeling, creating an explosion of spit and debris from the sheer force of his impact. The attacker flops onto the asphalt like a sack of damp laundry, while while Hanjun makes it clear he is the apex predator in this miserable equation. Turning a frosty blade toward the quivering girl, Panjun demands a brief explanation. Tired of these games and curious why the city wants his head, she produces her smartphone to show a digital bounty listing, proving Hanjun has become the star attraction on a massive high-stakes gambling site. Stammering an apology, she points to his face plastered across the site with massive rewards for his capture, basically showing him his own death warrant. Panjun studies the screen, repeating the figures, processing the grim reality that his head is worth enough to turn neighbors into cold-blooded killers. The truth hits him like a brick. It is Choi Tisu pulling the strings, orchestrating this twisted game through the local Playsum boss. Two more opportunistic goons spot him from a stairwell, howling like they just hit the lottery jackpot once they realize it is Park Hanjun, an apron-clad woman and a suited man charged with kitchen tools, treating Hanjun like a human pinata stuffed with stacks of cold hard cash. Watching the mob descend, Panjun observes how quickly average civilians transform into rabid wolves when the scent of easy money enters the air. Deep in his lair, Choi Tisu watches the chaos across a wall of screens, howling with laughter at every failed attempt on Hanjun's life. The bespectacled technician notes the sheer number of people losing their minds over the payout, looking slightly anxious about the mounting costs involved. Tisu just smirks, waving off the concerns, convinced that the delightful anarchy is well worth the investment despite the financial risks. Tisu asks his subordinate if he understands the true appeal of his gambling empire, preparing to deliver some dark, villainous wisdom. A tight shot of Tisu's lips shows him lecturing, looking every bit the maestro of human misery who has mastered the craft of exploitation. He claims gambling turns desperate losers into loyal hounds, systematically stripping away their dignity until they will do anything for a payout. Visualize offering some big cheese 2 billion big ones to terminate a target, and we spot a fellow with a moving skin looking completely stiff. He mentions that some rich guy in fancy clothes would find such a chore utterly revolting, because murder cash is essentially a slap in the jaw. But for those with empty pockets from the casino, the face looks quite intense, as he claims those massive bundles of cash are a grand blessing. We see a view of a dirty soul heading the grimy workway, and the strategy works as groups of people in hoodies surround the main fellow. The words on the monitor show a rough reality, showing cash is the only priority, and this target is not seen as a guy, just a prize. A massive collection of folks with home tools and steel items runs forward, losing all boundaries because of the wealth promised to them by the boss. The speaker mentions they have lost their focus, and we see the hero forced to hit back at groups that usually lie next door to him. The guess made by the rich villain is happening with lots of force right now, and these folks look like loyal pets following every single order. The hero is a spinning blur, landing a solid fist on a fellow in a jacket, trying to keep it light while more people keep rushing in. Check the look on one guy, who shows wide eyes and red marks on his skin while baring his teeth, showing how the villain controls them. The hero is suddenly ducked from the back, as even a tall guy like him finds it hard when 10 people grab him at the same time. The main guy looks down with wide eyes as a small toddler with a pointy tool joins in, showing exactly how deep the issues go here. The tiny kid pokes his den in while another swings a heavy tube, and our hero is genuinely stuck in a bit of a tight squeeze right now. He looks down with a moving brow and some serious doubt, finding it hard to believe that young children are being tossed into this cruel activity. A bright white vehicle suddenly smashes through a brick wall into the tiny street, and everyone stands still because they did not expect a car. The auto is jammed in the narrow space and people inside are barking at one another, complaining the road is tiny, which is quite the hilarious vibe. Fellow with a tie round his forehead and a sharp edge pops out of the roof, looking ready to cut the line for the prize money. This guy is hooting loudly, claiming that he has finally arrived on the scene, and it looks like his light bulb is totally burned out upstairs. Not skipping a single beat, he leaps through the air to grab a big square crate, using basic items to handle the newest person in his way. He crashes a heavy bucks directly onto the guy's skull while he is sticking out, so that dude is definitely missing his chance at the billions. Out of nowhere, a high-pitched sound rings through the brick street, with the guy gadget vibrating in his pocket during the middle of the large fight. It is a high-rolling contact on the speaker asking if things are okay, checking his investment while our guy is busy knocking blocks off every person nearby. The suit explains he knows the deal and has already sent some muscles over to help, while the guy keeps blocking groups of people in sweatshirts. Our hero holds the gadget close with one hand while basically flatlining a dude with the other, telling the boss he can clean this up alone. He tells his buddy to just locate the main bad guy instead, suggesting he handles the crowd himself while standing there looking calm amidst them up. The boss is in his big room, holding his phone with a tight drawer, before simply ending the call to show he understands the hero strategy. There is a focus on his chin as he releases a giant breath, knowing the guy is pushing hard but realizing he is the sole survivor. The guy in a fancy suit bends his back toward the master, saying they are finally placing their own items down to stop the villain dame. The master looks ready for action, saying they will use the crew now, and the fancy office battle is about to get much more violent physically. Our guy keeps up his path of destruction, the echoes of hitting targets proving he is clearing the crowd, acting as a sole guard against them. A dude yanks Hanjun's sleeve, pleading for a fake hit to fund his kid's medical bills, clearly hoping to scam some bounty cash. Hanjun finds the act pathetic, planting a swift boot onto the guy's mug since he has zero patience for desperate con artists. Vaulting off a wall like a Parker master, Hanjun leaves his pursuers scrambling, while one Dune pathetically orders everyone to jump after him, landing a walloping strike that rings through the alley. Hanjun leaves it there cowling in shock, wondering what kind of demon he just fought. Soaring overhead with grace, Hanjun makes these bumbling street brawlers look like they are running through thick molasses in slow motion. Dash speed at max capacity, Hanjun pulls ahead as some loudmouth in the pack barks orders to prioritize the payday over the pride. Dodging a flying lead pike by a mere hair, Hanjun dances through the onslaught as if he choreographed the whole chaotic mess himself, racing deeper into the industrial maze. He hunts for an exit, his own steady heartbeat masking the silence of this gloomy, abandoned zone. It's getting to a sudden stop. Hanjun finds a dapper-suited man waiting, signaling that he has stumbled into a far more elite ambush. The stranger calmly reports his arrival over the radio, displaying a terrifying level of composure that makes the previous goons look like toddlers. Glancing back with a sharp intake of breath, Hanjun understands that the professional leagues have finally arrived to ruin his evening. A zoom on his pupil reveals the sinister truth as a voice taunts his frantic escape, signaling that the predators have finished playing with food. Pemmed in by a legion of sharp-dressed thugs, the bus flashes a wicked smirk, inviting Han-jun to quit sprinting and join the fun. Scanning the dreary warehouse, Han-jun pieces together that Tisu weaponized those civilians to shepherd him right into this inescapable seal trap. He grumbles about these dunes being Nexus operatives, knowing full well he has traded desperate paupers for a much deadlier grade of trouble. Peering through his fringe, Han-jun projects a shadow-drenched aura of pure menace, dropping the facade of a man who plays by the rules. Entering a lethal stance, he greets the Nexus crew with a dry remark, though these boys should have definitely called in sick today. To be continued.